Chapter 26. Huff, huff, huff. Kneeling on one leg, I supported myself with my sword, which was stabbed into the ground, and gasped for breath. Click, keek. Before I could catch my breath, a goblin tried to sneak up from behind me. Fortunately, I was still alert and dealt with it in one swift movement. And here I was telling myself to keep my arrogance in check. Holding the left side of my stomach, I felt my whole body become dizzy from overexertion. Looking at my surroundings, the area was littered with corpses. My previously clean clothes were now drenched in green blood. For the past hour, I had been fighting more than 20 goblins. At first, I thought dealing with 20 goblins wouldn't pose a problem with my current abilities. However, I had severely overestimated my capabilities and underestimated the goblins. Just because goblins were weak didn't mean they were truly helpless. Maybe in a one-on-one they were easy, but that changed when more than 20 came at me at the same time. It also had to be noted that my rank was still G+. I was inside an F-ranked dungeon, meaning every monster I fought had higher stats than me. If it weren't for the fact that I practiced the keiki style, I would never have been able to make it this far. Although stats were important, they weren't everything. Stats were only a mild representation of one's ability. If someone with high stats fought a highly skilled warrior with lower stats, but better battle awareness, the skilled warrior could still win. It was like fighting a boss in a game. The boss always had better stats than the main character, yet the hero could still beat them. As long as you adopt the right strategy, you can win regardless of your stats. Well, given that the disparity in stats was not too extreme, if the boss's stats were much higher than your character's, you might as well kiss your game goodbye. On the off chance that the boss was stronger, but the difference wasn't that big, you could do several things to beat it. For example, you could hit a monster in its weak spot. By hitting their weak spot, the monsters would sustain far more damage compared to a regular strike. In a goblin's case, their weak spot was located right on their forehead, between their brows. Because my sword art was extremely fast, I was able to swiftly deal with the goblins with one quick stab. It may sound easy, but it really wasn't. I had to fully concentrate each time, as a slight miss could cause me to lose my rhythm. Moreover, because there were so many coming at me at once, I had to kite them for an hour before I could finally kill them all. It was only after I dealt with all the goblins that I felt pathetic for telling myself not to become arrogant. Had there been one or two more goblins, I might have died. Maybe not died, but I would have at least been severely injured. If we look at this on a positive note, I was almost halfway toward my goal of collecting 50,000 U. Because the keiki style focused on a singular swift movement at unimaginable speeds, the corpses around me were in pristine condition. That meant I could sell them for more money. Tapping my bracelet once, I grabbed a goblin and placed it on top of the device. Sham. Right after placing the goblin on the bracelet, it disappeared. Great stuff. For the next 10 minutes, I placed all the goblins I killed inside the bracelet. Phew, 21 goblins, huh? If each goblin went for 1,000 U, I had accumulated a total of 21,000 U. That was if we excluded the 11% clause, which would be around 2,310 U. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I tapped my bracelet twice, and a water bottle suddenly appeared. Dimensional storages are sure handy, heh. By tapping the bracelet once, I could put anything inside as long as it didn't exceed the capacity. By tapping twice, I could retrieve whatever I stored, as long as I thought of the item. Truly convenient. Taking the bottle, I took big gulps. All that exercise had made me extremely thirsty. After drinking the water, I took out a stamina recovery potion and drank it. Soon after finishing the potion, I felt a rush of energy enter my body, making my fatigued expression improve. I used 3 stamina recovery potions during my fight with the goblins, yet I was completely drained by the end of the fight. Standing up, I decided to stop looking for goblins for a while. Since I didn't think I was ready to face another horde, and hunting single goblins was a waste of time, I decided to look for boss monsters. If goblins were considered weak opponents, boss monsters, which were much stronger than regular dungeon monsters, were formidable for those of the same rank. Not only did they have much more health, but each also had strength that neared the next rank. If you were in a G rank dungeon, a boss monster's strength would be around G+, or near F rank, making them extremely tough. Wait, why deal with a boss monster that was stronger than a horde of goblins? It was simple, really. When fighting the horde, I had to repeatedly aim for weak spots while kiting, and because I was attacked from all sides, I barely had time to breathe. It was like doing HIIT cardio for an hour straight. With boss monsters, although they were stronger, I would have more room to breathe. Depending on the boss, fighting them might be easier than fighting a horde of goblins. Boss monsters were all different. Some were slow, some were extremely fast, some were tanky, and some were super strong. Depending on which one I faced, the difficulty would vary. For example, if I faced a strong boss with limited mobility, my sword art would overwhelm it with speed. However, if I faced a similarly fast boss monster, things would become troublesome. The difficulty depended on how well I could counter the boss's flaws. Each F-rank dungeon had around 25 bosses. Although I didn't know the exact location of each, with my knowledge as the author, I could get a basic idea of where they were. Each dungeon followed a specific set of rules which I had set up. Looking back, I think I may have overcomplicated them a bit. A dungeon followed a law of conservation of energy. Once created, its energy capacity was permanent. If the balance within the dungeon increased, it would break and destabilize, as long as the dungeon capacity remained greater than, or equal to the external energies inside. Monsters and humans. the dungeon would function. The monster's energy was always constant. The only thing that could cause a dungeon to break was if the external energy increased to the point that the overall energy exceeded the capacity. To make things easier to understand, assume a dungeon was a half-filled balloon, where the air represented the total monster energy. Once a human entered, the amount of air inside increased proportionally to the human's strength. The stronger the human, the more air filled the balloon. If too many humans entered or too much air was blown into the balloon, it would pop. In the case of dungeons, they would break and desync. That was the first and most basic rule. The second rule was that once a monster was slain, the dungeon would replenish its energy by spawning another monster with equivalent strength. Since a dungeon was located in the demon world, the respawned monsters were just those found in the nearby region. Respawning was the process in which a monster was replaced inside the dungeon. Dungeons were a source of nourishment for monsters, and once a monster inside was killed, another would automatically be drawn to fill its spot. However, a dungeon could only draw a monster that fit the missing energy capacity. If the monster was stronger than the one killed, the dungeon would reject its existence and prevent it from entering. A dungeon was only cleared when it could no longer spawn monsters, as all the ones in the vicinity had died. Technically, you could clear a dungeon by exceeding its capacity and causing it to desync, but that would be stupid. Not only would hunters find themselves stuck in the demon world, but you would also lose a source of income as the monsters were valuable. Moreover, dungeons were generally harmless for those who didn't enter. Why would anyone want to clear them? Lastly, the number of boss monsters present differed depending on the rank of the dungeon. The higher the dungeon rank, the lower the number of boss monsters present. Moreover, each boss covered a certain area and split the dungeon evenly. This meant that all I had to do was find a boss monster, and from there, I could locate the others, or at least get a general idea. Walking forward, I saw the towering sand dunes before me. There should be a boss monster in this area. Staring at the sand dunes, I was almost certain a boss monster was going to be there. The terrain was different from the other areas, and I noticed goblins and other monsters staying away. I took a brief moment to prepare myself before moving toward the desert-like terrain. As I walked up the dune, a sudden wave of heat washed over my face, prompting me to cover it with a towel, leaving a slight opening for my eyes. As I walked, I felt my feet sinking into the sand, making it harder to move. Kyuyuk. With occasional monsters popping from beneath the sand, my journey became extremely arduous. Click. Swiftly taking out my sword, I stabbed toward the monster that was trying to attack me. Clank. Ha. Surprisingly, for the first time today, I couldn't kill a monster with one strike. Screech. Letting out a large screech, presumably due to the pain, a worm-like monster tried to assault me. Lowering my body, I twisted and elbowed the worm, sending it flying. Shloop. Diving deep beneath the sand, silence returned to my surroundings. Looking at my feet, I closed my eyes and felt the ground below. Hiu. Letting out a long breath, I concentrated on feeling any vibration from beneath me. There you are. Sha. Appearing behind my back, the creature attacked, but I stabbed my sword behind me, right under my armpit. Screech. Hearing the loud sound and feeling my sword become heavier, I turned around. The worm hung from my sword as it penetrated deep into its mouth. Thump. Slashing my sword down, the worm fell on the sand. Staring at the corpse of the creature, I thought, it seems like its weakness is the mouth. Chapter 27. Using my sword to turn over the body of the monster that I just killed, I speculated that it was some sort of sandworm variant. Everything from the top and bottom resembled a worm, however. Its mouth once opened resembled a 4-petal flower. But unlike flowers, it was anything but pretty. If one looked closely, once the worm-like monster opened its mouth, chainsaw-like teeth sharply protruding from the edges of its mouth would meet your sight. Its exterior, which was as hard as titanium, had some sort of mucus-like substance excreted from its body. TSHH. Using my finger to pick up some of the mucus, I felt a stinging sensation on my finger, prompting my brows to involuntarily frown. Could this mucus be the reason why they can travel in the sand like a fish swims in the ocean? Examining the mucus up close, I took a look at the area where the worm was, and from there I could instantly understand how the worm was able to move freely in the sand. The mucus that the sandworm-like creature excreted had some sort of acidic property, which slowly eroded the sand around it, enabling it to move freely. Fascinating. Wiping the mucus on my finger with the sand, I placed the corpse into my bracelet. Taking my phone out, I opened the monster encyclopedia and quickly scrolled down the list. After scrolling for a bit, I finally found a monster that matched the description of the monster I killed. The entry was for a sand sprout, which was FD rank. It was a monster typically found in desert regions, around the size of an adult arm. If caught off guard, its razor-sharp teeth could easily tear off the limbs of its prey, rendering them immobile. It had extremely durable skin that was as tough as titanium, and excreted a strong acid measuring at a pH of 1. Its weakness was the mouth, which was the only area not protected by its tough outer exterior. It could be found in the everlasting sunset, dunes of sorrow, and the Lord's wrath. pH 1. Raising my brow, I looked at my finger, which previously touched the mucus-like substance. Fortunately, apart from my finger being slightly red, there seemed to be no abnormalities. It looks like consuming the seed of limit helped my body become stronger, considering that an acid of pH 1 is nothing to me anymore. Putting my phone back in my pocket, I continued venturing deeper into the dungeon, in hopes of finding the boss of this area. During the journey, for every monster that I killed and knew nothing about, I would look through the Monster Encyclopedia app on my phone in hopes of finding more about them. Screech. PHFTTTTT. Without even looking at what attacked me, I stabbed my sword to the right, and once I felt my sword become heavier, I tapped my bracelet. 38. So far, the most dominant monster present in this desert-like place was the sand sprout. Since I have fought about a dozen of them, I could more or less predict their movement now. First, if you paid close attention, right before they attacked, you could feel a slight vibration beneath your feet. With this slight vibration, I could approximately determine when they were going to attack. Moreover, from what I observed, they never attacked from the front, which meant that they would only attack my right, left, or back. Knowing this, whenever I felt a slight vibration coming from beneath the sand, I could reduce my scope of concentration and react faster. Secondly, and most importantly, for some odd reason, whenever they attacked, they would always let out a loud screech. Because of this, judging the precise position of where they were going to attack was easy. However, even though they were extremely fast, even if they did screech before they attacked, due to their tremendous speed not everyone could react in time, falling victim to their ambush. But once you knew their pattern, they were essentially the easiest monster to deal with. Ha, what's that? Squinting my eyes, a couple of kilometers from my location, I could see a couple of silhouettes that looked like humans. They seemed to be in some sort of mess, as they were all not moving. Party wipe? It wasn't that uncommon for parties to be wiped inside of a dungeon, as a lot of things could go wrong in one. Should I help? To be honest, I didn't have any obligation to help as everyone was on their own inside of a dungeon. But from the looks of it, the party had at least 5 people, so what could cause them to be in this situation? Let's calmly think this through. Could they possibly be trying to arouse a passerby's pity, and then suddenly attack them when they let their guard down in hopes of stealing their loot? Probably not. First off, considering where we were, chances of finding anyone nearby were extremely low, so this sort of scheme wouldn't work here. Even if it was like that, I didn't think they could beat me. Slapping myself hard on the cheek, I continued staring at the people in the distance. I almost reverted back to my arrogant self. There were 5 people in total, and furthermore, since they were in an F-rank dungeon, they were all most likely either F-rank heroes or villains. Although I was confident in my strength, I shouldn't be confident to the point where I could defeat 5 F-ranks without coming back unscathed. The more I observed, the more I was sure that they weren't trying to rob people, as they genuinely looked like they were in distress. Now the real question was whether I should help them. If I did help them, then it would mean that some of my supplies would be cut short as I would have to share some of it with them. But that aside, there's one thing that's been bugging me since the beginning. Why haven't they called for help yet? Although from a distance it looked like they were all dead, if one looked closely, they were all breathing. Moreover, some of them were even moving, albeit lightly. I was sure they would have had no problems sending a distress signal and waiting for help. But why weren't they? This situation was very odd. Part of me wanted to just leave and ignore them, but my instincts were telling me that if I were to leave right now, I may come to regret it later on. Screw it. Lightly sighing, I jumped down the sand dune I was on and slid my way towards where the party was. Screw it, even if it's a trap I'll just escape. Although I had my suspicions, it was better to be safe than sorry. More than me wanting to help them, it was more about figuring out what had happened. There was simply no way a party of 5 F-ranks could be reduced to this state in an F-rank dungeon. Even the boss monster would have a tough time against 5 F-ranks. As I edged closer to their location, there were evident signs that a battle had taken place. Typically the sand in the desert was shaped in little waves, however, here the sand was all over the place as craters could be seen everywhere. Judging from the state of the surroundings, a big fight had taken place. However, oddly enough, there were no monster carcasses around the area. Normally when fighting against a monster, you would see signs of blood everywhere, or some sort of sign that a fight against a monster had taken place. But as I observed closely, apart from some red blood, presumably coming from the party members, there wasn't anything that suggested that they were fighting against a monster. The more I thought about it, the odder the situation was. Actually, now that I thought about it, why were they still alive? Normally, once you fought against a monster, there were only 2 endings. Either you die or they die. Nothing else. But here, although the party was injured, they were still alive. Did this mean that they weren't fighting monsters, but another group? But even then, why leave them alive? Something strange was definitely happening here, and if I wasn't careful enough, I could get implicated in this as well. Arriving before the group, I noticed all of them staring in my direction with blank eyes, but even though they seemed to be able to sense me, they didn't seem to be able to speak nor process what was happening. No, rather than the fact that they didn't seem to be able to think, it was more like they were too dehydrated to think. This further added to the numerous questions that had piled up in my mind. How long had they been like this? To be dehydrated to the point of not being able to speak? How many days had passed since they had been attacked? The more I looked at this situation, the more questions emerged in my mind. Arriving before the party, I quickly headed to the individual that was nearest to me. Wearing a massive armor that resembled a rhinoceros, I tried to flip his body, which was facing sideways. Gripping the massive plates of metal on his forearm, I tensed my quads and tried to flip his body over. Feeling the enormous weight of the armor, I silently cursed at the fact that I had chosen to help him first. Not only did it resemble a rhinoceros, but it also weighted like one. Judging from how much I was struggling, I presumed the armor was at least 100 kilograms. Clank. Finally, after struggling for a bit, I managed to flip his body upwards. Kneeling down on one leg, I quickly lifted his helmet off his face to get a better look at him. Dry lips, void, and dilated eyes, the situation is much more dire than I originally thought. Checking his conditions, everything pointed to the fact that he was extremely dehydrated. Not only was his skin extremely dry, but his muscles constantly twitched, showing how serious the situation was. Seeing that I didn't have much time, I quickly tapped my bracelet twice and a water bottle appeared before me. Placing the water bottle in his mouth, I slowly watched as he struggled to open his mouth. Although it seemed like he knew that a water bottle was placed in front of him, because he was too dehydrated, his brain had already started shutting down. Seeing this, I tilted the water bottle and let the water fall into his mouth. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Initially, as the water fell into his mouth, he took slow gulps, but as time passed the light gulps slowly turned into big gulps. Slowly but surely, his eyes, which had lost clarity, returned to their normal state as he frantically drank the water. Watching him greedily drink the water, I let out a wry smile and turned to the others. Looking at them, they seemed to be in similar conditions to the guy who I had just helped. Because I only had one water bottle, I could only wait for him to finish before helping the others. Fortunately, because the water bottle could store up to 50 liters of water, I didn't have to worry about running out. KHTHANNNGG. Shush, eat this while I help the others. Regaining some of his strength, the guy who I had just helped tried to speak, but I immediately shushed him and gave him some jerky to eat. Although I wanted to know exactly what had happened, he was still in a bad state. Right now the main priority was helping the others. I could find time to talk to him once everyone else was fine. Taking the water bottle from him, I went to the next person, and a similar scene repeated before me. Chapter 28. Thank you. Sitting next to each other, the party members, which were on the verge of death moments before, were now happily munching on some jerky. I was honestly quite shocked by how fast they recovered. Considering the state they were in when I found them, their recovery speed could be described as godly. It only took them a little bit over 10 minutes before they were able to sit up straight and comfortably eat and drink the food that I gave them. Then I realized I was no longer back on Earth. Though I have reincarnated in this place for about 3 weeks, I was still not accustomed to this world's common sense, and rightfully so. I mean, how can I adjust to this world's common sense after only having been here for 3 weeks? It's not like I can rewire my brain to accept the fact that people could heal immediately, when back in my previous world, in which I lived for 32 years, serious cases of dehydration would leave a person hospitalized for weeks. I was now genuinely curious whether all the people who got reincarnated felt the same way I did. Well, leaving that aside, it seems like I was running low on supplies. In terms of water, I still had quite a lot as my water bottle could hold up to 50 liters of water, but I was running quite low in terms of food. I had only bought a couple of kilograms of food supplies, thinking that it would last me about a week, and rightfully so, as who would have been able to predict such a situation. Moreover, since I was planning on staying here for at most 3 days, I didn't feel the need to bring more than a week's worth of food. What makes matters worse is the fact that the monsters present in this dungeon couldn't be eaten. Generally, monsters could be eaten, but that depended on which monsters. Some of the monsters which were found in some dungeons could be eaten, and when eaten could boost up a person's stats. However, that was only for a small minority of monsters, as most of them are inedible due to their meat being poisonous. And unfortunately for me, all the monsters in this dungeon were inedible. Guess I have no choice. Taking out a small black box from my bracelet, I slid the cover up and a small red button presented itself before me. Right above the button, there was a small screen that showed fluctuating wavelengths, indicating the signal strength. This black box, also known as the safe box, was a device that is given to every member before they entered a dungeon. By pressing the button, the black box would send a distress signal to the nearest dungeon guardian. Once the dungeon guardian received the distress signal, they would report it to the dungeon operators, which would then swiftly send a rescue team to come to their aid. The consequence of pressing the button was of course a loss in the deposit, but seeing how mentally exhausted the party was, I could only sacrifice my deposit. When I was saving them, I did look for their safe boxes, but they were either damaged or malfunctioning, probably from the fight they just had. In the end, I was left with no choice but to use mine. At most I could just ask them to refund me since I was not using it for myself. Taking one last look at the members who, although physically looked okay, were anything but fine mentally, I decisively pressed the button. Click, ding, ding, ding. As soon as I pressed the button, the black box started emitting rhythmic sounds that spread across the surroundings. Ha, strange. Initially, after pressing the button, everything seemed normal as the black box kept constantly beeping. But it was only after seeing the weird looks the party was giving me that I noticed something strange. Frowning, I took a look at the black box in my hand, and to my surprise the small screen that showed the wavelengths was flat. Taken aback, I tapped on the back of the black box multiple times, as I wondered whether it was malfunctioning. It's no use. Shaking his head, the first member whom I saved, the one who wore the bulky rhino-like armor, spoke up. It was also like this for us. Turning my attention towards them, I couldn't help but frown. Then why didn't you tell me beforehand? So in the end, the real reason why their safe boxes didn't work wasn't because they were damaged? Smiling bitterly, the bulky member couldn't help but scratch the back of his head as he said, we still had a bit of hope that maybe the batch of safe boxes we received were malfunctioning, and that maybe yours would work, but it seems like this is not the case. Looking at the other members, who seemed to have lost all hope, my frown deepened. I see there's this one thing that has been bothering me for a while, but what exactly happened to you guys? As I was asking them about what had happened, which was my goal since rescuing them, I noticed them flinch in horror as soon as I posed the question. Soon after, their body went rigid, and their eyes became hollow. Startled, I stood up and looked around me. Hey. After making sure there wasn't anyone around, I went in front of them and tried to wave my hand in front of their faces, but it was to no avail. Their complexion turned deathly pale, as their teeth soon started chattering. Soon, as if they were in a trance, they each simultaneously looked at the sky and started speaking nonsense. Please, no. I don't want to. No. Death. Demon. Lucy. I will be late for dinner. Wait for Papa. Lord Savior. Although they were all speaking nonsense, one word specifically caught my attention. Demon. Turning my attention towards the person that said those words, a brunette young girl with 2 pigtails, and clothing that were proof of her mage status, started spasming on the ground. Soon after she started spasming, all the other party members showed a similar reaction as bubbles started coming out of their mouths. Oi, what's going on here? Startled, I immediately moved towards them, and tried slapping their faces a couple of times to get a reaction from them, but it proved ineffective, as their pupils quickly disappeared alongside their pulse. Dead, fuck. Swearing out loud, I dropped on the sand and dazedly stared at the red horizon. It wasn't their death that shocked me the most, but it was how they died, and the last words that the girl said before dying. Demon. There was only one type of curse that could cause someone to die just moments after they recovered. Mindbreaker. An especially vicious curse planted by demons. It now became apparent that this was the work of a demon, as they were the only species that were capable of implanting this type of curse inside of a human. Moreover, I believe that the only reason they were still alive was not because the demon let them go, no, it was because the demon wanted to torture them by making them suffer from dehydration and starvation. Sick fucker. Paw. Punching the sand with all my force, fine granules of sand started falling from the area I had punched, leaving behind a small crater. Although it may perhaps be due to the shock of me witnessing people dying in front of me for the first time in my life, my emotions were in a state of disarray. I could hardly think clearly, as the images of the party dying kept repeating in my mind over and over again. The little details that I had missed prior to their deaths started replaying in my mind, such as the expressions they had before they died, and the last words they were struggling to say prior to their death. And here I was hating protagonists in novels who sympathized with deaths. Bitterly laughing, I thought back to the time that I used to leave hate comments on novels where the protagonist sympathized with the deaths of unrelated people. It was only after experiencing this for the first time that I realized how bang on the authors were when depicting the raw emotions one felt when death occurred before them. It was only now that I started realizing how cruel and fragile life was. Since reincarnation in this world, I had mentally prepared myself for these kinds of situations, but it is only after having experienced this firsthand that I realized how daunting it is to see someone die before you. After collecting myself, I took their identifications and everything I could find on their bodies before burying their bodies underneath the sand. Taking a deep breath as I calmed myself down, I realized that my decision in helping them was a good one. The main goal in helping them wasn't because I was a good 2 shoes, no, I frankly didn't care about them. The only reason why I was upset was because I saw people dying in front of me for the very first time, something that I had never been exposed to back in my past life. Either way, the reason I helped them was because I wanted to know what had happened to them, and fortunately, I had accomplished my goal. Demon. A demon was lurking inside of this dungeon. Taking one last look at the burial site, I turned around and left the area. Knowing that there was a demon here, I decided to go back to the entrance. There was no way I was going to stay here any longer. Clank. Screech. Ha. A loud screech followed by a loud shout resounded across the surroundings as the silhouette of a small human could be seen fighting against a gigantic creature that looked to be the size of a small building. The loud shout and screech were soon drowned by the sound of metal clashing against a hard surface as the small figure slashed towards the enormous creature. Huff. Wiping the sweat that had accumulated on my forehead, I stared at the enormous worm that was before me. Its features, which looked like an enlarged version of a sand sprout, became even more apparent as its figure emerged from the sand. The enormous razor-sharp teeth, which layered on the top of its 4 petal-shaped mouths, bore down on me as its massive body dove towards my direction each time it attacked. It's been precisely 20 minutes since encountering this creature, and because of its sneaky attacking method where it would continuously dive in the sand as soon as it attacked and added with its enormous body, I was left totally helpless against it. Previously, when I fought against sand sprouts, I would always target their mouth, which was their weak point. However, because the boss monster was an enlarged version of the sand sprout, even though I wanted to attack its mouth, the option was no longer feasible, as my sword was like a small toothpick compared to the sheer size of the monster. Phew. Letting out a long breath, my right hand, which was gripping on my sword that was sheathed in its scabbard, suddenly clenched, and as I unsheathed it, a beautiful arc appeared in the air as I suddenly jumped backward. Screech. Without even bothering to hide its presence, the large worm arrogantly appeared from beneath me. Its large mouths, which were riddled with sharp razor-like teeth, opened widely as its enormous frame slowly appeared from beneath the sand. Clank, crank. Initially, the only sound that could be heard was the sound of my sword clashing against the hard surface of the worm, causing me to lightly frown in annoyance. But my annoyance soon turned into delight, as a small cracking noise could be heard from the hard surface of the worm as fine miniature threads that spread like cobwebs started appearing on the tough surface of the worm. Finally, my hard work has paid off. Delighted, I started attacking more fiercely. 10 minutes prior to now, I realized that if I were to continue to pointlessly attack the worm, I would only find myself becoming food for the monster, as I would eventually run out of stamina. Therefore, seeing that my current method was not working, I started devising a strategy. Due to the sheer size of the monster, attacking its mouth was no longer an option. But, just as much of an advantage its size was, it also had a critical flaw: its speed. It was incomparable to actual sand sprouts, who shot like bullets from beneath the sand. Not only were they faster, but they were also much harder to detect, as their small size allowed them to reduce the number of vibrations they could create when moving underneath the sand. Taking advantage of its reduced speed, I started attacking the same place continuously, in the hope of finally cracking its seemingly impenetrable exterior. Finally, after 10 minutes of continuously attacking the same spot, a small crack appeared on the surface of the worm, causing me to rejoice. Now it's time for the roles to reverse. Chapter 29. Having already cracked the outer shell of the worm, the rest of the fight was fairly easy. Since I still had a couple of stamina recovery potions, I did not have to worry about running low on stamina as I fought against the boss monster. Thus, I vigorously hacked away at the weakened surface of the monster whenever it appeared from beneath the sand. 10 minutes after the first crack, the fissures, only as small as thin spider threads, started enlarging, revealing the worm's soft inner layer. 20 minutes after the cracks expanded, the tough outer shell finally could not withstand the attacks and broke. It fully revealed the pulsating inner layer of the worm. Finally, 30 minutes after the outer shell was broken, I rested on top of the carcass of the now dead worm. Slowly catching my breath and looking at my clothes, which were now riddled with holes, I bitterly smiled as I lamented the fact that I had brought no spares. My sword, which was firmly imbued in the body of the worm, was covered in green blood. If it weren't for the fact that I was too exhausted to move, I would have already removed the sword, as the blood was highly acidic. Fortunately, being an artifact, the sword could withstand the acid, giving me enough time to recover before finally retrieving it. Shuaye. Removing the sword from the corpse, green blood sprayed everywhere, and some of it even got on my clothes, further ruining them. At this point, I could not even be bothered caring about my ruined clothes, as I was facing a bigger issue. How do I store this? Alternately looking at the massive corpse and my bracelet, my brows knit. If I was fortunate enough, maybe I could store the corpse, but looking at the contents of my bracelet, I could not help but curse inwardly, as half of my storage space was already filled with corpses. It simply did not have enough space to fit this monster. What bugged me even more was the fact that this sort of issue could have easily been resolved if the safe box still worked. Although I wouldn't need to pay a deposit, a small commission would have been needed to pay if I were to have called for help in regards to collecting the monster corpse. But now that the signal was gone, I swear I will kill this goddamn demon. There was no doubt that the corpse of this boss monster could have fetched me a hefty sum. But now that I did not have enough space, and I could not call for support, I was only left with two options. 1. Dump some of the monsters inside of my bracelet to make space for this monster. Or 2. Only take the most important parts of the monster and discard the body. Typically, the skinning and material collection would be left to the dungeon management, as untrained hands could result in the monster's corpse becoming damaged, thus reducing the overall monetary compensation given. At the end of the raid, the corpse would directly be given to the dungeon management, which would process it in front of you. During the corpse dismantling, in the off chance that a monster core was found, the dungeon management would immediately propose an offer to you. Typically, not all monsters had monster cores, as only a small percentage of monsters had them, but on the rare occasion that a monster core was found, you had basically hit the jackpot, as each monster core went for a really high price. Looking back and forth between my bracelet and the gigantic body before me, I contemplated for a bit before sighing and making my way towards the monster. Using my sword, I directly hacked the worm's massive body, resulting in more blood splattering all over me. At this point, I doubt I will be able to return with clothes on. As I hacked the monster's massive body, I slowly collected its teeth, organs, and other useful parts that could be traded for money. I decided to just discard the monster and collect the most important parts of the worm. Though, I do feel pity for the fact that I did not have enough space, since the worm's outer shell could have easily fetched me a good sum of money due to its durability. In any case, if I were to place this monster inside of my bracelet, I would no longer have any more space in my bracelet. Though the monster was huge, it would at most be worth, in monetary terms, about the same as 10 regular monsters, which took less space, so I might as well just take the important parts. Pity that I lost some money, but hey, like they all say, you can have it all. After 30 minutes of constant hacking, I managed to collect all the important bits. I did look for the core, but, sadly, the monster did not have one. As I did not have my hopes up, I was not disappointed. Who knows, maybe one of the many monsters in my bracelet had a core, though I doubted this. Satisfied with what I had, I turned around and made my way back towards the entrance of the dungeon. I had already wasted too much time fighting against the boss monster, but I had no choice. It is not like I could outrun it. Thus, I was left with no choice but to fight it. During the journey back, I started noticing strange things happening in my surroundings. Stopping, my feet slowly sank in the sand. Using my hand in a similar fashion to a military salute, I squinted my eyes to get a better view of what was happening ahead. Sandstorm. Before me was a massive wall-like front that was approximately 5,000 feet in height. The wall-like front expanded all the way towards where my sight could not see, and was quickly picking up its speed. Whiz. The whistling sound of the glaring wind could be heard as the sand in my surroundings started to get swept by the massive wall-like front, entering the turbulent and suffocating cloud of sand. Looking at the massive storm cloud that was quickly approaching me, I was left with two choices: run away, or keep going forward. Don't really have a choice, do I? Bitterly smiling, I discarded the possibility of running away as the sandstorm was approaching at speeds I could not keep up with. Moreover, the entrance of the dungeon was in the same direction as the sandstorm. Left with no other choice but to continue walking forward, I tightly tied my makeshift hijab and headed toward the sandstorm. Soon the storm enveloped me, rendering everything in front of me impossible to see. Inside the sandstorm, the further I walked, the more I could feel the wind picking up its speed as granules of fine sand started hitting my eyes, obstructing my vision. It started to get so bad that I could not keep my eyes open due to the constant stinging sensation. I wished I had a pair of glasses, I thought as I kept walking forward with my eyes closed. Honestly, I did not prepare enough. Because I was in such a haste, I did not properly plan out my trip inside the dungeon, resulting in me making too many newbie mistakes that should not have happened. Things such as forgetting to bring a spare set of clothes, or bringing extra food rations in the rare chance I was stranded were things that every person who went to the dungeon did. I think the fact that this was my first time entering a dungeon, and that I was still not accustomed to this world's common sense contributed to me making so many mistakes. There was just too much of a difference between writing a novel and actually being in one. In the novel, I could just make Kevin have everything with just a thought. Things such as a spare set of clothes and extra food were never a concern for him, as I would always make sure he was prepared. Moreover, whenever the protagonist would prepare to enter a dungeon, I would simply write, packed up his stuff, which was not specific enough. That in itself was one of the reasons for my negligence, as I tended to depend on the novel too much. Things that should have been common sense, like clothes and at least a month's worth of food, completely flew over my head, resulting in me facing the current situation. It was fine to use the novel as a reference, but I should not rely on it too much. I needed to start thinking things through before going into dangerous situations. Whiz. The further I walked into the storm, the stronger the wind became. My makeshift hijab was swept away by the strong gales, exposing my face to the sand, which was traveling at extreme speeds, causing my face to become numb due to the pain. Using my hands to protect my face, I slowly but steadily walked further into the storm. My current goal was to reach the eye of the storm, as it was the safest place to be inside of the storm. The reason why the eye was so calm was that the strong surface winds that converged towards the center never reach it due to a force called the Coriolis force. Whiz. 2 hours into the storm, although everything looked the same, my ears picked up the extreme sound of winds ruthlessly glaring in a certain location. Hearing the ruthless sound of the wind, I knew that I was at the edge of the eye where the scariest, nastiest, gnarliest part of the storm was located, the eye wall. The area around the eye formed an unbroken wall that obstructed anything that tried to pass it. Fortunately, I was prepared for this. Phew. Arriving at the edge of the eye, I let out a long breath and calmed my mind. Slowly a white glow emanated from my body as I touched the handle of my sword. Soon the glaring sound of the wind disappeared. My mind became as calm as a lake, and everything around me turned tranquil, making me fall into some sort of a trance. The first movement of the Keiki-style quick flash, shua, at a speed that the naked eye could not see, a small gap appeared on the surface of the eye. Without skipping a beat, I immediately jumped inside the small gap. Whiz. Huff. Lying face down on top of warm sand, I breathed heavily as I felt the area around me calm down. I was finally able to catch a breather. Though I was in the eye of the storm, the strong sound of the wind never disappeared. Dusting the sand that covered me, I took a good look at my surroundings. The first thing that I noticed was a large circular wind wall that was dyed yellow due to the sand. It expanded all the way around me, inside of a circular region that had a radius of a couple of kilometers. Looking up, I could see the cloudless blue sky that I had not seen since entering the storm. This is crazy. This was a sight I would have never been able to see back in my previous world. Ever since reincarnating in this world, I have experienced something new each day. Sitting on the sand, I let out an exhausted yawn. Apart from the glaring sound coming from the eye wall, everything around was peaceful, allowing me to finally catch my breath. Just as I was about to take a quick nap, in the distance, at the center of the eye, I noticed a large black castle-like structure. What's this? I had never heard of such a thing appearing inside the novel. What was going on? Slowly walking towards the black infrastructure, I warily glanced at my surroundings, but it was to no avail as everything around me was quiet. Arriving in front of the large black castle, I warily placed my hand in front of its large wooden door that was at least 5 meters in height. Creak. Slowly the door opened. Instantly, a thick scent of iron invaded my nostrils. Opening the door further and revealing what was behind it, I froze in shock. Thick black pillars that reached all the way to the ceilings appeared all over the massive hall, supporting the building. On the pillars, brightly lit torches were attached, illuminating the surroundings and revealing a scene that never in my life would I ever have wanted to see. A pool of blood covered the entire floor of the castle, as limbs and corpses could be seen sprawled all over the floor. The corpses each had their eyes wide open, and their expression was that of pure terror. A shudder ran down my spine as this gruesome scene slowly imprinted itself inside of my mind. Slowly I lifted my head, and then I saw it. Haughtily sitting on top of a dark throne made of skulls, a dark-skinned humanoid creature, with devilish horns protruding from the top of its forehead appeared in my sight, causing my blood to turn cold. With one of its legs resting on the armchair of the throne, and an arm supporting one of its cheeks, the creature had its eyes closed. It had a muscular human body, with 2 bat-like wings attached to its back, and from behind its tailbone, a long black tail wiggled around the air. Sensing something, the humanoid creature slowly opened its eyes, revealing 2 deep red eyes that exuded boundless bloodlust. Staring at me, who was frozen solid in place, the humanoid creature eerily smiled as it looked down on me. Coo, what have we got here? Chapter 30. It felt as if time had frozen. My mind blanked as my blood froze, my breathing quickened, and my pupils dilated. I thought I was prepared. Since reincarnating inside my novel, I knew that one day I would encounter a demon. I was ready, or so I thought. Looking at the creature haughtily sitting on the throne, hallucinations of death repeatedly replayed in my mind. I have to run. I repeated that again and again in my mind. I knew that, yet my legs refused to listen to me. Be a dump. The hall was silent, and only the sound of my heartbeat could be heard. Sweat started dripping down my body, soaking my clothes. With a shivering hand, I tightly clenched my clothes right where my heart was. What is this? Am I scared? There is no way I can fight against that. That was what my mind repeated as my eyes transfixed themselves onto the demonic creature. The demon looked down at me from the throne with blood-red eyes and smiled widely. It seems like a little mouse has sneaked inside my abode. Licking its lips, the demon's eyes carefully scanned me, almost as if a delicious snack had presented itself. Crack. Using its thumb, the demon slowly cracked every finger on its right hand. Hew. Letting out a long breath, I forcefully tried to calm myself down. This is all an illusion. What I was experiencing was the innate fear a prey faces when meeting a predator. If I thought about it rationally, although my opponent was strong, it was not to the point of despair. The demon's stats could not be above F rank, otherwise, the dungeon would have already desensed. The fear I was experiencing was all in my mind. I did not have to fear what was before me. That is what I repeatedly told myself, yet I still could not stop my body from trembling. The feeling was similar to the moments before I took my final exams. I knew I could do it, as I had prepared rigorously, but being prepared did not stop me from being scared. How cute. Amusingly looking down at me, the demon leaned forward as its red eyes scrutinized me. Instantly, it felt as if all my secrets had been laid bare. It felt as if nothing could be hidden from its 2 prying blood-red eyes. G-rank. Tap. Shaking its head disappointedly, the demon began tapping on the armrest of the throne as it started pondering. Finally, after a couple of seconds, the demon shook its head in disappointment. Too bad. Seemingly having reached a decision, the demon's demeanor changed from its leisurely self. Instantly, thick bloodlust exuded from its body, suffocating me. Let me introduce myself. Fwop. Standing up, the demon's large, bat-like wings expanded from its back, casting a large shadow over me. Taking one step forward, smiling from ear to ear, the demon elegantly bowed. I am the Baron of Everblood. Inside a large, spacious, luxurious corridor, a middle-aged man leisurely walked. His hair, tied in a ponytail, accompanied by an unkempt beard and sunglasses, made him look out of place. Walking along the corridor, the people next to him stepped to the side. Despite his looks, he was treated like a VIP. Ding. Suddenly, the middle-aged man felt a small vibration from his pocket, followed by a light ring. Ding. Just as he was about to ignore it, thinking it was nothing important, his pocket started vibrating again, repeatedly. Noticing that something was not right, the middle-aged man took out a small black box from his pocket. Looking at the contents of the black box, the man's brows knit together in a frown. This may be more troublesome than I thought. Sighing, he disappeared from where he was standing and reappeared in front of a gate, with the number 756 imprinted on the side. Stop right there. As soon as he appeared, 2 white-clad individuals obstructed his path. Timothy 1, Timothy 2. I do not have time for this today. The middle-aged man was, in fact, Thomas. Taking out the small box from his pocket, Thomas showed it to the guards. Seeing the box, the 2 guards immediately moved to the side and allowed Thomas to enter the portal. Seeing the guards move, Thomas disappeared once again and reappeared inside the portal. Let us just hope it is nothing serious. Those were the last words the 2 guards heard before Thomas disappeared from their sight. Baron of Everblood. As soon as the demon introduced itself, everything started to click into place like a replaced, rusty gear. He was a Baron of Everblood, an elder of the Vanity tribe, a sub-branch of the demon clan of Pride, and a Baron-ranked demon. He was an existence that only appears right, before the third cataclysm in the latter half of the novel. Why was he here? A baron-ranked demon was not something a G-rank like me could face. The demons were ranked from king, prince or princess, duke, marquis, earl, viscount, and lastly, baron. A demon prince and demon princess had a power level equivalent to around SSS in terms of human power levels. Following prince or princess ranked demons were duke ranked demons, whose power level was around SS, the same as the strongest humans alive. Marquis ranked demons were at a power level of around S, followed by earl ranked demons at A, viscount at B, and baron at C. Those were the approximate power levels of the demons. Currently, humanity could only fend off duke ranked demons at most. If a prince or princess ranked demon showed up, humanity would stand no chance, as each rank increase was a substantial increase in power. Fortunately, the dwarves, elves, and orcs were keeping the prince or princess ranked demons in check. If not for them, humanity would have long gone extinct. Knowing the power levels, it came as a great shock to know that I was currently in front of a baron-ranked demon. Keep in mind that a baron-ranked demon was 4 ranks higher than me. No wonder I felt so much pressure. I thought as everything started to make sense. But wait, if it is a baron-ranked demon, why did the dungeon not desync? Frowning, a sudden thought occurred to me, causing my pupils to dilate as I silently muttered, "Dungeon overload." Stopping, the demon looked at me in surprise. How did you know that? Looking up, I could see the demon looking at me in both shock and surprise. As expected, the demon was actually trying to cause a dungeon overload. A dungeon overload was similar to a dungeon desync in that it involved a dungeon becoming oversaturated with energy. However, contrary to when dungeons desync, where the dungeon just loses connection to the human world, all the monsters inside a dungeon get transported into the human world during an overload. Imagine tens of thousands of monsters suddenly appearing out of nowhere. The consequences alone would be disastrous, but fortunately, this was not a problem for now. There was a reason why humanity had not yet gone extinct. The time was simply not ripe yet. Because of how unstable Earth was, the Demon King was still unable to ascend into the world. Further, the Demon King was currently being held back by various forces, so the looming threat was still small. The Demon King, one of the ultimate overlords of the universe, grew stronger the more planets it consumed. Through numerous exploits in which it conquered and ate planets, the Demon King grew into one of the strongest creatures in the universe. It had gotten to the point that almost every race in the universe was forced to join hands to stop it. At the moment, the Demon King was only one planet away from becoming the strongest being in the universe. Once it consumed one more planet, no being would be able to stop the Demon King, and the world would be at its mercy. Knowing this, many forces joined together in a last-ditch attempt to stop it from conquering its next target, planet Earth. Apart from the Demon King's ascension, there was another factor that prevented the demons from fully engaging against humanity. The demon army was still unable to adapt to the human atmosphere. Because of the low mana density in the atmosphere, due to Earth only having been exposed to mana recently, monsters could not survive there. This was why dungeon overloads were not considered a threat. However, before the third cataclysm, when the Earth's mana density reached a certain point, the event that marked its beginning happened. Suddenly, as the people on Earth were going about their day, dungeon overloads started occurring in almost every dungeon around the globe. Unlike normal dungeon overloads, where the monsters inside would die immediately upon entering the human world, these monsters were able to adapt to Earth's atmosphere and survive. Soon, Earth was overturned into an apocalyptic world where law and order ceased to exist, and only your own survival mattered. People you thought were friends suddenly backstabbed you just to ensure their own survival. That was the beginning of the third cataclysm. Thwop. Flapping its enormous, bat-like wings, the demon instantly appeared before me. Because I was lost in thought, by the time I noticed the demon moving, it was already too late. Placing its sharp finger on my neck, the demon's blood-red eyes looked at me intensely. "I asked you a question." Gulp. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, I stared into those two blood-red eyes. Click. Soon, a white glow emanated from my body, followed by a clicking sound. Tud. Suddenly, a black finger flew into the air before landing on the cold pavement of the castle. As soon as the finger flew into the air, I immediately retreated a couple of steps as the demon took a few seconds to realize what had happened. What? Bewildered, the demon looked at its hand, which was missing a finger. Soon after, the finger on the floor disintegrated, and a new one appeared on the demon. As expected, this was not the demon's real body. Had this been a real Baron-ranked demon, I would have already been dead. The fact that I could cut off its finger, albeit because I caught the demon off guard, was a clear sign that this was not its main body. Had it been its real body, instead of a finger landing on the cold, hard floor, it would have been my head. "You actually dared to hurt this Baron?" Absent-mindedly looking at its now replaced finger, the demon directed immense pressure at me. Feeling the massive pressure, my knees bent a little. "You actually dared to injure me?" Walking slowly in my direction, the pressure exerted on me kept increasing by the second. Slowly, my knees bent more and more. I could not move and was stuck, helplessly watching as the demon walked toward me. With every step it took, I felt death getting closer. Sweat started dripping from the side of my face as my body bent further downward. Arriving before me, the demon slowly lifted my chin with its sharp finger. "For what you have done, I will make sure that you pay dearly." Ah! Tracing its finger along my cheek, a large gash opened up, and blood slowly dripped onto the cold floor. Arriving in front of a large gate, Thomas spotted a group of people surrounding an individual donning a black butler outfit. He had neatly combed hair, wore black-framed glasses, and had a serious disposition. Edward, brief me on the situation. Briefly glancing at Thomas, Edward took out a tablet and started briefing everyone. Reporting 10 individuals have gone past the time limit. We tried contacting them through the safe box, but there was no response. Noticing that something was strange, we tried contacting other individuals whose time limit was not yet due, and we got no response from them either. Pausing, Edward flipped through the reports on the tablet and showed them to everyone. We sent 2 F-ranked dungeon guardians to check what was going on, but they too went missing. Currently, we are prepared to send Group Alpha 79354 into the dungeon. Frowning, Thomas looked at the gate. Noticing that nothing was out of the ordinary, he decided to check its energy level. Let me check the gate. Placing his hand on the gate, Thomas suddenly felt a strange fluctuation. Then, voom. The gate slowly turned black, and demonic energy spread across the surrounding area, causing the greenery within a 10-meter radius to wither. Taking off his sunglasses, Thomas's expression darkened. Shit. Chapter 31. Quickly change this to code black. Hurriedly shouting orders, Thomas disappeared from where he was standing. Ah, goddammit. This is more serious than I had expected. Quickly teleporting back into the black market, Thomas pressed the emergency button. The whole facility turned red as alarms started ringing. Dang, dang, dang. Taking out his phone, he quickly dialed a number. Ring, ring, ring. Hello? From the other side of the phone, a cold, emotionless voice entered Thomas's ears. Boss, we have a situation. Explain. Dungeon Gate 756. Code black. Possible dungeon desync. Pausing slightly, the cold voice said, I understand. You will be granted full authority regarding this matter. Right after saying that, the person on the other side of the phone hung up. Thomas stood there speechlessly. God damn it. Why do I always have to do the dirty work? Cursing out loud and stomping his feet in anger, Thomas quickly dialed another number. Ring, ring, ring. Yes. Shortly after dialing the number, a male voice entered Thomas's ears. Hearing the voice, Thomas quickly shouted orders. Call in all Alpha units with a rank F or below. Sorry. Do it now. It's an order. Yes. Suddenly being ordered by Thomas, the person on the other side of the phone was left momentarily confused. As soon as he noticed the urgency in Thomas's voice, he immediately did as he was instructed. Hanging up the phone, Thomas looked around. The whole facility was in a state of lockdown, and the whole place was dyed red as alarms constantly rang through the surroundings. Pinching the middle of his brows, Thomas sighed. I seriously hope the situation is not as dire as I think it is. Ah, deep gashes started appearing all over my body, as the demon traced his finger around my body. It felt as if I was being cut by a cold metal knife. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. It felt as if a massive boulder was weighing down on me, preventing me from moving. Although the Baron of Everblood was not using his main body, the presence exerted by him wasn't something I could handle. Baron of Everblood had killed countless experts throughout his whole life. He rose from being a regular demon to against all odds becoming a Baron-ranked demon. Countless sacrifices were made in his journey to the top. He had shed lots of blood throughout his journey to the top. He had also backstabbed demons whom he had once called friends just to be able to reach the point that he was now. Just now, all that the Baron of Everblood needed to do was release the killing intent that he had acquired through countless killings to completely paralyze me. Knowing this, I needed to buy myself time to adapt to the killing intent. It was much easier said than done. It felt like a looming threat that was similar to a longsword that hung in my heart, ready to pierce it and kill me at a moment's notice, causing my body to paralyze in fear. Very soon, as I felt death coming closer to me, an idea came into my mind as I started speaking. Aren't you curious as to why I know what you're doing? Halting, Baron of Everblood stopped tracing his finger on my body, and looked at me. Speak. Hugh, the only reason you haven't killed me yet is because you want to know how I knew you were trying to create a dungeon overload, right? Tracing his sharp black finger on my neck, a red line appeared. Blood slowly dripped down from the cut, falling onto the cold ground. Get to the point. KHH, not only do I know that you're trying to create a dungeon overload, but I also know that this isn't the only dungeon you're planning to overload. Although I knew that spilling what I knew was stupid, I had no choice. It was either this or death. I had to buy time. At least enough to figure out how to get out of this situation. Moreover, me revealing what I knew to Baron of Everblood wasn't actually that significant of a matter. Hierarchy mattered to the demons. With the fact that he was a Baron-ranked demon, I knew that he didn't actually hold that much authority. Even if I escaped from this ordeal, chances were that if he reported what I told him to the higher-ranked demons, unless he brought proof, his findings would most likely get dismissed. Thus it didn't matter if I spilled what I knew. There was a high chance that the case would not go anywhere. Moreover, what mattered to me the most was my life. As long as I bought time, I could definitely figure something out. Suddenly, as soon as I finished speaking, the pressure that enveloped me magnified. My legs, which couldn't withstand the pressure, finally gave out, and I knelt on the cold hard ground. Gripping me from the neck, Baron of Everblood lifted my body up. My face was only a few centimeters away from his face. We were so close that I could feel his breath on my face. The demon's breath was like hot steam. It slowly burned the skin on my face, turning it red. Facing Baron of Everblood's hot breath, my face winced in pain. Turning my head to the side, I tried my best to avoid his mouth. It hurt. Speak. Gripping on my neck even harder, Baron of Everblood fiercely stared at me. I know that you're planning in advance for when the mana in the atmosphere becomes dense enough for the monsters to be able to withstand humans' atmosphere. KHH. Feeling the grip on my neck become tighter, I took advantage of the small gap that was created by the Baron of Everblood, as he was distracted by my statement, to free myself from his grip. Staring at his now empty hand, Baron of Everblood stared in my direction. His already blood-red eyes turned a shade darker, as he spat out his next words in pure fury. Oh, it seems like someone has not suffered enough. Huff, huff. Holding on to my neck, I heavily gulped for air and glared at Baron of Everblood. Ha! A thick black arm flew into the air, as Baron of Everblood stood there rooted in his spot, stupefied. He couldn't react in time. Slowly standing up, I sheathed my sword back into my scabbard. Damn this. Just that move alone used most of my mana. I needed to think of something quick. Dungeon Seekers, Mission Control Room. Inside of a large enclosed room, 20 large tables, all with several computer displays, were filled with people tirelessly working together as they exchanged data. A large screen was at the front of the room, displaying rows upon rows of data for the entire team inside of the room. On the side, on the walls, there was a multitude of clocks, displaying everything from the current time to the time every entrant has been inside of a dungeon. This was so that they could monitor if someone stayed inside of the dungeon more than the designated time. On one of the large tables, with his hands leaning on the table, an individual who had a headset and microphone on his head looked to his right as he reported. Reporting, Alpha units have entered Dungeon 756. Red Desolation. Thomas, who had his arms crossed, looked at the monitor in front of him where multiple camera views could be seen. Ask for a status report. Roger. Inside of a desolate world where a deep red sky enveloped the environment, only the sound of the wind rustling through twisted, shrubby trees could be heard. Suddenly, the silence was disrupted as white-clad individuals materialized in the desolate world. Alpha teams, do a status report. Alpha Unit 70,154, check. Alpha Unit 62,584, check. Alpha Unit 75,894, check. Alpha Unit 48,334, check. All teams confirmed. Alpha Mission Operation Captain, turn on your camera and report what you are seeing. Turning on the camera that rested above his pec, a white-clad individual with a golden ring on his arm spoke, camera activated, taking measurements, trying to gain contact with dungeon guardians who had entered previously. Hearing a continuous static sound coming from his receiver, the captain shook his head. Unresponsive. Okay, order all Alpha teams to proceed forward. Alpha teams, move. Marching forward in an organized pattern, all the white-clad individuals followed the captain deep into the dungeon. A white line materialized in front of the Baron of Everblood, and black blood slowly fell on the floor. Gripping my sword tightly, I applied more pressure on the handle of my sword that stabbed his body. In the heart. You think this can actually hurt me? Grabbing the sword that stabbed his body, Baron of Everblood cruelly smiled, as he slowly pulled the sword out from his body. TCH. You immortal bastard. Seeing his nonchalant behavior, as if a sword stabbing his body was nothing, my heart sank. Before I even had enough time to retrieve my sword back, I felt a massive force on my stomach, forcing me to bend over in pain. Barf. The force was so strong that my taste buds were engulfed in a bitter and sour taste as green liquid spurted from my mouth. Ka. To think you actually thought you had a chance against me. Throwing my sword to the side, I could hear the sound of metal hitting the ground. Each time I heard the sound of my sword clattering on the ground, parts of my heart shattered along with it. Without the sword I was nothing. My only chance at fighting back was gone. Looking at the Baron of Everblood, who was slowly approaching me with a wide grin plastered on his face, seemingly relishing my expression of despair. Finally, fear overtook me. Let me teach you what happens when you piss off a demon. What's this? Not bothered in the slightest by the fact that the radio signal was getting disrupted, all of the Alpha team's members stood rooted where they were as their eyes transfixed themselves on the horizon. In their view, a massive wall of sand slowly approached them. It felt as if an avalanche was approaching them in a form of formless mass. Soon it enveloped them. Inside the storm, extremely high winds lifted the sand particles into the air, unleashing a turbulent, suffocating cloud that reduced the visibility of everyone inside of it to almost nothing in a matter of seconds. Apart from the raging sound of the wind, only the static sound of the radio could be heard. Ah! Staring at my arm which was bent at a weird angle, I screamed in pain. It felt as if a wave of electricity has coursed through my body. Excruciating. Now, we are only just beginning. Don't disappear on me already. Grinning evilly, Baron of Everblood licked his lips as he looked down on my body, which was sprawled on the ground. Staring at his expression that seemed to take enormous pleasure at my suffering, I hatefully glared in his direction. Previously, when I was attacking him, I wasn't just blindly attacking him. I knew since the beginning that his body was immortal. That was because his body was actually fake. It was merely a part of his real body that could endlessly regenerate. Had he not done that, then he would have never been able to enter an F-rank dungeon. When I was attacking him, I was looking for his weakness, the core. Everything in the world had a weakness. Even the strongest being in the world had a weakness. The Demon King wasn't an exception. This was just the law of the world. Unless you were a god, no perfect being existed. Because this wasn't Baron of Everblood's main body, his main weakness was a core that was used to operate his body. I knew exactly what his weakness was, yet I faced a new problem. I didn't know where it was. I tried stabbing his body in multiple places, but it was to no avail, as it always regenerated within seconds. And now that my sword was out of my reach, I lost all hope in defeating Baron of Everblood. What shall we break next? Suddenly, as I was in the midst of despair, like a shining ray of hope, I saw a small cut on the demon's arm. Previously, when I had cut the demon's arm off, I watched him regrow it in an instant, but looking at it now it seems like it had not fully healed, as a small scar remained. Crack. Ah! Before I could rejoice, I felt the bones in my leg getting crushed, causing me to scream in pain. Relishing my pained expression, Baron of Everblood laughed loudly. Ha 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 ha, scream more. Crack. Ah! Alone in an empty castle, a demon laughed, whilst a human screamed in pain as the demon broke his legs. But unbeknown to the demon, with each scream the human slowly approaching a shiny metal sword that laid on the floor. Alpha Team respond. Alpha Team. Staring at the screen that had turned black, Thomas quickly picked up the radio and tried to communicate with the Alpha Team members, but it was to no avail, as all he heard was the static sound of the radio. Shit. Slamming his fist on the table, Thomas's hands rested on the table as he frantically thought of solutions. Time was tight, he needed to quickly think of solutions. The more time passed, the bigger the likelihood of the Alpha Team being in danger increased. If he could have, he would have already dived into the dungeon himself, but because he was too strong, he could not, lest he wanted to risk killing everyone that was within the dungeon. Pacing around the room, as he frantically called different numbers, Thomas suddenly heard an excited shout next to him. Sir, we're getting a signal. Quickly arriving next to the individual who had shouted, Thomas quickly took the radio from his hands and spoke. Alpha Team, do you copy? Alpha Team, do you copy? Alpha Team responding. We found a survivor preparing first aid. Inside of a dark enclosed space, a demon sat cross-legged as a frown appeared on his face. Is this it? Through the vision of his clone, Baron of Everblood stared at the lifeless corpse on the floor. He shook his head in disappointment. It seemed like his new toy no longer worked. Ha! Just as he was about to end it, Baron of Everblood suddenly lost control of his clone's body, as it slowly started disintegrating on the ground. Looking to his right, his clone's arm, he could see a sword stabbing straight into it, exactly where the core was located. Blankly staring at the now disappearing arm, Baron of Everblood looked up and saw the bloodthirsty expression of the young human who he was about to kill. Wait for me. Those were the last words he heard before he felt his connection with the puppet disappear. As black ambers filled the air, the demon's body disappeared from my view. Dropping the sword in my hand, I felt all my remaining energy drain from my body. Soon my body started twitching on the ground, and blood started dropping in the ground. Ah, is this how I die? What's this? Touching my cheeks, I could feel drops of water falling down from the corner of my eyes. Slowly tears started staining my face. Was I crying? Why was I crying? I had already died once. Why was I crying over such an insignificant matter? I am such a pussy. How could a grown man like me cry? Pathetic. Looking around, I could only lay on the floor pathetically as the floor became dyed in red. Slowly as the pool of blood around me expanded, vague recollections of my past life started resurfacing. At first, my life was great. I had a warm family that loved me so much. I was happy then. Too bad you only realize how much you cherished something until you no longer had it. Since then my life had never been the same. I worked hard. I truly did. But all I got in return was a pathetic life, where I would lifelessly be typing at my keyboard away. Every day was a struggle. My weight, my health, my job, my mental health, I was suffering so much. Then, I was suddenly transported into my own novel. A new beginning. A new start. I thought that maybe, just maybe I could use this chance to redo my life. I did everything I could so that I could at least be happy. Was asking for a bit of happiness too much? I don't want to die. My vision slowly became darker and darker. My body slowly turned cold, and I could feel my breath become thinner by the second. Slowly as my vision started to disappear, I could faintly hear the sound of rushed footsteps coming my way. Was my mind playing tricks on me? Well, it didn't matter as my brain slowly lost its ability to think. We found survivor, prep, aid. Those were the last words I heard before I was enveloped in darkness. Chapter 32. Report everything that happened since we lost connection to you guys. Neatly standing in a line, white-clad individuals stood with their backs straight, and with their hands behind their backs. In front of them, Thomas stood there looking at them solemnly. Stepping up, a white-clad individual with a golden ring on his arm spoke. Reporting to Vice Director, during the sandstorm some sort of radio frequency disruptor was installed, preventing us from communicating with the outside world. We also couldn't communicate with each other, and because of the low visibility, I ordered them to stay within a 1-meter radius of the closest person next to them. Nodding his head, Thomas took out a pack of cigarettes and lit one of them. Placing the cigarette in his mouth, he exhaled a cloud of smoke as he listened to the report. Puff. As demonic energy was detected before entering the gate, using the energy detector we managed to locate the source of the demonic energy. Pausing slightly, the captain looked around at his team members and said, "The Eye of the Storm." The Eye? Are you sure? Affirmative. Frowning, Thomas pinched the middle of his brows and contemplated. If the source of the demonic energy was within the sandstorm, then it can be confirmed that this was an artificially created sandstorm. But why create a sandstorm? Suddenly, as he was contemplating, a thought struck him. causing him to quickly focus his attention back on the Alpha Team captain. Did you enter the eye of the storm? Shaking his head, the captain spoke, negative. By the time we arrived at the edge of the storm, everything had already started dying down. Ha! Surprised by this information, Thomas's frown deepened. When everything died down, we managed to catch a glimpse of a black castle not far from where we stood. Interrupting once again, Thomas thought of something as he asked, a black castle? Describe to me its features. Here, sir. Taking out a tablet, the captain handed it over to Thomas, who scrolled through the photos. Soon his face revealed a trace of astonishment. This is the work of a baron or higher-ranked demon. Pardon? Confused, the captain tilted his head. How could a baron-ranked demon or higher be able to enter an F-ranked dungeon? Here, take a look at this. Pointing at the castle in the picture, Thomas pinched his fingers and zoomed in. Soon the features of the castle became clearer, revealing what seemed to be a small beacon. This. Nodding his head, Thomas's face darkened and gravely said, yes, it's a mana compressor. A mana compressor was a device used by the demons to compress all the mana inside of a dungeon. In doing so, they could create a small bomb with a power equivalent to 5 atomic bombs. The force released by the bomb was so strong that it would cause the pocket dimension to crumble, resulting in monsters suddenly appearing in the human world. A dungeon overload. Fortunately, monsters couldn't adapt to Earth's thin atmosphere, else the consequences would have been disastrous. Moreover, a mana compressor could only be utilized by Baron-ranked demons or above. That was because only Baron-ranked demons or above could withstand the power of the mana compressor without going insane. Once a demon reached a noble rank, not only did they become stronger, but their mental fortitude increased by many folds. A mana compressor concentrated all the mana that was directed to it into a ball of thick, dense energy. But in order for it to do so, it needed someone to direct mana into it. This required an absurd amount of mental strength, as one needed to direct all the mana in the atmosphere into a specific point. That's where a demon came in. The demon would send a clone of their body into the dungeon, and through the connection they had with their clone, they would direct the mana towards the mana compressor, which would slowly condense all the mana that was directed to it. Only Baron-ranked demons or above could do so. I can't believe they were scheming such a thing from underneath our noses. Staring at the tablet for a bit, Thomas looked at the captain and asked, fortunately, it seems like the mana compressor has stopped working. Did you find anything else? Nodding his head, the captain responded, affirmative. We have found a survivor. Ah, yes, how could I forget that? He vaguely remembered hearing something about a survivor, but at the time he was too focused on making sure everyone was all right that it slipped through his mind. Scrolling down the tablet in his hands, his finger directly paused on a photo. Though when he had previously met him a mask covered his face, Thomas was instantly able to identify the person in the picture. It's him. Slowly opening my eyes, I blankly stared at the unfamiliar ceiling for a moment, then slowly I turned my head to the side. As my head cleared, a strong pungent smell of alcohol invaded my nostrils. The room was silent, and apart from my heavy breathing, only the beeping sound coming from the electrocardiogram in the corner of the room could be heard. A throbbing pain hit my head as I looked at my body, which was covered in bandages. Aside from the bandages, long metal wires that connected to the electrocardiogram were attached to my body. I tried to get up, but once I tried to move my upper body, it was instantly engulfed in pain, refusing to listen to me. Slowly, my body sank onto the large white mattress. Laughing bitterly, I could only lay there pathetically, hoping for the pain to disappear. Staring at the ceiling, illuminated with white fluorescent light, a myriad of questions emerged in my head. How long have I been here? Where am I? What happened? Shutting my eyes, I tried to remember what had transpired prior to waking up in this unfamiliar environment. Clank. But before I could reminisce, the door of the room opened, and a doctor wearing a blue short-sleeved scrub top with a white coat and similar blue-colored pants entered the room. Behind the doctor, a rough blonde individual sat on a chair with his legs crossed and a newspaper in his hand. Mr. Thomas? Russell. Noticing something, Thomas, who had previously accompanied me to the gate, put away the newspaper in his hands and entered the room. He looked the same as when I first met him, but differently from last time. He was currently wearing a brown suit which was full of wrinkles. How are you feeling? All right, I guess. That's a relief. Sitting down next to my bed, Thomas loosened his necktie and took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. Do you mind? Shaking my head, I turned my head around and looked outside the window. It was currently nighttime in Ashton City, and the city lights brightly lit the area around the hospital. Puff. Ah, just what I needed. Puffing a cloud of smoke, Thomas leisurely leaned back and also looked at the brightly lit night. You did good, kid. Because of you, we managed to stop a possible dungeon desync, which would have resulted in a serious loss for us. Pausing slightly, Thomas deeply looked at the star-filled night, so after a brief discussion with the higher-ups, a decision was made. Once again pausing, Thomas turned his attention towards me and couldn't help but let out a dry laugh as he spoke. Well, they decided to grant you a skill. A skill. Opening my eyes wide, I immediately shook my hands and refused. I haven't nearly done enough to receive a skill. Although outwardly I looked humble and surprised, inwardly, I was rolling my eyes. I just almost died. This was the least you could do. Still, although my bewildered reaction was mostly acting, I was still slightly surprised. If in this world someone were to ask you what the most sought-after thing was, most wouldn't even think twice before answering skill. Even though monster parts, martial manuals, weapon manuals, and cores were all things that held tremendous value. In the eyes of people, their worth was far lower than skills. Unlike martial arts, weapon arts, or anything that required some sort of mastery, skills could be learned instantly. Typically, a person would spend years learning a technique before they could proudly say that they had mastered it. However, with skills, all you needed to do was learn it, and all the information would instantly be transferred into your brain. There was no need to train the skill, as once you learned it, you were capable of instantly using it. It was a total cheat. In a matter of seconds, you could do things that would generally require someone years of training to master. I mean, who wouldn't want them? Skills could be found inside of dungeons, and just like cores, you could get them from monsters. However, the drop rate compared to cores, which was already quite low, was even slimmer, resulting in skills being extremely rare. And thus, once the first skill was discovered, similarly to cores, a huge uproar ensued as everyone started coveting them. I mean, who wouldn't want to become stronger without putting that much effort? From that point on, whenever a skill was found, huge auctions would be established. A single skill could go up for at least a couple million U in the auctions. Ha ha ha. Is helping us not lose a dungeon that earns us millions of U each day not something worth a skill? Plus, we aren't really going to give you a high-ranking skill, just an F-ranked one. I guess you do have a point, but an F-ranked skill is still a skill. Just don't fuss over such a trivial thing. How can an F-ranked skill be considered a trivial thing? I thought to myself, as I once again realized how rich and powerful the black market was. To call an F-ranked skill a trivial thing just goes to show how powerful of an organization they were. Although F-ranked skills were on the lower end of the spectrum, they were still worth a huge amount of money. Seeing how they didn't think much about an F-ranked skill, I couldn't help but wonder how many skills they had with them. Could they possibly be in possession of S-ranked skills? If so, then I had really underestimated how influential the black market was. Even as the author of the novel, I didn't know much regarding the black market, as I never dwelled too deep on them in the story. They were merely a convenient organization that the protagonist used to facilitate his growth. I just knew the general layout of the organization, the identity of some of the higher-ups of the organization, but other than some other trivial information, the black market was shrouded in a veil of mystery. But it seems like they were a far bigger organization than I had made them out to be, especially if they were in possession of multiple S-ranked skills, which were far harder to find. There were only 18 S-ranked dungeons known to mankind, which was a dramatic difference compared to F-ranked dungeons which numbered over tens of thousands. As the supply was lower, the number of skills that could be acquired was also lower. Moreover, S-ranked dungeons were far harder than lower-ranked ones, making S-ranked skills that much harder to acquire. One S-ranked skill could pretty much allow someone to buy a small city. That's how expensive they were. But it has to be said that, although S-ranked skills were indeed much stronger than lower-ranked skills, that didn't mean that low-ranking skills were useless. In fact, lower-ranked skills, depending on the person, could turn out to be far more useful than an S-ranked skill. Take an assassin for example. If they were given the option to choose between D-rank skill, Shadow Cloak, a skill that enables the user to hide under a shadow, or S-ranked skill, Tyrant's Wrath, which was a mass AoE skill, they would obviously prefer the D-ranked skill, which was better suited for their profession. At the end of the day, it all came down to how compatible you were with the skill. Alright, you better rest now. Standing up and straightening his wrinkly suit, Thomas flicked the cigarette in his hand and lightly stomped on it with his foot. Once you recover, I'll guide you to where you can collect your skill. Finished with what he wanted to say, Thomas turned around and left the room. Chapter 33. Fortunately, thanks to how advanced the technology of this world was, all my broken bones and cuts were healed overnight. What used to take months to heal back in my previous world, healed overnight, and it was truly miraculous. It was Sunday morning, and Thomas came to pick me up. It was finally time for me to collect my reward, a skill. I had originally planned on acquiring a skill when my strength reached a certain level, but it came as a pleasant surprise for me to be able to get my hands on one this early in the novel. It has to be noted that within the academy, apart from the professors, only a small percentage of students had skills. This was including the third years. Only the rich second-generation heirs could even have a chance at acquiring a skill, and even then, they could only gain access to at most a couple. They were just too expensive and rare for guilds to freely give them away. I followed Thomas inside a remote location that was heavily guarded from all directions. We arrived in front of a large building that looked like a regular storage space, and Thomas nodded towards an empty space. Soon, a couple of shadows in the form of two white-clad guards materialized in front of us. I was slightly startled by their appearance, but I soon calmed down, because the people guarding this place should obviously be strong. After all, what was the point of even storing such valuable things here? After doing multiple checks on Thomas, the guards that were clad in white hid in the shadows, completely masking their presence. After seeing the guards disappearing, Thomas placed his palm on the wall. Clank! A couple of seconds after placing his palm on the wall, a small section on the wall disappeared, revealing a small compartment that contained a digital 6-digit lock. Beep, beep, beep. Arriving in front of the box, Thomas quickly inserted the passcode. Right after inserting the password, a green light blinked a couple of times, and soon after, in a similar fashion to before, a small circular compartment appeared on the wall. Opening his right eye wide, Thomas leaned on the wall and placed his eyes on the hole. Clank, voom. Seconds after placing his eye on the wall, A loud rumbling resonated across the surroundings, and the overhead door slid upwards. That's one hell of an annoying process. Stretching his back, Thomas grumbled as he waited for the door to completely slide upwards. As soon as the door opened completely, I felt a blinding light enter my eyes, prompting me to cover my eyes with my arm. After the light died down, a completely unknown world was presented before me. A thick metallic scent instantly entered my nostrils as I passed the large metallic gate. Soon, the scent was replaced by an aromatic scent that pleasantly enveloped my nose. Beyond the door, an open entryway, with high ceilings painted with vivid imagery depicting an image of several humans fighting against a demon instantly caught my attention. The marble floor polished to the point that the lights neatly reflected on the marble, reminded of a clear lake that gently reflected the sun rays coming from the sun arriving inside of a spacious room with patterned walls, heavy curtains, area rugs, high windows, and upholstered furniture made of heavy oak. Thomas told me to patiently sit down on a red sofa. Feeling my body sink on the sofa, I nervously waited for Thomas. To say I wasn't nervous would be a lie. Although there was no one present in the room, it felt as if a million eyes were staring down at me, watching my every move. Every moment that Thomas was away felt like hours. Fortunately, the wait did not last for long, and Thomas soon came back with a red card in his hand. "Follow me." Handing me the card, he urged me to follow him, as he walked towards a certain area within the facility. Nodding, I followed along as I admired the hallway that was filled with paintings, designer pieces, and other artistic decor that made this place feel like an establishment for the filthy rich. Soon we arrived in front of a large safe door, in which two individuals patiently stood. However, what instantly caught my attention was the fact that although their uniform was similar to the regular guards in the black market, contrary to their white color, theirs was red, indicating that they had a higher status than the white-clad ones. Made sense since they were the last defensive line that led to the vault. Nodding to the guards, Thomas's footsteps halted. Looking at me solemnly, he said, "All right, before I leave, let me warn you in advance. You are only allowed to choose one skill. Let me repeat, one skill." As he spoke, Thomas repeatedly emphasized the fact that I could only take one skill. Looking at me to make sure I understood, he continued, "As you already know, skills are expensive, even for us. Though our organization may be powerful, giving away skills to non-members is still a bit of a burden for us. If not for the fact that you helped us solve a major crisis, we would have never considered giving you a skill." Listening attentively, I repeatedly nodded my head, because I already knew everything he said. His seriousness was understandable as skills were indeed worth a lot. Pausing slightly, Thomas had a gratified smile on his face as he looked at me who understood what he said. Taking the red card from my hand, he handed it to the guards. "Another thing you need to remember is that the skill you can choose can only be between rank G and F. Higher ranked skills will be inaccessible to you. The vault you're about to enter has 3 floors, in which you will only be granted access to the first floor." Lightly chuckling, Thomas teasingly looked at me. "If you manage to repeat what you did again, we might just grant you access to the higher floors." "I'm good." Instantly my mouth twitched as I wholeheartedly refused. No way would I want to go through that experience again. "All right, I'll wait outside. Once you're done with choosing your skill, you can directly learn it under the watch of one of the guards." Finishing what he wanted to say, Thomas stepped to the side and allowed me to enter the vault. "Stand there." Stopping in front of the door of the vault, the red-clad guard pointed towards a certain point. Boom. Following his order, I stood on the spot that the guard pointed. Soon my whole body was enveloped in red light. Ding, ding. "All right, you're all set." Beep. KRRR. Swiping the card on the vault, a green light appeared following which a loud rumbling could be heard as the door of the vault slowly opened. "All right, have fun, kid." Nonchalantly waving his hand, Thomas leaned on the wall and took out a packet of cigarettes only to be glared at by the guards, causing him to bitterly smile. Amusingly shaking my head, I headed towards the vault. Clank. Stepping into the vault, the door behind me closed. Soon silence enveloped my surrounding. Looking up, I could see large, sturdy bookshelves lining the walls, marching across the floor in colorful rows, stretching all the way to the end of the first floor. A staircase leading to a second level could be seen at the end of the room. Wow. The endless amount of skills presented in front of me left me flabbergasted. In the F rank section alone, there were no less than 1,000 books. Skills, like in games, came in the form of a book. That's why this place looked no different from a regular library. Each book had a different color, and represented the different affinity of the skill book, ranging from fire, water, earth, and so on. "You have 1 hour to select your skill." Just as I was in a daze, snapping me out of it was a cold voice that came from the speaker in the corner of the room. Quickly recollecting myself, I looked through the G and F rank sections. Because there were so many skills to choose from, I immediately decided to narrow down my scope of search. First things first, I immediately chose to exclude skills that required a high mana consumption. Because I was not a mage, my mana capacity was fairly low. Choosing a skill that drained of all the mana in my body would be extremely detrimental for me, as the Keiki style, to use a bit of mana whenever I execute a skill. If I didn't use mana, there was no way I would have been able to move so fast. Excluding that, my scope diminished dramatically. Secondly, I needed a skill that shared some synergy with the Keiki style. When fighting against Baron of Everblood, I noticed that although the Keiki style was powerful in the beginning stages, it was a fairly subpar sword art. mainly because once my first move was blocked I could no longer do anything else, as shown how Baron of Everblood negated me by allowing my sword to penetrate his body. I needed something that could buy me time so that I could readjust my stance, or at least something that complemented my fighting style. Having narrowed it down even further, I decided to look through the F and G sections. Looking through, I couldn't help but drool at some of the skills. I found some especially amazing skills. One especially caught my attention. Fist of Fury, a punching skill that conglomerates all the mana within a certain radius, releasing a devastating punch that can leave devastating damage if someone is caught off guard. Monetarily increases strength by a factor of 2. Reading the description of the first skill I picked up in the F rank section, my mouth dropped in a no shape. Increases strength by a factor of 2, that's terrifying. Especially if someone who was already super strong used the skill. Imagine one of the heads of the Union using this skill, as their punch alone could probably shake a whole mountain. This skill basically became scarier the higher someone's rank was. If this was the standard of F-ranked skills, a shudder ran down my spine thinking about the higher ranked skills. Though I knew some of the S-ranked skills that Kevin would later acquire, it didn't stop my mind from imagining the devastating scene they would cause in real life. Thank God, they were rare. Looking through the bookshelves, I paused every now and then to get a better understanding of some of the skills. This continued for 30 minutes until finally, I managed to narrow down my selection to 3 skills. 2 of the skills were F rank, while 1 was G rank. G, Monarch's Indifference skill that enables users to erase all emotions and act as a supreme monarch that only calculates the best option regardless of emotions. F, Flame Sanctuary skill that summons a ring of fire around the user. Apart from the user, scorching heat will envelop everyone that is within the Flame Sanctuary. F, Winter's Breath skill that enables the user to exhale a breath full of frost, resulting in the surrounding temperature within a certain radius to drop below freezing temperature. Reduce enemy speed by a factor of 2. These 3 skills were the ones that were the most useful for me right now, not because they were strong but because they fit my fighting style perfectly. F, Flame Sanctuary, attracted me because it was a skill that could buy me time. By invoking this skill I could momentarily catch my opponent off guard, and during the time my opponent was surprised I could regain my stance and attack them again. F, Winter's Breath, served a similar purpose to Flame Sanctuary, but contrary to that skill this one slowed down the opponent. Unlike Flame Sanctuary, that could be used to end a fight by catching them off guard, this skill was more for a prolonged fight. It could help me gain a huge advantage when fighting as the Keiki style, shined when the enemy was slower. In terms of synergy, this one was the one that shared the most synergy compared to the other 2 skills. Lastly, G, Monarch's Indifference, the only G rank skill in the list, and probably the one that tempted me the most. One thing that I reflected on from my fight against Baron of Everblood was that, had I been calmer, I wouldn't have found myself in such a dire situation. As soon as his arm reconstructed itself, I should have noticed the fact that only a part of it healed. I was too caught up by his presence to notice such a small detail, but had I done so, the fight would have ended quickly, and I wouldn't have had to suffer so much. Moreover, Monarch's Indifference was especially beneficial to me who had yet to kill a human. Yes, I did technically kill Lucas and Patrick, but that was in the VR world where I felt no guilt in killing them. Being someone that came from Earth where you were preached since birth that killing was bad, I still couldn't bring myself to actually kill a human. At least not yet. Killing a human in this day and age was something most students within the academy would have to do at least once, as we would eventually be tasked to kill certain villains. The mental hurdle I needed to push myself to kill a human was much higher than the people that were born in this world who were exposed to such things since birth. With the aid of Monarch's Indifference, I wouldn't need to worry about that anymore. Moreover, with this skill, when fighting against an opponent, emotions like nervousness, fear, and anxiety would never cloud my judgment again, allowing me to perform at my best during critical times, reducing the likelihood of me dying. Having thought it through, I decided to pick Monarch's Indifference. Although it was the only G-rank skill in the list, this skill, for me, was the most useful out of the 3 skills I picked. I just had this feeling that regardless of how powerful I became in the future, this skill would accompany me to the end. Chapter 34. The sound of metal clanking echoed through the air. As I arrived at the entrance of the vault, a compartment opened. A cold voice rang in my ears, ordering me to place the skill inside the box. I followed the command and placed the book into the compartment. I looked at the book inside the compartment carefully. It had lumpy leather bindings and pages of a golden color. The cover was empty, with no title or pictures. Although it looked like a book, I could not open it. No matter how much force I exerted, the book would not budge. Fascinating. The vault door rumbled, slowly opening after I placed the skill book inside. Waiting for me on the other side were Thomas and the 2 red-clad individuals. All good. Walking up to me, Thomas took a quick peek at the vault. Seeing that everything was all right, he urged me to follow him, and we were soon back in the waiting room. Wait here while I go and check if everything is all right. Nodding, I watched Thomas leave. I ignored the fact that I was once again alone in a room that felt like millions of eyes were watching, and I excitedly thought about my soon-to-be skill. This skill was basically tailor-made for me. As someone not exposed to a society where superpowers and no morals existed, I needed a skill like this to adapt to situations that would require me to do things I would never have considered in my previous world. Things like killing or witnessing gore were not something I could get used to immediately. This was partly why I was so overwhelmed by the Baron of Everblood's presence. Had it been Kevin or any other protagonist, the impact would not have been as severe. I was deep in my thoughts with a complicated expression when Thomas walked back into the room. With the skill book in his hands, he arrived in front of me and asked, "Are you sure about this?" "Positive." Lightly smiling, I nodded and took the skill book from his hands. "All right, suit yourself." Although it seemed like he wanted to say something, Thomas stopped himself midway and just waved his hand in resignation. I did not notice his reaction because I was too engrossed in the book. I immediately placed my hand on top of it and circulated my mana, causing a white glow to envelop me and the book to magically disappear. I closed my eyes as a flood of information instantly transmitted into my mind. It took me 5 minutes to digest everything, and when I opened my eyes, a satisfied smile appeared on my face. I checked my status, pleasantly surprised by the changes. My name was Rendover, ranked F-. My strength was F, agility F-, stamina F-, and intelligence F-. My mana capacity was G+, luck was E, and charm was G. My profession was swordsmanship level 1. My martial manual was the 5-star Keiki style. This sword art, created by Grandmaster Toshimoto Keiki, was a 5-star module focused on reaching the apex of swordsmanship and speed. Upon mastery, the sword art becomes so fast that an opponent's head would be rolling on the ground before they could even think about their next move. My skills included Monarch's Indifference, ranked G. This skill enables users to erase all emotions and act as a supreme monarch that only calculates the best option regardless of circumstance. My rank had surprisingly increased from G+ to F-. I had not noticed it before because I was busy recovering, but my stats had shot up a notch. I had not suffered in vain. The time I spent killing monsters and nearly dying against the Baron of Everblood had helped me finally rank up. My smile deepened. "Kid, wipe that smile off your face, it's creepy. He he he." I ignored Thomas, who was looking at me with a disgusted face, and went through the information that had just entered my mind. I really wanted to use the skill right now, but I knew that it was inappropriate. Moreover, with my current mana capacity, I could only use the skill for approximately 30 minutes. 30 minutes should be enough, as my stamina was around that level anyway. As I improved my mana capacity, the time I could utilize the skill would also increase. "All right, let's go." Sighing, Thomas left the room. Soon, we were at the entrance of the storage space. "Here." Thomas stopped, looked back at me, and handed me a small card. I took the card in confusion, but I soon understood. "Yep, this is your last reward. You have been promoted to VIP. "Are really?" "Yeah, since you only chose a G rank skill, I felt a bit compelled to give you this." "Thanks." I looked at the shining black card with a golden VIP sign engraved on it, and my already good mood improved. The card granted me access to the black market without the hassle of remembering the password. It also allowed me priority on all dungeons, and I would not need to pay a deposit in the case of emergencies. This alone was enough to make me happy. Yet the card had one other feature that made the other perks seem like nothing. It allowed me access to any dungeon available. Be it C rank, B rank, or A rank, I could enter any dungeon I wanted. Although going to dungeons of D rank and above was almost like asking to be killed, they had their perks. They were a great way to help me train my mentality. Although I would not do any killing inside of a D rank dungeon, just being there could help me adapt to the pressure exerted by D rank creatures. This was extremely advantageous, as it would help me not panic once I encountered a stronger enemy. From what I learned when fighting against the Baron of Everblood, a fight was 90% mentality and 10% actual skills. If your mentality crumbled before the fight started, you were done. However, if you managed to retain your composure in the face of a stronger foe, the likelihood of you winning increased drastically. That is why true experts tended to be colder than other people. No skill or potion could train your mentality. Only when you were in the face of true danger could you train your mentality. Fortunately, I had acquired a really good skill to help with that, but I could not be too reliant on it. If I relied too much on a skill, I would instantly crumble under pressure if it stopped working, either because I was out of mana, or some other reason. "All right, I have said enough." Taking a cigarette from his pocket, Thomas put his sunglasses back on and waved goodbye. "I have left my number on the back of the card. Contact me if you need help with anything." "Sure, thanks." After parting ways with Thomas, I quickly collected all my loot, which was nicely dismantled by dungeon seekers, and went to Small Snake. Although no core was found, I managed to make a whopping 100,000 units. I made 50k from my loot and 50k as a fee to keep everything that had happened a secret. If news of the incident spread, the reputation of dungeon seekers would crumble. In this accident, apart from me and a couple of others, a total of 39 people had died. 5 of them were people I had previously met. Although I was sad that no one would ever know how these people disappeared, I could only sign it, as refusing was not really an option. In this world where people constantly disappear without anyone knowing how, the death of these 39 people would not have much of an impact on society. I just felt bad for their families. Imagine never finding out how your loved one disappeared. I could only lament the fact that the morals of this world had completely twisted since the appearance of the demons and superpowers. Dialing Small Snake's number, I quickly made an appointment with him. Though I almost died, this experience was more fruitful than I had expected. With the money I had acquired, I could double the amount I had originally planned to invest. Now all I had to do was wait a month before money would rain into my pockets. After parting ways with Ren, Thomas walked back to Dungeon Seekers. Throughout his journey back, Thomas's thoughts kept wandering back to Ren. To say that Thomas was not confused would be a lie. Typically, youngsters always chose the flashiest and strongest skill they could find. Since Thomas had granted Ren access to all skills from F to G rank, he had expected him to choose one of the strongest F rank skills. Contrary to his expectations, he chose a G rank skill that focused on mentality rather than being flashy. This came as a pleasant surprise and made him look at Ren in a better light. Had he chosen a flashy F ranked skill, Thomas would have just treated him as one of the many passers-by of his life, but now things were different. This kid seemed different from most hot-blooded youths, who only thought about being strong, without thinking about the process. He seemed rational, which was unusual for someone of his age. Even though there was evidence that showed Ren had fought against a Baron-ranked demon, Thomas did not put too much thought into it. Although the demon was Baron-ranked, at the end of the day it was just a clone. It was definitely surprising that Ren had managed to defeat it, but it was not something that would make him pay close attention. But now, seeing how he did not let greed overtake his rationality, Thomas started thinking that perhaps he had found a hidden gem. I will have to ask someone to check and send me his files. Being an accomplished A-rank hero, not many things interested Thomas. He had seen every prodigy out there, and recently there had been rumors of a new prodigy popping up in the lock. He had originally intended to do some research, but now someone else had caught his interest. After getting someone to transfer all of the information about Ren, Thomas took a quick look at his data. He was quite surprised by what was shown in the information. Talent assessment D, rank 1750. At first he found it ridiculous, but seeing his exam results, he could tell the data was not wrong. Was I wrong? Thinking back at what had transpired in the dungeon, although he had not seen firsthand how Ren fought, Thomas knew that the exam results were wrong. Having seen a lot of prodigies in his life, Thomas could instantly tell when one was talented. It was not so much about their data, but rather their demeanor. Unbeknownst to Ren, he was a completely different person after he came back from the dungeon. The air around him had changed. Remembering when he had first met Ren, although Thomas could not see his face, he could see that he was a bit unique. He had the air of a tourist. The first impression Thomas had regarding Ren was that he looked like a tourist. He looked at everything like it was something new and exciting. He did not look like someone who was just about to enter a danger-filled space. It felt as if he was going on a holiday. Thomas did not point this out to Ren in the beginning, because he had seen lots of similar people throughout his life. It was not his responsibility to warn people about the dangers within a dungeon. However, after the incident, Thomas noticed Ren change. If he looked like a tourist before, he now looked like an immigrant, as he had something that he previously did not have: resolve. It now seemed that whatever he went through inside the dungeon had caused him to grow, and finally realize how dangerous the world was. He had a similar demeanor to top-class heroes, one that looked at the bigger picture. Though he was still not comparable to them, Ren was heading in the right direction. Thomas felt that if given time, Ren's name would spread across the globe. Well, his prediction could be wrong, but there was no harm in believing in him. Lightly smiling, Thomas slumped down on his comfy chair. Let's observe a bit more. I feel like he will soon give me a pleasant surprise. Chapter 35. It's been about 2 weeks since I had officially entered the academy, and I couldn't say I was particularly excited about classes. Not only was it hard for me to train, due to the constant stares, but for the theoretical courses, I really couldn't understand a thing. Although they were interesting, because of how advanced all the material was, I didn't even know how to solve the easiest questions. What was the point of them being interesting when you knew nothing about them? I didn't even have the basic foundational knowledge. It was like presenting an integral calculation to a kid who had just learned how to perform additions. It was totally ridiculous. I just realized, at this rate, I might actually not make it past my first year. Although the lock mainly focused on nurturing heroes, in order to pass the first year, you still needed to pass all your courses. If I couldn't pass a course, my chances of graduating, let alone pass the first year, were extremely slim. This was a huge problem. That was because the second year was the main year of the academy arc. It was the year where, after the protagonists who have all settled down and adapted to school life, suddenly came face to face against villains. It was the most impactful part of the academy arc, which helped the protagonist and his friends grow in both strength and character. Missing such an event would be detrimental to my growth, as not only did I lose access to the top-end facilities provided by the academy, but I would also lose my chance to gain experience fighting against villains. Alright guys, that marks the end of the lesson. I hope you enjoy yourselves at the elective fair. Disrupting my thoughts was Donna's enchanting voice. So today is the day, huh? Today was the day the elective fair was held. The elective fair was an academy-wide event, where the third and second years tried to recruit new members to their elective. Once an elective was chosen, you couldn't change it until the start of the new year. There was a wide selection of electives available for each student to choose from. There was a specialized combat course, a programming course, a dungeon exploration course, and many more activities to choose from. This was also the time when first years would come to contact with the senior years. Because the first, second, and third years were separated, they didn't have many chances to interact with one another. Electives were a great chance for the seniors to interact with their juniors. Moreover, the more first years they managed to recruit to their elective course, the more budget they were granted by the academy. So every year, the first years found themselves getting assaulted by all types of seniors looking to recruit new members. Furthermore, there was another thing one needed to be careful of when taking into consideration what elective to join. That was they had to watch out for the hidden politics in certain electives. Factions existed inside of the academy. A good example was the blood supremacist faction that Gilbert used to be a part of back when he was still a student. Many electives were secretly a recruitment process for certain individuals to their factions. Therefore, one should be careful when choosing an elective, as choosing one faction means being an enemy to all other factions. Fortunately for me, I was keeping a low profile. Since I was fairly unnoticeable, I was almost certain that I wouldn't be dragged into this senseless conflict. However, although I may not encounter any problems during the elective fair, that didn't mean others would have it as easy as me. Take Kevin as an example. Because he stood out too much, he would not only have to face the endless number of people requesting for him to join their elective, but he would also have to fend off against factions who were eager to have a talented person like him in their group. I could already imagine how miserable his life would be for the next few days. Actually, I didn't need to imagine, I already knew. Moreover, since I already knew what would happen in the next few days, I also knew that this was the period where one of the main scenarios for the first-year academy arc began. Seniors versus juniors. The first major event that Kevin encounters since joining the lock. An event which even if I didn't want to participate will be forced to join. Why did I even? Just imagining myself encountering more arrogant characters was upsetting my stomach. At least I still had Donna with me. Watching her leave, I couldn't help but admire her beauty, which was more mature compared to the main heroines who were still young. As I was busy admiring her, she turned her head around and met my line of sight. I couldn't remember much after that, as I felt my body suddenly become lethargic. I couldn't even lift my finger. Bang! It was only after I heard the sound of the door closing that I managed to recover from the abnormal state. Breaking into a cold sweat, I tried my best to regain my composure, but look at this donkey getting caught looking at Professor Longburn. Ha ha ha, how pathetic. I know she's beautiful, but how is a bottom ranker like you worthy of her? 3 individuals surrounded the area where I was sitting, causing me to frown. What's going on? Why were they suddenly picking on me? Usually, they would just say some sarcastic remarks and leave. But now it felt like they were coming at me more aggressively than ever before. It was like they were purposely targeting me. Right. How could I forget? Slightly turning my head to the left side of the classroom, I could see Arnold sitting with his arms crossed looking at the front of the classroom indifferently. What's going on? Cat got your tongue? Pushing my left shoulder, a rather lanky individual that seemed to be the leader of the group asked. Why are you looking at Professor Longburn with such disgusting eyes? I know the best way to deal with these kinds of people. Hey, you deaf or something? Say something. Since you couldn't fight in schools, I could just ignore him and get along with my day. If you're caught fighting in school, depending on how serious the violation was, you could potentially be expelled from the academy. Moreover, since my ranking was so low, I doubt they would bother keeping a troublemaking student like me. Oi, I'm talking to you, moron. Bro, I don't think he's ignoring you. I think he's just too terrified to even speak. Yeah, what a moron. Think whatever you want, just don't bother me. Grumbling to myself, I stood up and packed my stuff up. You leaving? Putting my bag on my back, I stepped to the side and tried to walk away, but not so fast. Who told you I'll let you run like that? Looking at him with cold eyes, I coldly spoke. Move. Unknown to me, after nearly dying inside of the dungeon, my demeanor had become slightly colder. Slightly surprised by my response, the leader of the group laughed. He, who do you think you are to make me move? Sigh. Letting out a sigh, I tried to push my way through the trio, but it was to no avail. You think you can pass without my permission? Seeing that the situation was becoming unfavorable for me, I dropped my bag back on my desk and sat down. I really wished fighting was allowed, but since I couldn't afford to be expelled, I could only silently endure their harassment. Taking out my phone, I loaded a game and started playing it. Seeing me sit down, the trio initially smirked with a sense of superiority, but as soon as I started playing my game, their smiles faded away, and their complexion turned grim. You. Trembling, the leader pointed his finger at me, trying his best to suppress his rage. Looking up at him, I tilted my head and asked, "Need something from me? How dare you make fun of me?" Seemingly having lost all sense of reason, the leader of the group tried to assault me, but just as he was about to hit me, his 2 friends held him back. Stop, Richard. You might get expelled for this. Don't do this, Richard. So his name was Richard. MHHH. Never heard of him. After being restrained by his friends, Richard managed to calm down before staring at me with hatred. You will pay for making fun of me. Hold on a second. Pinching the middle of my brows, I let out another exhausted sigh. Let me get this straight. You're mad at me because I ignored you? Taken aback for a second, Richard processed what I said before looking down at me with disgust. You lowly ranker, you think you're worthy of my anger? No, you clearly were angry. Even a stupid person could realize that. I'll kill you. No, Richard, stop. Stop, Richard. Dumbfounded, I stared at Richard being restrained again. Was this some sort of comedy skit? Were all minor characters supposed to be dumb, or something? Huff, huff. I'll remember this. Glaring at me, Richard, who was seemingly out of breath, threatened me with a third-rate villain quote. Please don't. I'll kill you. Richard, don't. Richard, please stop. I can't take it anymore. PFFFF. Ha 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 ha. Before I knew it, I found myself laughing hysterically at their antics. I was laughing so hard that tears started gathering in the corner of my eyes. I haven't laughed this hard since coming to this world. It was somehow refreshing. Suddenly being thrown into my own novel, although I tried my best not to show it, I had built up a lot of stress. From the very beginning since arriving here, I had been constantly working towards my goal. From getting the seed of limit, cakey style, entering the black market, and almost losing my life against a Baron-ranked demon. I had been constantly risking my life. My sudden burst of laughter was not just laughter that stemmed from Richard's group's stupidity, but it was also a laugh that swept some of my worries away. Although my journey towards the top was going to become tougher from now on, I should enjoy every free moment that I could get. Although this world was tough, it was still much better than my old world where I was silently waiting for death to come with every passing day. There were times when one just needed to let go of their worries and just relax. Looking at Richard, who was being restrained by his two friends, the corners of my mouth involuntarily pulled upwards. Seeing me laugh, as if a switch had been flipped, all three of them stopped at the same time. Is he laughing at us? Is this lowly ranker looking down on us? Is he treating us like some sort of clowns? Somehow I feel like I did something I shouldn't have. It seems like my laughter had wounded their pride. Feeling their intense glare, I pretty much knew that they were going to assault me. It was fine before because Richard was being restrained, but now that all three of them wished to beat me up, a fight was inevitable. You think this is funny? Do we look like a joke to you? Approaching me with intense hatred in their eyes, I could see from their eyes that they no longer cared about the repercussions. All that was reflected in their eyes was me. But just as they were about to attack me, a stern voice interrupted them. Let's leave it at that, shall we? Stopping right before me, the trio halted their movement and turned towards the voice that told them to stop. Who are you to meddle? Ah, Kevin. Turning around and figuring out whose voice it was, the trio froze on the spot. Being in a society where rank meant everything, they were overcome with fear and couldn't stop trembling as soon as they saw who was speaking to them. Kevin Voss, the first-year #1 ranked student. We were just letting him know his place. As his voice trembled, Richard spoke to Kevin. And what did he do exactly? Overwhelmed by Kevin's charisma, Richard started fumbling on his words. Placing his hand on Richard's shoulder, Kevin patted him a couple of times. Let's leave it here, okay? Repeatedly nodding his head, Richard and his group immediately fled the scene. Seeing this happening before me, I couldn't help but slightly admire Kevin, who with just a few words made the trio run. I have to say, there were definitely perks in standing out, like being able to swiftly deal with low-level characters with just a few words. But in hindsight, facing low-level characters was much better than dealing with annoying high-level ones. So I was still going to try my best to remain as hidden as possible. Thank you for your help. Standing up, I put my bag on my back and expressed my gratitude to Kevin, who simply nodded his head in acknowledgement. Finally free, I quickly left the classroom and headed towards my dorm. Chapter 36. Thank you for your help. After expressing his gratitude, Ren directly left the classroom. Staring at the departing figure of the student, who he had just helped for a brief moment, Kevin turned around and returned to his seat. Taking out his bag, Kevin packed up his stuff. Just as he was about to finish packing up, a handsome individual whose looks rivaled that of a top celebrity calmly looked down on him. What did you do that for? What do you mean? Tilting his head, Kevin looked at Jin. Why are you helping a pathetic loser like him? Frowning at Jin's choice of words, Kevin secretly shook his head and responded. Picking on someone weaker than you is more pathetic in my opinion. Humph, you should already know how the world works by now. Snorting at Kevin's comment in disdain, Jin turned around and went towards Arnold, who was sitting 2 rows ahead of Kevin. Don't waste your time on helping losers like him. It is beneath you. Just ignore him. Just as Kevin was about to rebuke him, a beautiful voice entered his ears, prompting him to turn his head around. With her short brown hair accompanied by her porcelain white skin, Emma stood there looking up at Kevin, who was half a head taller than her. He is an idiot, so ignore him. But, just leave it at that. He is going to ignore whatever you say anyway, so there is no point in arguing with him. Turning around, Emma left towards the exit of the classroom. You coming? Ah, yes. Sighing, Kevin took his bag and followed Emma out of the classroom. Since he was still not used to this place, Kevin had asked Emma to guide him during the elective fair. Catching up to her, Kevin walked side by side with Emma. Normally, a person would have been extremely happy to walk next to such a beautiful girl, but it was extremely uncomfortable to Kevin, who was not used to this much attention. Since his parents' death, Kevin preferred staying out of people's sight, hence why he was not used to the stares. But unbeknownst to him, they were not just looking at Emma, but at him too. His looks, which rivaled Jin's, perfectly matched Emma's breathtaking beauty, making everyone who saw them walking together sigh in admiration. You will get used to it. Ha, excuse me. I mean, you will get used to stares soon enough. Oh, okay, but why do I need to get used to the stares? Are they not just staring at you? Shaking her head as if she was looking at an idiot, Emma picked up her pace. Sigh, whatever. Do you have an elective you want to join in mind? Not really. I was thinking of joining some sort of combat-related elective, since from what I have seen, there is not anything in particular that attracts my attention. Cocking her head to the side to better hear what Kevin was saying, Emma's auburn hair, which was moderately short, lightly rested on top of her shoulders, muting the azure blue uniform. Hearing Kevin's response, Emma could not help but roll her eyes as she pinched the middle of her brows. Is all you do training? Not really. I just thought that any other elective would have been a waste of time. Well, I do not think it is my place to say what you should choose and what you should not, but I do urge you to think about it more thoroughly. Will do. Stopping, Emma's eyes narrowed. Turning around, she looked back at Kevin with a serious expression and spoke. No, I do not think you do. Noticing Emma's behavior and expression, Kevin's back unconsciously straightened as he listened attentively. Electives have a much deeper meaning than you think, especially for someone as talented as you. If you just randomly choose an elective, and it happens to be under a faction, even if you do not plan on entering the faction, they will still consider you as a part of them, especially since it is you. Moreover, once you join a faction, you will officially be an enemy of all other factions that are against the faction which you are a part of. Keep in mind that once you enter a faction, even if you did not mean to, if you wish to exit, you must prepare yourself to make an enemy of that faction. Hearing Emma's explanation, Kevin became dumbfounded as cold sweat dripped from his back. All of this just for joining an elective? Poking Kevin's chest with her finger, Emma looked at Kevin seriously. Yes, so do not just carelessly join an elective. Repeatedly nodding his head, Kevin promised Emma to be careful when selecting an elective. Seeing her turn around, although Kevin did not show it, he was extremely thankful to Emma, who chose to help him out of her own volition. Kevin already knew that Emma had already chosen her elective, and was just doing him a favor. Although they had only known each other for about 3 weeks, Kevin already considered Emma a good friend. They first met when entering their boarding apartments. It was also at the same time he met Jin, Amanda, and Melissa. Since they were in the same building, they had no choice but to interact with each other, and from there they had gotten along with each other well. Well, there were a couple of ups and downs in the beginning as Jin displayed obvious hostility against Kevin. Looking back at the previous events, Kevin had a hunch it had something to do with Melissa, as Jin's hostility would shoot up a notch whenever he interacted with her, but he did not want to pry too deeply. Thus as such, because of Jin, the atmosphere in the dorm was quite tense. But fortunately, thanks to Emma who got along with everyone, the awkward atmosphere dissipated and everyone managed to get along with each other. It could be said that Emma was the key that linked everyone in the dorm. If it were not for her, who knows if Kevin would have even bothered talking to Jin. Hey, you listening? Snapping him out of his thoughts was the figure of Emma, who had stopped walking, and was looking at him with an annoyed pout. Cute, Kevin thought as he resisted the urge to smile at her expression. I feel like you are thinking of something that would make me extremely annoyed. Opening his eyes wide, Kevin turned his head to the side and pretended to have not heard anything. Ah, so you were? Do not know what you are talking about. Kevin's outward expression was calm and expressionless, but on the inside, Kevin felt a storm of thoughts and emotions. How in the world is she able to read my mind? Is this what they call a woman's intuition? Terrifying. Narrowing her eyes and scrutinizing Kevin, who tried his best to maintain his poker face, Emma shook her head and opened a huge door that led to the outside. I will let this one go, now follow me. Led by Emma, Kevin exited the building and strolled around the academy campus. Wow, this is a lot busier than I expected. An ocean of students was swarming the campus as they each made their way towards the elective fair. Some were leisurely strolling around the campus with their friends, some were sitting in the patches of green around the campus, and others were frantically rushing towards the stalls in the elective fair. If it were not for the fact that for some odd reason some of the students were going out of their way to step away from their path, reaching the location where the elective fair was being held was not going to be as unobstructed as it was now. Where exactly are we going? Section B. Pausing slightly, Kevin's eyes widened a little bit. Section B? Is that not the professor area? It is precisely because it is the professor area that the elective fair is taking place there. Dumbfounded by her response, Kevin looked at Emma in confusion. How does that make sense? Rolling her eyes, Emma continued walking forward, ignoring Kevin who was dumbly staring at her. Finally, after seeing that Kevin still had not understood, Emma sighed and spoke. Did I not mention before about the deeper meaning behind electives? Nodding his head, Kevin replied, right, but how does that relate to the fact that the fair is in Section B? Because professors are also part of a faction. Halting his steps, Kevin took a moment to process what Emma had said. If what Emma had said was true, then choosing an elective was a far more serious matter than he had originally thought. If even the professors were trying to influence the elective fair, then it meant that the hidden politics in the academy were rooted deeper than he had previously thought. Although professors are technically no longer part of a faction, that still did not mean that they could not indirectly help the faction that they used to be a part of. Though they may no longer be a part of a faction, their loyalty is still there. If they wanted to, they could force students to join their faction by abusing their authority and make their lives harder. Seeing how Kevin's complexion was becoming grimmer by the second, Emma realized her mistake and tried to encourage him. But you do not need to worry about that. Although you are extremely sought after, they will not carelessly try to force you to join a faction as you are protected by the school. Moreover, you have me, Amanda, Melissa, and that guy protecting you. No professor would dare to mess with you with our backing. Seeing how she was frantically coming up with excuses to make him feel better, Kevin felt warm in his heart. Having spent most of his life in solitude, having friends that supported him and helped him in times of trouble was a new feeling for him. He could not say he disliked it. Thank you. For what? Taken aback by Kevin's strange attitude, Emma took a step back. You are not falling for me, right? I am sorry, but I do not plan on dating right now. There goes all the goodwill he had for her. Hey, what is with that disgusted face? I was just joking. But still, the fact you are looking at a beauty like me with that kind of face irritates me. Narcissistic, are we not? No, I am just acknowledging the truth. Dumbfounded by her fast response, Kevin was momentarily left speechless, as he did not know how to respond to her. Ignoring Kevin, who was too speechless to talk, Emma continued. My beauty aside, you still have to be careful when interacting with the professors, as although they cannot touch you, they can still indirectly try to make your life harder if they hold a grudge against you. GHHH. Why does everything have to be so annoying? Actually, now that I think about it, a few professors already hold a grudge against you. What? How? What did I do? What did you not do? I mean, you suddenly showed up out of nowhere and bulldozed your way to the first rank. You pretty much humiliated those that believed that bloodlines or backing was the most important factor in being the best. Your existence alone is an eyesore for them, of course. They built a grudge against you. Letting out a pained groan, Kevin could not help but curse at his own stupidity. The only reason why he tried his best for the test was that he had still not figured out that he was strong. Having been living isolated from society since the death of his parents, he did not know that with the skills that he had developed thanks to the cheat-like system, he could have been considered as one of the bests of his generation. He had thought that since some of the rich second-generation kids had access to top-end facilities, they would have surely been stronger than him. But he had severely underestimated how much of a cheat the system was. Not only did it provide Kevin with the best training regime, but it also rewarded him with top-end skills, stats increase, and artifacts at the completion of each mission. By the time that admissions for the lock were open, he had already grown to be a prodigy. Had he known this fact, he would not have tried as hard as he did during the examination. I mean, since coming to the lock, Kevin had been through many annoying situations where his rank 1 status had drawn too much unwanted attention. If only he had known. Seeing how distressed Kevin was, Emma, who took pity on him, decided to change the topic to relieve his mind from the troublesome problems. The sky is nice and blue, right? Excuse me. The clouds sure are fluffy. Are you okay? Never been better. How about you? What about me? I am more worried about you, who is being weird. Back to your normal self. Finally realizing Emma's intention, Kevin blushed in embarrassment as he thanked her. Ah, thank you. No problems. Just do not think about all that annoying stuff. At worst you will just have some minor troubles. You may have not realized it yet, but that number 1 rank is as much of a burden as it is a shield. With it, you do not have to worry about people openly doing something to you, and in fact, even if you have not noticed it yet, you are constantly under the protection of the academy. The number 1 rank is not just a title, it is a representation of hope, a light that shines down this godforsaken world, and guide us to true freedom. Looking at Kevin straight in his eyes, Emma lightly punched his shoulder as she flashed a stunning smile. So instead of worrying, be proud of what you have accomplished and destroy anything that dares obstruct your path to success. Chapter 37. Wow, there is a lot more people than I had originally thought. I would have to agree with you on that one. As Kevin and Emma arrived outside of Section B, a crowd of students was swarming the entrance, making it hard to see what was ahead. Each student was sporting a different colored uniform, which ranged from azure blue, dark green, and blood red, representing the year they were in. A 3-meter-tall wall surrounded the whole of Section B. On top of the wall, an invisible high-voltage electrical line was installed, preventing anyone from trying to sneak into the compound. In order to enter the compound, 4 gates, which were respectively allocated according to the cardinal points, north, south, east, west, were tightly guarded by the staff hired by the academy. Because the academy was mainly a medium to nurture talented individuals, which would later be the future pillars of humanity, the information regarding the students was tightly secured by the academy. If the information were to be passed to the wrong hands, potentially talented heroes that have shown good promise during their academic stay might become the target of demons and villains. This could result in them prematurely dying before their talent could leave an impact on society. This was exactly what the academy did not want, and hence why they invested heavily in security for Section B. Excluding the professors, who were all respectively strong heroes, the security alone comprised of B and C-ranked heroes. Section B was practically one of the safest areas within the academy. After 10 minutes, Emma and Kevin were finally able to arrive at the entrance of the compound. The lines were split into 3. At the end of each line, a student with a red blazer was handing leaflets to every person who entered the compound. Welcome to the elective fair. Approaching Kevin and Emma, a blonde individual elegantly handed them a leaflet with a gentle yet confident smile on his face. Thank you. Thank you. Without thinking much, Emma and Kevin took the leaflet and left, causing the blonde individual's smile to momentarily falter. Excuse me, freshman. Quickly regaining his composure, the blonde individual hastily moved in front of Kevin and Emma, obstructing their path. Suddenly being blocked out of nowhere, both Kevin and Emma could not help but frown as they scrutinized the person before them. Although he was not as handsome as Kevin, he could have been regarded as a fairly handsome individual, with his relatively well-proportioned features, blue eyes, and confident demeanor. What do you need? Annoyed, Emma did not try to hide her displeasure as she lightly glared in his direction. Smiling amiably, taking no notice of Emma's attitude, the blonde individual could not help but take a couple of glances at Emma, evidently stunned by her beauty. Without even acknowledging nor glancing in Kevin's direction, the blonde individual focused his whole attention on Emma, almost as if he was enchanted by her beauty. Let me introduce myself. My name is Fabian Parker, 3rd year, ranked 14. May I have the honor of knowing this beautiful girl's name? As he introduced himself, the undisguised pride in his tone could not be concealed as his smile deepened and his back straightened. His eyes, which now fully focused on Emma, could not hide the desire masked within them as he took one step closer to her. That's enough. Placing his hand in front of Emma, blocking Fabian from approaching her, Kevin glared at him. Can't you see you're bothering her? Who are you? Finally noticing Kevin's presence, Fabian could not hide his displeasure as his head snapped in his direction. How dare you block this one's path? You're being annoying. Quickly move out of my way, or don't blame me for being impolite. Frowning, just as Kevin was about to get angry, a mocking voice disrupted their confrontation as Emma walked in front of Kevin. If you don't fuck off from my sight, don't blame me for being rude. Imitating Fabian's tone, Emma arrived right in front of Fabian and lightly smiled. Startled by Emma's outburst, Fabian could not find any words to say, resulting in his face crumpling up. Got nothing to say. Raising her brow, Emma looked at Fabian provocatively. You dare. Trembling, Fabian pointed his finger in Emma's direction as he struggled to contain his anger. Since coming to the academy, no, more precisely, his whole life, Fabian had never been this humiliated. Being born from the prestigious Parker family, which held a tremendous amount of wealth and influence, every girl who he had ever approached threw themselves at him. Never in his 19 years of life did someone disrespect him so much, especially from a couple of first years. Apart from those who were higher ranked than him, and had a similar amount of influence as his family, no one had the right to look down on him. He, Fabian Parker, heir of the Parker conglomerate with a net worth of over $1 trillion, was actually being humiliated in front of everybody like this. Does this slut think that just because she's pretty she can mess with me? It seems like you don't hold your seniors in regard. Good, good. Clapping his hands a couple of times, Fabian's face darkened, and his previous gentlemanly demeanor completely vanished. Ah. Covering her mouth, Emma exaggeratedly looked at Fabian and exclaimed, I am sorry. I did not realize you were a senior. I mean, looking at Fabian up and down, Emma shook her head. The way you talked made me think you were a spoiled brat, so I instantly assumed you were the same year as me. She's definitely enjoying this. Watching Emma, who acted like she was wronged, Kevin could not help but bitterly smile. What a drama queen. She could have just ignored him and told him who she was, as her background was enough of a deterrence for 99% of the people attending the academy. She chose not to, meaning that she was trying to humiliate him publicly. Looking around, Kevin noticed a small crowd that had already started gathering around them due to Emma's loud voice. Sighing, Kevin started doubting whether asking Emma to help him was the right decision. Noticing the crowd that had started gathering around them, Fabian, who was on the verge of exploding, forcefully suppressed his anger and alternatively looked at Emma and Kevin. It seems like the new first years are in need of disciplining, HA? As soon as he finished his sentence, massive pressure engulfed the surroundings, while blue light started emanating from Fabian's body. GHH. What is going on? The crowd which had gathered due to the commotion suddenly felt an immense pressure bearing down on them. Most of the people found themselves sprawled on the floor struggling to move, because they were caught off guard by the suddenness of the attack. Kevin and Emma, who were the ones that were bearing the full brunt of the force, took a knee to the ground as their legs gave out due to the immense pressure they were facing. Although both Kevin and Emma were extremely talented, they were in no way a match to a third-year student who had been vigorously training for 3 years under the care of the academy. Even Kevin, who could have been regarded as one of the best even amongst the second years, felt an unimaginable pressure bearing down on him. Detecting hostile force. Would you like to activate skill, overdrive? Y/N. No. Dismissing the system message that appeared anytime a hostile force was detected, Kevin looked up at Fabian, who was slowly walking towards Emma. Not so proud now, huh? You don't know who you are messing with. Oh, and how so? Raising his brow, Fabian knelt down at Emma's eye level and lightly held her chin up with his fingers. Feeling Fabian's finger touching her chin, Emma momentarily froze before opening her eyes wide in disbelief. I give you 3 seconds to let go of me before things get really serious. Oh. Tilting his head, Fabian could not help but lightly chuckle as his hand gripped Emma's cheeks. Do tell me what you are going to do to me. How dare you? Feeling Fabian's hand gripping onto her face, Emma's final restraint disappeared. Just when she was about to call her guards, a powerful voice reverberated across the surroundings. Stop. Right after the shout, the pressure that was bearing down on everyone disappeared, and a tall individual, whose skin was on the darker side, appeared before the crowd. He had braids that extended all the way to his shoulders, and his bulging muscles that were the size of a football made one wonder if he was a human. Stop this farce at once. Arriving in front of Fabian, the individual, who seemed to be the instructor overlooking this area, appeared before Fabian and loudly screamed at his face. What? Feeling the spit that was being spewed on his face by the instructor as he shouted, Fabian, who could not believe his eyes, struggled to speak for a couple of seconds. Actually, he knew this individual. Hero rank 459 Jerome Wilson, A.K. a Diamond Destroyer, was a rather well-known hero famed for his tremendous strength. His name, Diamond Destroyer, stemmed from how he was able to crush diamonds with his bare hands. If not for his low agility, Jerome could have been ranked in the top 300. Noticing that he was being scolded by instructor Jerome, Fabian was so shocked that he could not utter a single word. The reason he was shocked was not because he was being scolded, but rather by whom he was being scolded. Diamond Destroyer, who he had known since he was young, was actually supposed to be an individual planted by his family to secretly support him during his stay in the academy. Yet here he was berating him in front of everyone. "Come to my office right now." Without leaving any time for Fabian to collect himself, Jerome grabbed him by the neck and immediately left without even looking at Kevin and Emma. Looking at the instructor who hastily brought Fabian away, Kevin stood up. Had he been a split second slower, Kevin would have been forced to take action. "Are you all right?" Extending his hand towards Emma to help her stand up, Kevin had a troubled look on his face as he looked at the people around him groaning in pain on the floor. Without responding to Kevin, Emma emotionlessly walked towards the entrance. Reading the mood, Kevin shut up and followed her. It seems like a storm was brewing. "Release me at once." After finding a relatively secluded area, Jerome, who was still holding on to Fabian, who was flailing in his arms, finally let go of him. "Kyo, how dare you do this to me?" Holding on to his neck, Fabian glared at Jerome, who had a tired look on his face. "How dare you lay your filthy hands on me? Wait till I tell." "Young master," shouted Jerome as veins could be seen visibly bulging from his head. Stopping abruptly, Fabian looked at Jerome in disbelief, as never in his whole life did he see him ever lose his cool like this. Sorry." Realizing what he had just done, Jerome let out a long sigh and apologized to Fabian. Covering his face, Jerome took out his phone and quickly dialed a number. "Young master, you have seriously screwed up this time." "What?" Noticing that things were not right, Fabian's voice became slightly rushed as he looked at Jerome, who was pacing back and forth in front of him. "Hello." Finally, after a couple of seconds, a cold voice full of authority entered Jerome's ears. "Master, there has been an emergency." "What happened?" "It is regarding young master." "What did he do?" "A conflict between him and the Rochefield child occurred during the elective fair, and judging from how they operate, things might become difficult very soon. Bring that child home. I will handle the rest." Pausing for a moment, the voice behind the phone became slightly colder before giving one last command and hanging up. Click. Rochefield. Staring at Jerome in disbelief, Fabian looked as if he had lost his soul. Never in a million years did he imagine that the child he was eyeing was actually the princess of the Rochefield clan, and whose father was the vice director of the union. No wonder she was so arrogant. No wonder she did not even flinch at the mention of his family's name. Although her family was about the same strength as his family, because her father worked in the union, if he wanted to, he could immediately make things harder for the Parker family, resulting in 7 to 8-digit losses. Realizing what he had done, Fabian powerlessly slumped on the ground as he dazedly looked at the sky. "I fucked up big time." Chapter 38. "Are you sure you're alright?" Passing by stalls without even glancing at them, Kevin worriedly looked at Emma, who remained silent throughout the whole time they were walking. After that accident, Emma had a gloomy air around her. It felt as if she had erected a tall barrier that prevented anyone from approaching her. Hey. Suddenly Emma stopped walking. Raising her hand slightly, she wiped away the corner of her mouth. Looking down, her azure blue uniform now had a small red stain on it. Noticing it, Emma quickly pulled her hand back to hide the small stain. But although Emma tried to be subtle with her actions, it could not escape Kevin's eyes, which immediately widened in shock. "Shit." Grabbing her hand, Kevin immediately dragged her out of the elective fair. It seemed like the earlier confrontation had resulted in Emma sustaining some internal injuries. The fact that she refused to kneel even under all of that pressure goes to show how much willpower and determination she had. Fabian's rank was most likely around the C range, which was around 2 ranks higher than Emma, whose rank was still borderline E rank. Subjected to such pressure, Emma was bound to suffer internal injuries. If not for the fact that Kevin's rank was E+ borderline D rank, he too would have suffered serious internal injuries. Smack. "Don't touch me." Raising her voice, Emma smacked Kevin's hand away. A split second after realizing what she had done, Emma froze and lowered her head in shame. I'm sorry. It's all right." Not taking it to heart, Kevin stopped and looked at Emma. Her complexion had become a lot paler than before. Looking at her carefully now, Kevin could see Emma slightly shivering. It was almost as if she was suffering from extreme cold. "Shit, how come I didn't notice this before?" Cursing at himself, Kevin thought for a bit before gritting his teeth. "Here." Taking out a light green potion from his inventory, Kevin handed it to Emma. This potion was one of the rewards that he had gotten after completing a quest that the system had given him. He had saved it in case he got severely hurt. But seeing Emma suffering, Kevin could not control his impulse and decided to give it to her. In the first place, the only reason she got hurt was because of him. If he had not asked her to bring him around for the elective fair, none of this would have happened. "I appreciate your concern." Looking at the potion Kevin had given her, Emma was slightly touched, but she still rejected it. "I insist." Noticing Emma's stubbornness, Kevin tried to forcefully put the potion in her hand, only to be rejected by her once again. Seeing that he could do nothing to make her take the potion, Kevin gave up. Her hand, which was slightly trembling, reached out for her pocket. Taking out her phone, she quickly dialed a number. After a couple of rings, a pleasant and gentle voice could be heard from the other side of the phone. "Young miss, how may I help you? I need someone to pick me up. Is something wrong, miss? Everything is fine. Please come and pick me up. As you wish, young miss. I will immediately dispatch someone to pick you up." Sensing something, the lady on the other side of the phone immediately called for someone to go to Emma's location. Tack. Soon after hanging up her phone, a butler calmly walked in their direction. He donned a neat black blazer, with a slight opening where his white unwrinkled shirt could be seen. A black bow-tie hugged his neck and accompanied by his well-polished shoes that shined under the campus light, further added to his elegance. He had a full set of white hair, which was a result of his age. At the edge of his eyes, which were obsidian black, wrinkles that extended all the way to his upper cheeks could be seen. Lastly, what stood out the most about him was his nicely trimmed mustache that rested below his nose. "Young miss." Elegantly bowing in front of Emma, the butler greeted Emma. "Uncle Norman, please bring me home." Noticing that something was not right, Norman looked up and saw Emma's pale face. "Miss." Rushing in to support her, Norman grabbed her shoulders in a panic. "I'm fine, khhh." Seeing the panic in Norman's eyes, Emma tried to brush it off, but as soon as she started speaking, a red trail of blood fell from her nose. Soon she passed out in Norman's arms. "Miss." Lightly shaking Emma's body, Norman looked around in panic. Taking out his phone, he quickly called for backup. After he finished calling for backup, he gently laid Emma on a bench. After making sure that Emma was okay, Norman's demeanor completely changed as he coldly looked at Kevin and asked, "Tell me what happened." Helplessly nodding his head, Kevin quickly recounted what had happened moments before. As he listened attentively to Kevin recounting about the incident with Fabian, Norman's face became gloomier by the second. The Parkers, good. Standing up, an extremely strong bloodlust permeated the surrounding, suffocating Kevin. Fortunately, Norman was controlling his bloodlust as it could only be felt within a certain radius. If one of those weaker students were to suddenly be exposed to this bloodlust, they would have suffered mental trauma. Soon, 2 black cars arrived at the front of section B where a bunch of individuals with black suits came out. Forming a line, they pushed away all students that were trying to take a look at what happened. Carrying Emma in his arms, Norman looked back at Kevin and said, "Tell the dorm supervisor that Emma will be absent for at least a couple of days." Nodding his head helplessly, Kevin agreed. Clank. Closing the door to the cars soon sped into the distance. Staring at the departing cars, Kevin fell into deep thought before going back into the dorm. It seems like he will have to visit the elective fair another time. Parker Tower, Ashton City. It was currently nighttime in Ashton City, and the lights coming from the cars drifting in the distance formed beautiful yellow and red stripes that stretched all the way to the horizon. Inside of a large office, on the top floor of a tall glass building, the silhouette of a man looking down the busy streets of Ashton City could be seen. That is all. Standing a few steps behind the man, a butler kneeled on the floor as he read the report in his hand. After the butler read the report, a deathly silence permeated the room. Soon the silence was disrupted by the cold voice of the silhouette standing by the window side of the office. "Push the plan forward." "Sir." Abruptly standing up, the butler immediately tried to voice his objection. KHHH. But before he could do that, the butler found himself facing the ground as an unimaginable pressure bore down on him. No matter how much he struggled, he could not move. This was especially shocking since the butler himself was a B-rank hero. The fact that he could not move despite his high rank goes to show how powerful the individual he was serving was. "Do as you're told." Without looking back, the silhouette once again spoke. This time, the butler did not even dare to talk back as he could only nod his head on the floor. Soon the pressure died down, and the butler was able to regain his mobility. "Call him to my room." As the butler was ready to leave the room, his master spoke once again. "Yes, master." Clank. Elegantly bowing his body forward, the butler left the office. Soon, the office became enveloped in silence as only the sound of the man's breathing could be heard. Knock. Knock. "Father." The tranquil atmosphere was soon broken by the sound of a knock. The door slowly opened and a face could be seen peeking from the other side of the door. Fabian, who was on the other side of the door, trembled all over as he waited for his father's permission to enter the room. His previous arrogance could no longer be seen, as he resembled a scared rabbit trapped in a cage. "Enter." Clank. Obediently listening to his father, Fabian carefully entered the room and closed the door behind him. Soon an awkward silence enveloped the room. Sweat could be seen falling from Fabian's face as he stood with his back straight, not daring to sit down. Unable to stand the tense atmosphere anymore, Fabian was the first to break the silence. "Father." Turning around, the features of the silhouette were revealed under the room's lights. His facial features were similar to that of Fabian, however. Despite his age, which was in the late 50s, there were no wrinkles on his face. If someone did not know about his age, they could have easily mistaken him for a 20-year-old college student. What separated him from a regular student was his distinct sense of authority that could be felt from his demeanor. It felt as if he was a judge that dictated who was guilty and who was innocent. Gulp. Swallowing a large mouthful of saliva, Fabian waited for his father to respond. "How do you plan to fix your mistake?" "Yes." Hearing his dad's cold voice, Fabian stood up straight and fumbled on his words. He was too nervous to speak. Frankly, Fabian since young had rarely ever spoken with his father. He was the third in line of the Parker family, and was not doted on as much as his brothers. However, he still had everything. His family, which was passed on for generations, could be considered as one of the strongest in the current human domain. They managed to rise from the bottom to where they were now thanks to their business-orientated mentality. The Parker conglomerate was responsible for selling and trading cores, monster parts, and skills. They had so much money that could last each member for generations. Being neglected, Fabian spent lavishly to substitute the missing paternal love that he never received from his parents. On the off chance that he did meet his father, he would always be intimidated by his presence, which exuded authority. To him, his father never felt like a real father, he felt more like his boss. I want you to finish what you started. Seeing that his son was still too timid to hold a conversation with him, Michael Parker, the current CEO of the Parker conglomerate, spoke up. Not expecting what his father was telling him, Fabian looked at his father in confusion. You heard me clear, I want you to finish what you started. But wouldn't that start conflict with the Rochefield family? Smirking coldly, Michael Parker looked at his son in contempt. The deed has already been done. You think they'll do nothing after what you've done? Hearing his father's words, Fabian lowered his head. He was right. Now that everything had already started, it was too late to regret it. I've been planning this for a while. You've only pushed forward the inevitable. So now I want you to go through with it to the end. I want you to thoroughly crush Emma Rochefield. Staring at his son, Michael Parker slowly walked next to him and patted his shoulder. Prove your worth. Feeling his father's large hands, Fabian felt something inside of him rise. It was something that he had never felt before, reliance. As if a fire had suddenly ignited inside of his heart, Fabian looked at his father in the eyes and asked, but if I target her, wouldn't that make me the prime target of the Rochefield? Smiling slightly, Michael turned back to look at the busy streets of Ashton City. You have to mask your actions, hire some people to create conflict within the academy, so that you can veil your true target. Emma Rochefield. Once everyone is too distracted with the conflicts, you will strike and deal a fatal blow to the Rochefield family's only successor. Staring at the busy streets of Ashton City, Michael Parker grinned coldly. Looking at the Rochefield Tower not so far in the distance, Michael Parker raised his hand and slowly clenched it. It's about time that the Parker family got rid of the Rochefield family. Chapter 39. Inside of a large room decorated in pink, with a large king-sized bed in the middle, laid a stunning young girl, with short brown hair that scattered all over her pillow. She was currently lying down beneath a set of thin blankets that could not hide the outlines of her body. Sitting next to her, a tall man with similar colored hair, nervously looked at the young girl who was resting on the bed. Her skin, which was flawless, was currently pale, and if not for the fact that her breathing was stable, someone could have easily mistaken her for a dying patient. At that moment, Emma opened her eyes. Oliver Rochefield, Emma's father, and the man that was in the room, noticing Emma's eyes opening, immediately shot up and called for a doctor. You're up. How are you holding up? Fine. Emma sat up on the bed and bitterly smiled at her father's worried expression. Soon a doctor came running in to check her pulse, but Emma pushed him away with a smile. It's fine, Dad. Nothing serious happened. Really? Of course. Do I look like someone who would get injured so easily? Plus, didn't the doctor already confirm I was fine? I did. Hearing Emma mention him, the doctor lightly shuddered and hurriedly nodded. Oliver Rochefield was a powerful figure who had many titles to his name. Flame Overlord Oliver Rochefield, 89th in the hero ranking, Ashton City Mayor and Vice Director of the Union. Each title more fearsome than the other. The doctor knew that being on this man's bad side would only make his life more difficult. Looking at his daughter up and down a couple of more times, Oliver eventually relented and gestured for the doctor to leave. She seems fine, so you can go now. Yes, sir. The doctor, without skipping a beat, hurriedly ran out of the room. Looking at the closing door, Emma spoke briefly. Dad. Oliver Rochefield replied with a gentle tone. About the Parkers. Before Emma could finish speaking, the room's temperature increased dramatically. Dad. Noticing the changes happening around her, Emma quickly tried to stop her father. Dad, stop. Placing her hand on her father's cheeks, Emma tried her best to calm her father down. Despite being one of the strongest people in the human domain, Oliver Rochefield had one fatal weakness. His daughter. Ever since his wife's death 8 years ago, the only memento he had of his late wife was his daughter, Emma. Even though he was busy with his job, he always made sure to find enough time to spend it with his daughter. He doted on her a lot. Seeing her in this state, rage clouded Oliver's mind as he couldn't help but feel a stinging sensation hit his heart. It was only after he felt his daughter's warm, soft hands that his rage slowly started showing signs of subsiding. Dad, please stop. He whoa. Letting out a long breath, the room temperature returned to normal, and Oliver bitterly smiled at his daughter. Only she could stop him from going on a rampage. Finally calming her dad down, Emma smiled in relief and slumped back into her bed. Sweetie, are you sure you're okay? I'm okay, I just need some rest. Okay. Please don't push yourself. Tucking Emma in, Oliver stood up and prepared to leave. But just as he was about to leave, he felt a slight tug at the edge of his pants. Dad, you still didn't answer my previous question. Sigh. Emma, this matter is more serious than you think. Gently sitting on the bed next to Emma, Oliver slowly caressed her head. What do you mean? The Parkers have been eyeing our properties and resources for a long time now. If before they were reluctant to act because of my position, now that they know I will retaliate because of what happened, they will no longer have any restraints when dealing with us. Pausing slightly, Oliver held his daughter's soft hand tightly and said, "So sweetie, rest well, and return to the academy once you're fully healed. The academy is the safest place for you to be at the moment." Frowning for a bit, Emma looked at her father. His eyes, which held boundless love for her, were seeded with worry. Seeing this warmth filled her heart as she felt how much he worried about her. Tightening her grip of her father's large hand, Emma's frown lessened and she nodded. "I understand." Smiling gently, Oliver gently kissed Emma on the cheek and left the room. As soon as Oliver left the room, his gentle demeanor completely vanished, and what replaced it was a cold and indifferent one. "Norman." "Yes, master." Turning his head towards Norman, who was patiently standing outside of Emma's room, Oliver instantly issued orders. "Start liquidating all our unnecessary assets. I want 1 billion gathered by the end of the week." "As you wish." Bowing down, Norman lightly smiled and left, leaving Oliver standing outside of Emma's door. Having known his master for a while, Norman knew exactly what he was planning. Normally, he would have been against it, as the consequences of a war against powerhouses was unimaginable, but thinking back at what had happened to Emma, his eyes narrowed and his pace increased. She was the Rochefield reverse scale. Seeing that Norman left, Oliver sighed and looked at his daughter's room. Gently caressing the door to Emma's room, Oliver turned around and silently spoke. "If I don't deal substantial damage to the Parkers by the end of this, then I shall not be called Oliver Rochefield." Though his voice was quiet, it held boundless rage within it. Closing the book down, I lightly sighed. It seemed like things were going to get difficult from here on out. A lot has happened since my near-death experience. In about a week's time, Thobia's church will be assassinated. Since my life and death moment in the dungeon, I increased my training time from 5 hours a day to 9 hours a day. Whenever I had free time on my hands, I would train. It was only after I almost died that I realized that life was as fickle as it could be. Just a single moment, and I could die. Only if I was stronger would I be able to live. Unbeknownst to me, my outlook on life had slowly started to change. I used to think that all I had to do was train and slowly follow along with the storyline. I had this babysitter type of mindset. Just follow the protagonist and cover for them if anything that was beyond the plotline happened. Those were my ambitions. Nothing else. But the further I stayed in this world, the more I realized that there was more to this world than just a story. The people, the beautiful sceneries, the professors, my classmates, everything around me was real. This was no longer a novel, and there were no second chances. If I learned something since reincarnating inside of my own novel, was that I needed power. In the first place, if I had power, I wouldn't need to babysit the plotline. No, if I was stronger, then nothing could stop me from achieving what I wanted. Be it the protagonists, the Union, the Demon King. If I was stronger, then no one could stop me from living the life that I desired. Though I still didn't plan on interfering with the main storyline, my previous ambition of just babysitting the protagonists was no longer there. I need to think more about myself than them. Did I want to go through another near-death experience again? No, I didn't. The feeling of having your life toyed with wasn't something I would want to go through again. No longer did I want to be chained by someone else. I wanted something for myself, and only through power could I achieve that. I may choose to remain low-key for now so that I could build power without getting into any unnecessary conflicts, but the day that I decided to expose my power to the world will be the day that the demons will shake at the mere mention of my name, Rendover. And in order to achieve this, I decided to remove every distraction around me. Soon I started training like crazy. Every day I would wake up early, go to the gym, take classes, eat, go to the gym, and repeat. A thing that has become bothersome, though, was that the gym had started becoming fuller as the days went by. Moreover, the atmosphere in the gym was not right. About 2 weeks had passed since the events of the elective fair, and a tense atmosphere enveloped the whole academy, as the first, second, and third years started eyeing each other. This was mainly organized by Fabian, who hired people to start conflicts with the first years. In the first week, things weren't that bad as only small conflicts happened. However, past the first week, entering the second week, the conflict started escalating to a whole new level. It first started when a second year beat up a first year for bumping into him. Soon, some of the enraged first years took it upon themselves to teach a lesson to the person responsible for the incident. A day after the first year was hospitalized, 3 second years were sent to the hospital heavily injured, including the one that hurt the first year, who was the one that had the heaviest injuries. Following that, the conflict started escalating more and more. It had gotten so bad that the teachers could no longer turn a blind eye on the situation, and firmly stated that whoever was caught fighting within the academy would be expelled, with no exception, regardless of rank or family background. Thanks to this announcement, the conflicts within the academy died down. Keyword within. This meant that once you stepped outside the academy boundary, it was free for all. Fortunately for me, I didn't really have anything to do outside of the academy, so I was fairly unaffected by this whole conflict. Moreover, since my rank was low, I was treated like crap regardless of whether they were juniors or seniors. No discrimination there. Another major thing that had happened was that the Parkers and the Rochefield had finally started acting against each other. The stock prices of each company fluctuated every day as businesses owned by both parties started going bankrupt left and right. It was total chaos. The conflicts were starting to escalate and soon will reach all the way to the academy. I wasn't sure how to feel about this. The atmosphere around the academy was so tense that it started affecting my training. Fortunately, because of my low-profile nature, I was still in the clear for now. Click. Closing the door to my dorm, I walked towards my elective, food exploration. Yep, just like the name suggested, the elective I chose was an elective that focused on food. But don't get me wrong, this wasn't my first choice. In fact, it was probably one of my last choices. But because of all the conflicts within the academy where seniors would reject first years added with the multiple rejections I got due to my rank, I was left with no choice but to apply for this elective. An elective that mainly focused on food. Well, it wasn't that simple, but it was along that line. What made things worse was that this elective was the elective that Amanda took. By some sort of weird twist of fate, I ended up in the same elective as one of the main protagonists that I wanted to avoid. At this point, I was starting to doubt whether my plan to remain low-key would even be achieved, as I was constantly being put through situations where I would either interact with the main cast or fight against mid-novel bosses. Like seriously, what was wrong with this world? I was literally going through more hardship than the protagonist himself. Chapter 40. The elective was in room B17. When I entered, the rows of the classroom were already filled with students, most of whom were wearing a familiar azure blue blazer. There were about 40 first years, of which 32 of them were girls. The reason for such disparity in gender probably had to do with the class president's bewitching appearance. After glancing at the room for a couple of seconds, I turned towards Amanda's direction and sat a few seats behind her. All the front row seats had been taken by the girls. Sitting down, I could smell a nice rose-like scent coming from her direction, prompting my nose to greedily take in the smell. After being exposed to this scent for 5 minutes, an elegant young man, with nicely combed hair, entered the classroom. He had a gentle smile on his face, and his looks could have been considered to be on the higher end of the spectrum. The club president finally showed up. Arriving in front of the podium, the young man calmly placed his stuff down and looked at all the students that had come. Smiling, he said, "Nice to meet you. I am Elijah Turner. I am very pleased by your participation in our elective, food exploration." Elijah Turner, the current president of the elective and a third year. As he smiled, apart from Amanda, all the girls' faces flushed red in excitement. Rolling my eyes, I rested my head on my right arm and carefully looked at Elijah. Though the class may be ignorant about his true nature, I was not. Elijah Turner was a villain and Professor Thibaut's second in command. Soon, several incidents would happen in the academy, including an incident involving Amanda. Elijah would be the mastermind behind it. Of course, I had no reason to make trouble for myself by shouting, "This guy is a villain," alongside Professor Thibaut. They would probably glare at me and kick me out of the club. It was not worth the effort. In any case, Elijah had made a pact with a demon that was part of the Charm Clan, a sub-branch of the demon clan of Lust. In exchange for selling his soul to the demon, he obtained his current appearance and an ability called Bewitchment, which was very similar to Donna's enchantment art. The only difference was that it only worked on females, whilst Donna's worked for anyone regardless of gender or race. Currently, his main goal should be Amanda. Being such a talented individual, alongside her impressive background, the demons highly coveted her. That was part of the reason why his contractor was a high-ranking demon within the Charm Clan, despite his talent being on the lower side. Since today is the first day, I will do a brief introduction about myself and what the club consists of. His charming voice drifted across the classroom, pleasantly entering everyone's ears like it was a beautiful note from a fine-tuned instrument. Instantly, the eyes of the female students started shining even brighter. In food exploration, we research and discuss monster and plant composition. We will look at which monsters and plants are edible and how they benefit our bodies. The topics that we will cover in this course are monster identification, methods of cooking, poison extraction, what combinations were most optimal, and plant identification. It may sound boring and all, but do not worry, as that is just the boring part. Smiling brightly, Elijah looked at everyone in the class. As he was looking, his eyes slightly paused on Amanda, who was quietly listening to the lecture. Rolling my eyes, I scoffed at him. "You think no one noticed you staring at Amanda?" For the fun part, with the permission from the academy, we will be going to different places and taste amazing food. A wave of cheers instantly enveloped the class as the male students celebrated the fact that they were able to leave the academy, while the female students cheered for a different reason. Food exploration, as odd as it may sound, was one of the most sought-after courses for lower-end academies, as not only did it pay well, but it also did not have as high of a risk compared to dungeon hunting. This was especially tempting for those who did not have any combat talent, as despite lacking talent in combat, they could still be widely recognized and regarded by most people. The more famous chefs even had celebrity status that rivaled that of most S-ranked heroes. Walking towards the table that was neatly set up in front of the classroom, Elijah pulled his sleeve upwards. "I will show you guys a quick demonstration. Let's take a look at this steak. As I am sure most of you know, this is the meat of a D-rank creature, man-o-war horse." Tapping his ring twice, a large steak appeared on the table. The steak, which was the size of a wheel, had fine white threads of fat extending like a spiderweb all over the steak, reminding me of a Wagyu steak. Just one look, and it was enough for me to start salivating. Tapping on a button, a holographic image of a large horse popped up for everyone in the class to see. Just like its name suggested, the man-o-war horse was an evolved version of a horse. Having an enormous body that was as tall as 3 people, the man-o-war horse was an extremely strong D-rank monster. What made them troublesome was their ferocious and fearsome personalities that would cause them to attack anything at minimal provocation. As most of you probably know, the man-o-war horse is an extremely hard creature to kill, let alone capture. If not for the fact that after careful research and analysis we found its weakness, this stakes value would already be in the 5 digits. As Elijah talked, a sudden wave of tiredness swept over me. It mostly had to do with the fact that I was overworking myself these days, but it also had to do with the fact that I already knew the contents of the lecture. Huam. A yawn soon escaped from my mouth and the corners of my eyes teared up. The yawn, which was fairly loud, caused Elijah's eyebrows to slightly twitch. Soon, every female in the class turned their heads in my direction and hatefully glared at me. It was like they were telling me, "How dare you interrupt our prince when he is speaking?" Honestly, I would not even be surprised if they attacked me for real if I yawned one more time. The girls had fallen deep. Only Amanda kept her eyes on the hologram and ignored what was happening around her. Cough. Elijah let out a dry cough before continuing his explanation. Because of the food it consumes, which mainly consists of highly fatty food, the man-o-war horse's meat, as seen here, is highly marbled. Ding. Dong. 50 minutes have passed since then, and finally, the loud sound of the bells signaling the end of the lectures rang. Standing up, I packed up my stuff and prepared to leave. This time I held my impulse to yawn, as I did not want to get attacked by Elijah's crazy fangirls. You never know how scary fangirls were. I was on my way to the door when I saw Elijah approaching Amanda. My feet soon stopped. Junior Amanda. Here, this is a small gift for entering the elective. Taking out a small black object from his pocket, Elijah handed it to Amanda. As I focused a lot on Kevin in the novel, I did not really know what happened in between the events that led to the incident between Elijah and Amanda. So what he was doing now, and what the black box was, I had no clue. But I knew he was scheming something. Rather than that being just a gift for joining the elective, Elijah probably handed her something valuable just to strike a good impression with her. Ah, yes, thank you. Amanda took the box and indifferently left the class. That seemed to be the end of their first encounter. Well, that was more anticlimactic than I expected. I was expecting something more entertaining to be honest, but I guess Elijah was much more patient than I gave him credit for, as he just smiled as if nothing happened. Shaking my head, I walked out of the classroom. Well, not like I care anyway. All I cared about at the moment was getting stronger. As long as the plotline of the story did not deviate too much from the main story, I could not care less about the minor details. Walking out of the classroom, I thought for a bit before deciding to go back to my dorm. I think I deserved a bit of rest. It would not do me any good if I overworked myself. Click. Arriving in my dorm, I opened the door and entered. Pomph. Placing my keys on the wall hanger, I lazily slumped on the bed. Ding. Hearing the sound of a notification coming from my phone, I took my phone out and unlocked the screen. Class A25, A24, and A23 announcement. Dear students, we will be going on an excursion 2 weeks from today. We will be going to Hallberg, and we will visit their famous monster processing plant. The trip will be approximately a week long, and thus will require you to come prepared. Read more. Oof. Lazily throwing my phone on the bed, I could not help but feel a massive headache coming my way. 2 weeks from now, our entire class will be going to Hallberg, a city 2 hours away from Ashton City. The goal of this trip was to let students see how monsters were processed and how they were used to create weapons and artifacts. It was a very useful class as it helped students understand some of the topics in class better. It was always easier to learn visually rather than theoretically. Too bad the trip was not as fun as it may seem on the surface. Just, thinking about the future that awaits me, a long, tired sigh escaped from my mouth as I used my arm to cover my eyes. Let's just hope that I will not have to expose myself. Though I said that, my hopes were low. The trip was definitely one that I would have to participate in even if I did not want to. Normally, in my previous world, in order to skip school, I could have faked a sickness or something. But here, the technology was so advanced that pretending to be sick would not work. With a simple check, the doctor could immediately tell if someone was lying or not. Let's hope for the best. Chapter 41. Clank, clank. The sound of metal clashing together reverberated across the surroundings as individuals could be seen sparring against each other or against the puppets in the training ground. Not so far from them, in the middle area of the training ground, a lone boy was currently sheathing and unsheathing the katana in his hands. As this had been a common sight for the past 3 weeks, no one paid attention to it any longer. They just brushed it off as the guy being crazy. I can feel myself reaching the threshold to the minor realm of mastery. After spending most of my time training and attending classes, a week had passed. Before I knew it, my level of mastery of the keiki style had improved drastically. If before I could only execute the first movement once or twice, now I could do it 5 times before running out of mana. Gripping the handle of my katana tighter, I emptied my mind and focused on training. I must constantly unsheathe the sword in my heart. Draw, slash, and accumulate the mana in my body that was constantly growing stronger as I trained. If I could do this 10,000 times flawlessly without any loss in movement, only then would I achieve the minimum standard required to seamlessly execute the keiki style. Soon everything around me disappeared. The scornful glances from the people around me, the loud sound of people practicing, only me and my mind. Draw the katana, slash out. Draw the katana, slash out. Draw the katana, slash out. As if I was in a trance, I didn't stop until my mana and stamina were completely spent. Taking a look at my surroundings, it was currently already dark outside. Around me, I could only see the silhouettes of a few individuals training. Ding. Wiping off the sweat that had accumulated on my forehead, I glanced at my phone, which was constantly ringing since a while ago. Turning on my phone, the first thing I saw was a large notification in red. It finally happened. Breaking news. Thobia's Church of CB Pharmaceuticals has been assassinated last night in his high-security apartment. Reports and investigations point the killer to be rank 37 silent creeper. Lightly smiling, I turned off my phone and went back to training. Talk about perfect timing. Was starting to get impatient from my slow progress. By the end of today, I could finally kiss goodbye to my poor life. Well, to be honest, as I will spend most of my money on potions, the luxurious life that I was dreaming of was still a long stretch away. Actually, now that I thought about it, wasn't it a bit fucked up that I was celebrating someone's death? Though I indeed made a lot of money, it was at the expense of someone's life. Thinking thus far, I slapped my cheeks. He was destined to die anyway, nothing I could do about it. I only took advantage of the inevitable. Could I have stopped it? Yes, I could have. But having been in this world for a while now, I realized that compassion was unneeded. It was every man to himself in this world. There was no need for such thing like compassion. If I wanted to be strong, I needed to become apathetic to this sort of stuff, as this probably won't be the last time a similar situation happens. Ring, ring, ring. Who could be calling me at this hour? Noticing that someone was calling my phone, I went and picked it up. Soon a large smirk appeared on my face. Picking up the phone, I cheerfully answered. Oh my, who could this be? You how? After a short pause, the person on the other side of the phone spoke. His voice, which was usually deep, raised a few pitches. What are you talking about? Cheekily smiling, I teased Small Snake, who was on the other side of the phone. Sigh, well, it doesn't matter. You were right. How do you wish to proceed? Hold it until tomorrow, and sell it in the morning, as soon the stock exchange opens at 9:30 a.m. But wouldn't it be better if we hold it for a bit longer? Well, from a normal person's point of view, yes. But well, let's just say that it's better if we don't become too greedy and play it safe. All right, I'll trust you this once. Next time you see me, I bet you'll get on your feet to kiss my shoes. Sure. I'll call you later once I've settled everything. Aight, tack. With a grin still plastered on my face, I hung up the phone. I wasn't sure why, but I really enjoyed teasing Small Snake. It's about time I headed back. Collecting my stuff, I deposited my sword back and left for my dorm. I was in a pretty good mood, as I felt that I was only a few days away from reaching the minor realm of mastery of my Kiki style, which would considerably boost my strength. Morning, Saturday. Ring, ring, ring. Waking me up from my sleep was the constant ringing of my phone. Lazily stretching my arm, I tapped all over my bed until I finally felt a small rectangular object in my hand. Unlocking the phone, I answered the call. Hello, who's this? Hearing my groggy voice, the other person on the phone paused slightly and asked, It's me, did you just wake up? Yeah. Sorry about that, but I came to tell you some good news. What good news? After removing all the fees, your total profit stands at 14,673 million U. That's a lot of money. Is that seriously how a normal person reacts to having just made this much money? Well, I'm still quite sleepy, so it still hasn't hit me yet. But is that all you called me for? No, there's a bigger issue at hand. What? Sitting up on my bed, I held the phone closer to my ear. Sorry, but it's not safe if I tell you on the phone, as someone might tap on our conversation. Is it that serious? Yes. Hearing Small Snake's solemn voice, I let out a long breath and said, Okay, when do you plan to meet up? How about tomorrow at Epsilon Cafe in Refton Road, 10 a.m.? Yeah, okay, I'll see you then. Tack. Hanging up the phone, I pinched the middle of my brows for a couple of seconds before finally letting out a long sigh. This was going to be a long week. Washing up, I headed outside my dorm. Looking at my bank account that was now 14 million U heavier, a smirk appeared on my face. Was this how it felt to be rich? Not bad. Where are you headed to? Section C, please. Okay. Sitting inside a minibus, I patiently waited for the driver to start the engine. Right now I was headed to the C section of the campus, which was quite far from where I was staying. Now that I had enough money, it was about time that I finally get in contact with the person that could provide me with below-market priced potions. I sort of dreaded this moment. Let's just say that the person I was going to interact with was very, quirky. Section C. Which area? North side, please. All right, we'll arrive in 15 minutes. Starting the engine, the van soon sped off into the distance. Sighing, I looked outside of the window. These days I was sighing quite a lot. With everything that was going on, I couldn't get one moment of peace. Staring at the constantly changing scenery, my stomach slightly churned due to nervousness. What I was about to do next would either make or break me. Let's just hope everything goes well. We're here. Right on cue, the van stopped in front of a large facility. Thank you. Thanking the driver, I walked towards the facility. Large metal fences covered the facility, where enormous buildings could be seen behind them. The sheer size of the buildings caused me to gape in awe. Stop. Arriving at the entrance of the facility, 2 guards appeared before me. They were wearing black uniforms with the school insignia imprinted on their chests. They had black military hats and exuded strong pressure. I'd estimate them to be at around rank D or less, as although the pressure they exuded was strong, it wasn't to the point that made me feel overwhelmed. Handing one of the guards my student ID card, they scanned it briefly, and after everything checked out, they granted me entry. Schloop. Arriving in front of the main building of Section C, 2 transparent retractable doors opened up. A wave of cold refreshing air coming from the AC instantly hit me. The interior of the building was very modern and slick. The most dominant color was white, and everything was decorated with a simplistic design. Arriving in front of the reception of the building, a beautiful young lady smiled at me. "How may I help you?" I would like to meet Melissa Hall, please." The smile of the young clerk lady instantly disappeared. What replaced it was a look of slight disgust as she coldly said, "I'm sorry, but this is a research facility, not a place where you can come as you please to court Melissa. Frankly, you're not the first one that has tried this, and you probably won't be the last one. And let me be honest with you, you're not qualified." Being berated by the young clerk lady, my eye twitched a couple of times. How did it turn out like this? I am not here to court her." Hearing what I said, the young lady smirked and proceeded to cross her arms. "Oh, so what are you here for?" She didn't believe me at all. "I'm actually her classmate, and I have a business proposition for her." Oh wow, this is the third person that has used this excuse. Hearing her sarcastic voice, veins started bulging from my forehead. Taking a deep breath to calm myself down, I said, "Phew, can you just relay it to her? If she denies me, I'll just leave." Hee fine. Laughing lightly, the young clerk lady picked up the phone on the counter and dialed a number. "What's your name?" "Rendover." "All right. Hello." Answering the call, a crisp and pleasant voice entered the young girl's ear. "Hey Melissa, it's me, Rosie." "Rosie from reception." "Yes. How can I help you?" "I got someone here that insists on meeting you." "Why did you call me for this?" "You know that I don't care about this sort of stuff. Just send him out." Covering the speaker of the phone, Rosie leaned forwards and smiled triumphantly at me. "You heard her." Rolling my eyes, I said, "Just tell her I have something important to tell her." He says he's got something important to say. Don't care, if that's all, I'll hang up. By the way, what is the name of the student that is trying to meet me? If I don't remember wrong, it's something along the lines of bend over. Multiples veins popped on my forehead as I tried my best not to assault her. Seeing my reaction, Rosie stuck her tongue out and said, "Ops, I mistake, I meant Rendover." "Let him in." "See, she doesn't want to, Did I hear wrongly?" "No, let him in." Tack. Before Rosie could finish speaking, Melissa hung up the phone, leaving her there dumbfoundedly staring at her phone. What's going on? Doesn't Melissa usually detest interacting with people? A million questions entered her mind as she stood rooted on her spot. Well, look at how the roles have reversed, Miss Rosie. Smirking, I looked at Rosie, who seemed to be lost in her own world. What did you do?" Pointing at me, Rosie looked at me as if I performed some sort of witchcraft. "Nothing really. Hey, why are you backing away from me?" As I was speaking, I noticed Rosie backing away from me, almost as if she was scared of me. Wait, don't tell me she really believes I did something to Melissa. Cough. "Nothing really, just getting your pass." Awkwardly coughing, Rosie quickly handed me a card and shooed me away. Looking back at the reception strangely, I shook my head and made my way towards Melissa's lab. I couldn't be bothered to fix this misunderstanding. Fortunately, there was a mini GPS map on the card that Rosie gave me, preventing me from getting lost. Soon I was in front of a large metal door. Knock. Knocking once, I nervously waited for the door to open. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to be let through this easily. I was prepared to spill some of my secrets and hook her into meeting me, but before I could even take out one of my trump cards, Melissa allowed me to meet her. Something was fishy. Chapter 42. Sitting down on a large white table, I nervously drank the cup of water in front of me. If I said I wasn't nervous at the moment, that would be a lie. In fact, my back was drenched in sweat. That was because sitting in front of me was Melissa Hall, one of the main protagonists. Wearing the azure blue uniform provided by the academy, Melissa sat down in front of me. She was currently elegantly drinking the hot tea that was provided by a servant standing behind her, which, by the way, was glaring in my direction. Taking a quick look at her, one word came into my mind: beautiful. She had smooth and milky skin that did not have any flaws. Most notably, her most dazzling feature was her pair of large, enchanting light blue eyes that were further emphasized by her thinly framed glasses. As she sat in front of me, a cold and arrogant aura expanded from her graceful body, making it seem as if anything was beneath her. "What are you staring so absent-mindedly at?" Waking me up from my stupor was Melissa's annoyed voice as she put her teacup down. "Had I known you were mentally challenged, I wouldn't have bothered meeting you." Feeling a slight tap on her shoulder, Melissa's eyes slightly twitched. "Oh my, it seems like my tongue has slipped. Please find it within your heart to forgive this pitiful lady." Tisk. Clicking her tongue, Melissa slightly glared at her servant behind her. Seeing that he remained unfazed, crossing her arms and legs, she then proceeded to look at me. When most guys lay their eyes upon me, they shower me with praises and tell me how my beauty is unmatched throughout the whole academy. At least it seems you're not one of those corny guys. Don't worry, if you just state your purpose and leave right after, I might make a slight effort in remembering your name. Yep, this prickly personality. It was definitely her, all right. This was exactly why I tried my best to avoid her. If not for the fact that she was the only one that could provide me with cheap, high-quality potions, I would have never, for the love of God, even have bothered talking to her. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I was nervous in front of her, because she was beautiful, or any of those stupid reasons. It mainly was due to how extreme she tended to be at times. At one point in my novel, once Kevin did something to piss her off. To retaliate, she directly used him as a lab rat for a new potion she was developing. Let's just say that Kevin didn't recover for at least a week. But if you're here looking for a chance to date me, then you might as well pack up your stuff and leave. I don't talk to the delusional. No, thank you. Stopping her right before she could continue speaking any further abuse, I went straight to the point. I'm here to make a deal. Oh, a deal? Is this your roundabout way of asking me for a date? It's a business proposition. Though she was skeptical, Melissa paused and allowed me to speak. Go on. I would like for you, Melissa Hall, to sell me the potions that you've made. Oh, carefully scrutinizing me up and down, she shook her head in disappointment. The only reason I came here was because you slightly interested me. I mean, you were the guy that came up with the mana poisoning theory. Ah, thank you. Funnily enough, I was also doing similar research. Too bad I was only missing the experimentation phase. Shit. So that's who came up with the mana poisoning solution. No wonder her servant was glaring at me. Honestly, since then Professor Romhouse has always pestered me nonstop regarding the theory. It was only after I thoroughly explained the theory behind it that he finally relented and let me be. I thought that you wanted to talk to me about something important, but it seems like I got the wrong idea about you. Let me be clear, I am not your potion slave. Standing up, Melissa prepared to leave. It was nice knowing you, whatever you are called. Wait. Seeing her leave, I immediately tried to call for her only to be ignored. Just as she was about to open the door, I finally decided to release the bait that I had planned to use from the beginning. Oh well, it's really too bad. And here I was thinking of helping you solve Slovaka's monster energy transfer theory. Tut, 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 what a pity. Halting her steps, Melissa looked back at me. What did you say? Gritting her teeth and clenching her hands, Melissa glared in my direction only to be left speechless as I laid my feet on the table and nonchalantly picked my ear. Looking up and seeing Melissa, I said, I thought you were leaving. Shoo, if you're leaving then just leave. You don't need to take pity on me. Seeing that I got a reaction from her, I continued with my act. With a person like her, if you didn't take the initiative then you would stand to lose more than you could gain. Waving my hand to shoo her away, I took out my phone and started a game. Bam. Smacking her hand on the table, Melissa smilingly looked at me. Well, her mouth was smiling but her eyes weren't. Oh, I thought you were leaving. I had a change of heart. Well, isn't that great? Putting my phone back in my pocket, I returned to my serious self. If I really pushed her too much, then I wouldn't even know how I died. Kiem, so do we have a deal? How do I know you're not lying? Squinting her eyes, Melissa once again exuded her pressure over me. To be fair, it wasn't actually that much. She was probably around the same level of strength as me at the moment, maybe I was stronger. But well, it wasn't something that I should be proud of since combat wasn't her expertise. How about this? I'll give you half of the theory beforehand, and the other half once the deal is done. But what if the second half doesn't work? Rolling my eyes, I said. Do you really think I have the balls to give you some non-functioning theory? Good point. Gesturing her servant behind her, Melissa took out her tablet and started writing a contract. We soon spent the next 15 minutes agreeing on the terms of the contract. This okay? Yep, everything seems good. Looking at the contents of the contract, I nodded in satisfaction. Basically, in exchange for my research, Melissa would provide me with intermediate potions, provided that I would pay for the cost of the raw materials. The potions that she would make included stamina recovery potion, muscle recovery potion, strength enhancement potion, and so on. Potions were graded from low, mid, intermediate, high, advanced, and premium, with each grade being a major improvement on the last. Before, the potions I always used were low-leveled ones, hence why they were cheap. But now thanks to Melissa's fine skills, I could use intermediate potions, at prices far below the current market price, saving me millions of U. Yes, although I could have made more money by just asking Small Snake to sell the theory for me, that would have been the dumbest choice. What do you think would happen to the world if I were to suddenly release such an important theory? I could pretty much already envision myself destroying the whole plotline. Let's not do that. Then sign it. Seeing the smirk that had appeared on my face, Melissa's mouth twitched as she urged me to sign the contract. She could hope for nothing more but to wipe the smile off my face. Tapping on the tablet, a holographic paper appeared before me. Using my finger, I swiftly signed the virtual paper. All right, hold your end of the deal. Okay. Taking out a small USB from my bag, I handed it to Melissa. Inside of the USB was the first half of the Slovaka monster energy transfer theory. To summarize what it was basically a theory that proved that monster cores were created by monsters accumulating energy inside of their bodies. Though what I handed Melissa was not perfect, it had all the correct concepts and data to prove the theory. A lot of scientific terms and data were missing, but with the aid of the web, I made the research somewhat presentable. Plus, a genius like Melissa could easily understand what was inferred from the paper. This theory was extremely important to Melissa and the world because if she could somehow, with the aid of the theory, produce an artificial core, it would create a major scientific breakthrough. Cores would no longer be something that could only be found if someone was lucky. Just the levels at which humanity would develop would drastically increase the chances of the world surviving. Well, to be honest, Even though she was one step closer to her dream of creating an artificial core, she was still missing the crucial piece, which she learned of after already knowing this theory for a couple of years. In short, even if I gave her this theory right now, it would have no effect on the story. Regarding the crucial piece, I wasn't going to give it to her no matter how much she begged me to. If she pushed through the full theory regarding the creation of artificially created cores, then she would undoubtedly die. When she pushed this theory forward in the novel, it was already the late stages of the novel, and she was strong enough to defend herself against S-ranked villains. Because of how world-shaking artificial cores were, demons did everything they possibly could to try to kill whoever was responsible for creating them. They used every means possible to eliminate any traces of this theory from existing. It was that much of a threat. If Melissa were to be subjected to this at this point in the novel, then God knows what the consequences would be. I had already taken a huge risk by giving her the Slovaka's monster energy transfer theory. Though this would have little to no impact on the story, it was better to reduce any possible liabilities. Yep, I scammed her. Tisk, what did you say your name was? Rendover. Rendover. Repeating the name a few times, Melissa looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "Do you know what's the scary part about women?" Feeling the atmosphere become tense, I took a step back. What if I don't want to know? It's the fact that we never forget our grudges. Personally, I always pay my debt back, with interest. Gulp. Hearing her words, I involuntarily swallowed a mouthful of saliva. As I was the author, I knew she wasn't lying. If she set her mind to something, she will try to achieve it regardless of what stood in her way. Hee. I had heard the famed name of Melissa Hall, the most beautiful, charming, and generous woman in the whole academy. Oh my, would you look at that? It seems like time is tight, and I must go to my appointment. Let's get along with each other, and not hold grudges, haha. Pretending to look at my watch, I came up with an excuse and immediately left. Staying any longer would only spell bad news for me. Watching Ren leave, Melissa's face darkened. Arriving next to Melissa, and noticing her expression, her servant asked, "Miss, do you want me to deal with him?" Thinking for a moment, she shook her head. "Forget about it, I still need my second part of the theory. And it's not like I didn't benefit from this deal." Though she said that, Melissa was fuming. To actually dare take advantage of her like that. Melissa suppressed the fury rising from her heart, and engraved the man's name in her head. Rendover, Rendover. Congratulations, you have succeeded in making me remember your name. Chapter 43. Pakistan, Pakistan, Pakistan. Inside of a large, spacious room, a lone figure bounced around a punching bag. His figure seemed to melt into the shadows around the room, appearing and disappearing constantly. Each time his figure emerged from the shadows, his fist would instantly connect with the punching bag. This resulted in a small indentation appearing on the bag. The force of each punch was so strong that small shockwaves were released every time he hit the punching bag. If not for the fact that the material used for making the punching bag was unique, it would have already been broken a dozen times over. Huff, huff, huff. Stopping, the figure's body, which seemed to be sculpted to perfection, heavily gulped for air. Droplets of sweat dripped all over his shirtless figure, giving him a wild and manly aura. Taking a water bottle from the ground, the handsome figure took big gulps of water. He soon exhaled in satisfaction. After drinking his fill, the figure dropped to the ground, exhausted, and leaned against the wall. Knock, knock. Hearing the sound of someone knocking, the figure indifferently spoke. "Come in." Soon the door opened, revealing the features of a burly individual, whose hair was cut in a buzz cut. His towering figure, which looked to be nearing 2 meters, made him look intimidating. "Young Master Jin, I heard you called me." Apathetically nodding his head, Jin slowly stood up and grabbed a towel from a nearby table. Drying his wet hair, he slowly approached Arnold, who stood with his back straight, and breathing lightly, not daring to even make a sound. Arriving beside Arnold, Jin punched his stomach with all his might. This caused Arnold's body to bend over as his eyes shot wide open. Gwa, ghhh, khhh. To actually be unable to deal with a mere bug. Disdainfully looking at Arnold, Jin threw the towel, which was drenched in his sweat, at his face. "Stand up." KHH, holding his stomach, Arnold slowly stood up as Jin ordered. "To think you would resort to such stupid tricks to harass someone that is not even worth my notice." But, shut up. Jin's mood was terrible. Recalling the lone figure sitting on the right side of the classroom, Jin's teeth clenched. Rendover. That was the name of the student that fouled his mood. Previously, he did not really put Ren in his sight. He only knew that Arnold had a slight grudge against him. But recently he received a certain piece of news that irked him. It told him that Melissa had granted Ren a meeting with her, and moreover, it seemed that they talked for over 10 minutes. Not even he could talk to Melissa for that long despite the fact that they were living in the same dorm. With a dark face, Jin said, "I will ask Troy to deal with him, at least he can finish the job." Hearing Troy's name being mentioned, Arnold immediately protested, "Please, let me." Oh, seeing Arnold's determination, Jin could not help but glance at him. "What makes you think you can do it after failing already?" "Because Kevin was the one that prevented me from finishing the mission." I guess you are right." Patting Arnold on the shoulder, Jin gloomily said, "Make sure you make his life miserable." "Yes." Nodding solemnly, Arnold left the training room. Soon after Arnold left the room, Jin walked back to the punching machine, and punched it with all his might. A large shockwave swept the room, and fine granules of sand started falling from the sack as a tear appeared on it. "How dare you approach Melissa? You." "I thought I was lost. After switching buses 4 times, I finally arrived at the appointed location. A large fancy board with the words, Epsilon Cafe, imprinted on it immediately caught my attention. Entering the cafe, the heavy scent of coffee hit my nostrils. Wooden chairs and tables were spread all over the cafe. A relaxed and tranquil atmosphere enveloped the place, prompting me to relax along with the atmosphere. Looking around, I soon found Small Snake. Wearing a black baseball cap and a mask, Small Snake sat in the corner of the cafe. I was easily able to find him because he was wearing exactly what he used to wear whenever he would meet Kevin. Taking note of that, I went and ordered an iced latte. After paying and receiving my latte, I headed to where Small Snake was. We had agreed beforehand that we must both order a latte to ensure we identified the right person. Since our faces were covered, we had no idea what the other looked like, so this was the easiest method. Comfortably sitting on the green sofa in front of Small Snake, I placed my latte down and hung my arm on the side of the sofa. Seeing me sit down, Small Snake placed his drink down and looked at me strangely. Are you wearing a face mask? Nope. Hearing my straightforward response, Small Snake sighed and shook his head. Aren't you afraid I will rat you out and keep all the money you made? Nope. I have a good eye for people and my instincts are telling me that you are not a person who would rat me out for small gains. I was not lying when I said I had a good eye for people. Knowing my novel very well, I knew exactly what kind of person he was. It is just that he did not need to know this part. I would not really call those small gains, though. You are weird. Laughing lightly, Small Snake shook his head and slowly took off his hat and mask. If you are willing to trust me that much, I might as well reciprocate. Soon, his face was revealed. He had short black hair, deep green eyes, and a childish-looking face. However, despite his childish features, his demeanor was nothing but childish. He felt like someone who had gone through many ups and downs in his life, and someone who had survived many years in the most unimaginable places on earth. I am glad I have gained your trust, so what did you call me here for? Taking a sip of my latte, I went straight to the point. Looking around, Small Snake leaned forward and whispered, the third party is looking for my traces. The authorities? No, I have been very careful, and though the authorities are indeed trying to trace me, they are not doing it as aggressively as the other party. Leaning back on my sofa, I contemplated for a bit before saying, it should be WV Pharmaceuticals. I also thought the same, but I do not have concrete proof. No, it is them. What makes you so sure about that? Well, it is because they were the ones that ordered the death of Thobia's church. What? Abruptly standing up, Small Snake raised his voice and looked at me in disbelief. Oi, calm down. Seeing everyone staring in our direction, I lightly sighed and urged him to sit down. How do you know? If you want to know how I got the information, I am sorry, but that is confidential. Even if I wanted to tell him who told me, I could not. It is not like I could explain to him that he was merely a side character of a world that I had created. Lightly disappointed, Small Snake said, no, I get it, but is what you said real? 100%. Since I was the one who wrote about the event, I obviously knew who did it. WV, the second largest company, hired Silent Creeper to kill Thobia's church. The reason why he was able to kill him without any trace was because they had planted a mole inside of CB. They made use of the mole to help Silent Creeper kill Thobia's church. The reason why they got rid of him was obvious. They wanted to be the number one. Having been overshadowed ever since opening, the higher-ups had decided they had enough. Since they could not defeat them legally, they resorted to killing their best researcher. What are you planning on doing with this information? Nothing. Raising his voice, Small Snake looked at me as if he was looking at an idiot. I mean, who would not want to capitalize on this piece of news to make even more money? If I could prove that WV was behind Thobia's church's death, then the stock of WV would plummet. Moreover, with my newly acquired funds, the amount of money I would make would be frightening. First off, and more importantly, I do not have any proof. Even if I know that WV is behind it, I cannot do anything about it since I cannot prove my claim. That is true. Secondly, if we do release the news about what had happened, the pharmaceutical market will completely crash. This would result in prices for potions increasing drastically. Nodding, Small Snake thought for a bit and agreed with what I had said. Even if we did manage to release the news and prove that WV Pharmaceuticals were guilty, it would cause total chaos in the industry. This would result in prices for potions inflating drastically. Simply put, no one wanted that. I would gain nothing from it, and quite possibly, the thought of interacting with Melissa once again to renegotiate the prices of potions sent shivers down my spine. Okay, then I better leave now. Since I know who the party is, I no longer need to worry about being discovered. All right. Standing up, I took my half-empty latte and left the cafe with Small Snake. Soon, we split up. Checking my watch and seeing that I still had quite a bit of free time, I decided to roam around and see if there was anything that could catch my interest. Though the streets were not busy, I could see people going in and out of shops everywhere. There was a single road where cars passed, and on the right and left side of the road, shops filled the streets. Large billboards with beautiful ladies and handsome men could be seen everywhere as they each advertised different products. Perfume, toys, clothing, you name it, they had it all. Stopping, I looked at a large fluorescent sign, antique shop. Antique shop? I wonder if they have anything interesting here. Dling, dling. Opening the door, the bells lightly tolled. Instantly, a heavy scent of wood hit my nostrils, reminding me of my grandparents' house back in my previous world. It smelled funky. welcome. Greeting me was an old man with a large gray beard and a set of white hair. Nodding in his direction, I looked around. Instantly, my interest was piqued. Everything in here were things that I used to use back on Earth. Since this was the year 2055, everything was far more advanced than the things I was used to back on Earth. This meant that what I used to use was considered ancient in this day and age. In the corner of the room, I could see magazines and newspapers, consoles, and other things that I used to use. Seeing all of these things around the room caused me to feel a bit of nostalgia. Oh, as I was looking around, a certain item instantly caught my attention. Picking it up, a wide smile appeared on my face. Great choice. One of my personal favorites. Appearing behind me, the shop owner stroked his beard a couple of times as he looked at the item in my hand. How much is this? MHH, considering that the company that makes that device is no longer around, I would say 500 U. 500 U? Looking at the MP3 in my hand, a conflicted look appeared on my face. I mean, paying 500 U for an MP3 in this day and age was not something that any sane person would do, but I could not help but be tempted. This was especially so when I noticed that it came with its own wired earphones. You heard me right, wired earphones. Before I reincarnated, my world was already starting to transition from wired earphones to wireless earbuds. To be honest, I tried wireless earbuds before, but they were not my thing. As I loved listening to music to pass time, I bought myself some wireless earbuds in this world. It just was not the same. Alright, I will buy it. Great choice. Smiling from ear to ear, the shopkeeper immediately went to the register and swiped my card. Soon after the transaction ended, I left the shop. Opening my new MP3, I was surprised by the fact that it already had its own playlist on it. Scrolling through the numerous songs, I stopped on one and put on my earbuds. Seven Nation Army, by the White Stripes. Ignoring the weird stares coming in my direction, I happily went back to the academy, listening to my new MP3. Chapter 44. Inside a dark and damp room, a young individual kneeled on one leg on the floor. Matriarch, the preparations are complete, the bait has been thrown. Lifting his head up, a red throne met his sight. Besides the red throne, two large ferocious dog-like creatures sat on the ground. Their eyes were of a deep shade of red, and their teeth were extremely sharp, causing his blood to freeze. Sitting neatly on the red thorny throne was a gorgeous woman. She was wearing a gorgeous long red dress, whose hem was beautified with marvelous drawings and patterns. Her dress was a deep shade of red, and showed off her exquisite body. Her black hair gently fell all the way from her shoulders to her waist. Her red, succulent lips had a cold smile as she tapped the armchair of her throne. Good. Her enchanting voice that sounded crisp and pleasant traveled to the young individual's ears, causing him to fall into a slight daze. Looking at her, the young individual could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva as he tried his best to calm his raging heart. His eyesight slightly lingered on her gorgeous gown that emphasized her perfect figure. Her sexy figure was extremely charming, so much so that it could make any man's heart pound harder. Her bare feet, seemingly made of porcelain and flawless, further increased her sexiness. However, if not for the two black horns on her head, he would have mistaken her for a human. Realizing that he had been staring for too long, the young individual forcefully looked down on the ground as cold sweat dripped from his back. Though he could not deny that the figure before him was extremely enchanting, if by chance he got on the wrong side of her, death would be the best outcome. If it were not for that idiot Everblood, we would not have needed to push our plans this far ahead. Pouting slightly, the demoness calmly petted the two dogs before her. Soon silence enveloped the surroundings. Matriarch, when should we initiate the plan? Breaking the silence, the young youth spoke. Thinking for a bit, the matriarch looked at the boy before her before saying, "MHHH, let us take it slowly. Though Everblood failed, we still have some time. You should first try to capture our target." "As you wish, matriarch." Nodding his head, the young boy placed his left hand on his right pec and bowed. "Good boy." Smiling slightly, the matriarch looked at the young handsome boy before her. Elijah Turner was the name of the young boy before her. Though she was forced to make a pact with him due to certain circumstances, after having contracted with him for over a year, she had taken a liking to him. Though he was not very talented, he was very obedient, and she liked that a lot. Pausing slightly, the matriarch looked at the young boy as an overbearing pressure bore down on him, causing his legs to slightly falter. "Ah, but I do hope you will not fail me. We cannot have another setback interfering with our big plan." "You understood." Struggling to move or speak, it took the boy all his willpower to agree with the matriarch. Coo, what a cute little boy." Laughing lightly, the pressure soon disappeared, and the young boy was finally able to move freely. "Here," throwing a purple fruit at the boy who was panting heavily, the matriarch amusingly looked at him who was desperately reaching for the fruit. "Tea, thank you." Excitedly grabbing the fruit, the boy instantly devoured it. Afhaha. Soon black veins emerged all over his body as he squirmed on the ground. His muscles spasmed intensely and his nails grew longer, and then returned to normal. Demon fruit was the name of the fruit that Elijah had just consumed. Because he was not very talented, in order for him to not expose his identity, he had to consume the demon fruit. The demon fruit, previously known as the world fruit, was a fruit harvested from the world tree which used to belong to the elves. After having conquered the elves' home planet, the demons successfully managed to corrupt the world tree, turning it into the demon tree, which bore fruit to the demon fruits. Upon consumption, the demon fruit allowed lower-ranked demons' bloodlines to become pure. That alone went to show how important the fruit was for the demons. With it, the demon clans managed to drastically increase their strength. Another function that the demon fruit had was that it allowed contracted humans, villains, to have a boost in talent. Moreover, it also strengthened the bond between the parties. If someone like Elijah, whose talent was on the lower end of the spectrum, consumed the fruit, then his appearance not only improved, but also did not change like it was supposed to after having made the contract. Because of the high demand and limited supply, the demon fruit was extremely sought after by the demons. The fact that they were giving it to Elijah went to show how important his mission was. "All right, you may go. Thank you." Bowing once again, the young boy left the room. Soon after he left, a shadow materialized beside the matriarch. Because it was dark, its features were hidden, preventing anyone but the matriarch from seeing how it looked. "Are you sure it is okay to let him do the mission alone?" Smiling lightly, the matriarch looked at where the young boy was and said, "Well, if he is not capable of this much, he is better off dead. Though it would be a problem if he died after having invested so much in him." RIP. Opening the large box that had arrived early in the morning, I excitedly looked through the contents. As expected of Melissa, the box was filled with potions. Only 3 days had passed since I requested Melissa to make me the potions, and yet in that short amount of time, she managed to fulfill my request, and sent me all of the potions I commissioned her to make for me. Honestly, I was impressed. Though what was less impressive was the fact that I had to fork out a total of 6 million U just for the raw materials alone. But looking at the high-quality potions in the box, the pain I felt from spending so much money instantly disappeared. Soon, I started taking out all of the potions from the box. 16 mana recovery potions, 8 strength enhancement potions, 8 stamina recovery potions, 9. Counting all the potions to make sure nothing was missing, I organized the potions in different batches, each on the type of potions they were. Because they were all transparent and only had labels with Melissa's writing, if I did not sort them out, I could potentially consume the wrong one. Well, yes, I did in fact expect potions to have all different types of colors, but I was wrong. Reality was harsh and all potions looked like water. Moreover, they came inside of test tubes, and not some fancy flask like in games. Scam, I say. After sorting out the potions and making sure nothing was missing, I stood up and prepared to attend classes. Though I could not wait to try a potion right now, I could only hold my impulse back and go to class. When taking a potion, if one was not focusing enough, then they might hurt themselves. That is why it was better for me to consume them once I had time to spare. What am I missing? Looking around the room, I noticed my MP3 on my desk and immediately took it with me. These past few days I had cemented my position as the weirdo in the class. Not only did the way I trained look ridiculous to everyone in the class, including teachers, but I also had no friends. A month in, and everyone in the class had pretty much formed their own clique, or had at least one friend, yet I did not even have a person to talk to, let alone call an acquaintance. I was a total antisocial loner in the eyes of everyone in my class. To make matters worse, now that I was using an ancient-looking device accompanied by wired earphones, which had gone extinct since 3 decades ago, my position as the class weirdo became as stable as Mount Tai. Honestly, I was not too sure how to feel about this. To me, I looked absolutely normal, but well, I could not just go to them and tell them I reincarnated into a novel, and back in my previous world this was normal, could I? Sighing at my miserable life, I took the keys and made my way to the door. Click. Closing the door to my room, I put my earphones on and hurried my steps. I could not afford to be late, else I could kiss graduating goodbye. Today's class lecture had ended later than usual, and after being subjected to Donna's cold treatment, I was finally able to free myself from class. Though I could barely feel my legs, I still had to drag my body to my elective class. After the elective was over, I had to do my daily workout. Just thinking about that made me depressed. If I knew this would happen, I would have asked Melissa to make more stamina enhancement potions. My shoes had already started wearing out from how much I was overworking myself. In any case, I was currently heading to the elective club room. Perhaps because I tended to have bad luck when meeting the main characters, but Amanda was walking a few meters ahead of me. Being behind her, I could instantly catch a whiff of her rose-like scent. It was a bit of an awkward walk, as we were heading in the same direction, without speaking to each other. From another person's point of view, it would have looked like I was stalking her. I mean, she was stunning. Fortunately, we soon arrived inside the classroom, and sat in the same seats as we did in the previous class. By the time we arrived, Elijah Turner, the club president, was already standing on the podium going through some papers. Carefully flipping the pages, he seemed to be organizing today's lecture notes. Not long after, the room was filled to the brim as the rest of the students entered the class. However, contrary to the previous class where everyone sat wherever they wanted, today's class was separated into 3 different groups: first, second, and third years. It seems like the relationship between juniors and seniors was starting to get progressively sour with each passing day. I thought as I looked at how the first years were being avoided by the senior years. At 8 on the dot, Elijah began his lecture. "Good afternoon, everyone. It seems like a lot of you have." As he talked, most of the stuff coming from his mouth went into one ear and left from the other. I could not be bothered to pay attention to his idle chatter. Fortunately, I had learned my lesson and held my yawn back. though the fact that tears started streaming from my cheeks after 10 minutes did not help me hide the fact that I wanted to yawn. Today we will talk about the plant kingdom. As most of you know, once mana entered our planet, not only did we and beasts evolve, but plants did too. Essentially, all living beings on this planet started to evolve, though most plants have no sentience. Do not look down on plants, as some of them evolved into terrifying things that even SS-ranked heroes would want to avoid at all costs. For example, if we look at some of the most powerful plants out there, the tree ants, they had evolved from regular trees to a rank monsters that when in groups could cause trouble to some of the most experienced heroes out there. This goes to, though I knew most of the stuff, I still paid attention to it as it was not as detailed as the information that Elijah was teaching. Have you guys understood? Looking around the class, Elijah repeatedly asked questions to every student to make sure they were paying attention. Looking around and seeing that everyone nodded, Elijah smiled in satisfaction and said, "All right then. I guess it is time we call it quits for today." The lecture had lasted a total of 1 hour. Unexpectedly, there was a lot to learn, like the weakness of some plants, which areas to avoid, and the difference between physical plants and non-physical plants, for example, ones that attacked directly and the ones that used poison. I learned in detail about things I had neglected to explain in my novel. All the while I watched cute female students throwing flirtatious glances at Elijah. Rejoicing at the fact that I no longer had to listen to him, I prepared to leave the class, but before I could leave I heard his voice addressing the whole class. "If anyone is interested, since today is our first lecture, I will be hosting an after-party. It will be great if you can come." This was not in the novel. There was no such thing as an after-party in the novel at this point in time. Amanda is not rejecting it? Amanda, who was usually indifferent to everything, nodded at Elijah and verbally confirmed her participation. What is going on? Was she not supposed to be indifferent to everything? As I was looking at Amanda with a stupefied look, I did not notice that 2 eyes were sharply looking in my direction. By the time I noticed, I found Elijah standing 2 meters away from me, smiling. "Student, are you interested in joining us?" Sure. Great, we will be leaving in an hour, so make sure you go back to your dorm and get ready." Smiling, Elijah turned around and talked to the other students. To be honest, I agreed to join them on an impulse as I was starting to get worried for Amanda. A scenario that had never happened in the novel was starting right now. I have a feeling that as of today, my peaceful low-key life was going to take a turn for the worst. Chapter 45. After finishing her last class, food exploration, Amanda went back to her room. Along the way, people would try to strike a conversation with her, but she promptly ignored them. Arriving in her room, the first thing she did was sit on her sofa and pick up a book. Since she had about an hour to pass, she decided to do the only thing she could think of, which was to read a book. Only when reading a book did she feel a sense of belonging. Amanda's family circumstances were a bit special. Her father, Edward Stern, Guild Master of the Demon Hunter Guild, and hero rank 25, Frost of Remorse, was rarely home. Her real mother left when she was 5. She could not handle all the pressure that came from being the wife of such an important figure. The only memory Amanda had of her was her lonely silhouette walking down a long road as heavy rain poured from the sky. That was the day she left their home. Amanda wanted to reach out for her, but not once did the figure ever turn back to look at her. That memory was forever etched deep inside of the young Amanda. Because of that, ever since she was 5, she was raised by her father and her nanny. Due to the nature of her father's work, he would rarely be able to come back on time to spend time with her. Whenever he did have time, Amanda remembered him rubbing her head with his large warm hand. Too bad those moments only lasted a couple of seconds. In the end, the person that raised her was her nanny. She would often tell her stories and fairy tales of princesses getting kidnapped to later get saved by a charming white prince. She too wanted to be a princess. Back then, Amanda did not really understand what princesses went through when they got kidnapped. But later on in her life, she did. The first time she was kidnapped, she was 7 years old. At the time, she only remembered hearing voices. Her vision was obstructed. Tight rope tangled both her arms and legs. She was scared. A large gag was placed in her mouth, preventing her from screaming. Fortunately, her father came and saved her. Then it happened again, and again, and again. Slowly, Amanda found herself losing her emotions. Her natural childish smile disappeared the more she got kidnapped. She was slowly maturing. However, she was still able to smile when her nanny narrated fairy tales to her. Those were the only times she felt safe and at peace. Sucked into another world, almost as if escaping reality. That was until she was 11. That was the age at which her nanny passed away, ridding her of the last warmth in her heart. Since then, Amanda has never been able to smile. Even when kidnapped, she felt nothing. Everything around her became black and white. Slowly the expectations she had of the people around her vanished. "I won't get angry, I won't be sad, I won't expect anything from anyone," was what she repeatedly told herself as she shut herself in a box. It was from that point on that she decided not to form any relationships that were not necessary. Even if they had the best interest for her, even if they treated her well, her heart was unmovable. Closing down the book she was reading, Amanda stood up and looked at the reflection in the mirror. Her long black hair, which was no longer held by a pin, gently fell on her shoulders, reaching all the way to her waist. Her deep phoenix-like eyes had a cold indifference to them that made people feel like she was a holy existence that was unreachable for regular people. Her appearance was so exquisite that it could move anyone's heart regardless of their gender, but it also gave people a gloomy feeling. Placing her fingers on the edge of her lips, she lightly pulled the edges of her mouth in the form of a smile. Letting go, the edges of her mouth quickly reverted to their regular aloof position. She repeated this a couple more times, but no matter how much she tried, she could not smile. Walking towards her closet, Amanda took a beautiful black dress with finely decorated silver patterns. Although she usually disliked attending parties, Amanda chose to attend this one. That was because back in the first lecture she received a mysterious box from the club president, Elijah Turner. At first, she thought nothing of it as she was used to these kinds of things. Once she opened the box, she was shocked. Inside the box was a picture of her mom. She looked almost identical to her, and if not for the wrinkles at the edge of her eyes, people could have easily mistaken her for her sister. Though she barely had any memories of her mother, Amanda could not stop herself from wanting to know more about the whereabouts of her mother. She wanted to know why she had abandoned her and never visited in all the years since she had left. Since Elijah was the one that had provided her with the picture, Amanda had no choice but to look for him, and thus decided to attend the party. Wearing the beautiful dress and looking at herself in the mirror for a couple of seconds, Amanda took a small black purse and headed out. Click. Closing the door behind her, Amanda went towards the appointed location with a mind full of questions. Should I wear a suit or normal clothes? Right now I was torn on what to wear to the after party. As I never attended these kinds of events before, I was not too sure about what to wear. A suit or casual clothes? Ugh. Honestly, if it was not because this situation caught me off guard, I would not have chosen to attend this kind of event. After a while, I decided to do a bit of both. I wore a white iron t-shirt accompanied by blue jeans. Looking at myself in the mirror, I could not help but nod in satisfaction. After having transmigrated to this world for over a month, my originally skinny body had started to bulk up. Though my body was not sculpted like a god, I had a fairly good body. My short black hair, which was nicely styled, accompanied by the deep blue eyes, made me nod in satisfaction. I looked fairly handsome. After looking at myself a couple of more times, I looked at the time and found that I only had 10 minutes left before the meeting time. As I was rushing to the door, my footsteps halted and my eyesight landed in the corner of my room, where a black sword rested against the wall. After pondering for a bit, I took the black sword and placed it in my dimensional bracelet. I hope the situation does not get to the point where I have to use my sword. Though I said this, I already started preparing myself for the worst. The situation was already starting to get out of my control, and right now, for the first time, I was going into a situation without any knowledge of what was to come. Click. Taking my room keys and turning off the lights, I left my room. Cheers. Inside of a spacious, luxurious room, a flock of students could be seen drinking and laughing. The interior of the room was very well decorated with fancy paintings scattered all over the room. Large white sofas with fine golden patterns on the sides sat in the middle of the room. Large wooden tables that were filled with food and beverages stood in the corner of the room. The location we were currently at was a rather well-known restaurant called Ellie Ferret. It was a fairly luxurious restaurant with celebrities often showing up here. Due to its popularity, it was fairly obvious that this place was expensive, and somehow Elijah had managed to book a whole room just for the gathering. This pretty much impressed everyone that came, as their eyes were shining stars, especially the girls. Twirling the cup of wine in my hand, I lightly smelled the wine. It had a fruity yet overbearing smell that made my nose twitch a couple of times. Just how I like it. Though it may seem like this wine was one that I took from the table, in fact, it was not. The wine I was currently tasting was one that I brought with me. It is not that I disliked the wine here, but there was a high chance all the foods and drinks in the party were drugged beforehand. Though I was being somewhat paranoid, it was better to be safe than sorry. The reason why I was drinking it was so that I could blend with the crowd. If I did not drink it, in the event that there was an ambush, there was a high chance I would be among the first who were targeted. Taking a small sip of the wine, I smacked my lips a couple of times before looking at my surroundings. Though the atmosphere was calm and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, I could not help but feel tense. There was this ominous vibe shrouding the whole venue. Something was definitely going to happen today, and it was not going to be something good. In the middle of the hall, Elijah, who wore an elegant white suit, was currently being flooded by multiple girls at a time. They were pushing and shoving each other aside to get a chance to talk to him. Elijah, who was being surrounded and harassed by the girls, kept a gentle smile on his face throughout the whole time. Besides him, a couple of boys were looking at him with envious and jealous eyes. But that was in the minority, as most of the boys were busy admiring a different scene. Standing on the balcony, Amanda, who looked like a goddess that had just descended on the world, was currently looking at the moon with a glass of wine in her hand. The gentle moonlight enveloped her perfect figure, creating this sort of picture-like scene. A couple of boys tried approaching her, but once they noticed that they were being ignored, they could only helplessly go back to the party in defeat. Seeing this scene, my lips slightly curled, and I helplessly shook my head. Boys will be boys. Walking to the balcony, where Amanda was standing, I could hear faint whispers coming in my direction. Here goes the fifth one. How long will you give it? I say 5 seconds. No, I say 10. Since my stats had improved, so did my hearing. Listening to their whispers, my eyes could not help but roll. Just how much time did they have on their hands? Opening the door to the balcony, I slowly walked to the edge of the balcony and stood next to Amanda. Lifting my head up, I looked at the moon. Though I did not want to interact with her nor any of the main characters, I could not help but do so this time. If something were to happen to her, then chances were that the storyline was going to change, and all the advantages I had would simply crumble overnight. Simply put, I could not afford that. Thus, I decided to expose myself and warn her about the upcoming danger. Taking a sip of my wine, without glancing at Amanda, I lightly said, "You should be careful tonight." As if she did not hear me, Amanda kept staring at the moonlight. Seeing her react like that, I did not panic nor express my displeasure, as I already knew her character. Though she was pretending to be indifferent, she definitely heard me loud and clear. It is just that she did not show it on her face. Slightly smiling, I said one last thing before walking back to the party. "Something might happen tonight, and you might be the target." "No, you are most likely the target." Finally turning her head to the side, Amanda saw my figure leaving the balcony. Seeing my figure leave, her brows knit for a split second before relaxing. Soon after, almost as if nothing happened, she started looking at the moon again. Turning my head and seeing that, I lightly smiled before heading back to my previous spot. Though it seemed like she did not take my warning seriously, I in fact knew that she had upped her guard. Having been in these types of situations since a very young age, she knew that even if this was just a small prank, there was a chance that the warning was real. For her, even if it was a prank, it was better to be prepared than unprepared. In the off chance that what I had said turned out to be true, she could avoid being kidnapped again. Chapter 46. Clink, clink, clink. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" Tapping on the wine glass in his hands, Elijah gathered everyone's attention. Standing elegantly in the middle of the hall, Elijah made sure that everyone was looking at him before continuing. "First of all, I would like to thank all of you that decided to attend the gathering. Although our elective could be considered on the smaller side compared to other electives, we here are like a family." Making eye contact with everyone in the room, Elijah's mood turned a little bit serious as he spoke. "I have recently been made aware of the conflicts happening between the juniors and us seniors, and it honestly pains me to see this. I may not be able to change this, but I sincerely hope that in our elective this prejudice and conflict does not appear." Pausing slightly, and looking at everyone in the room, Elijah raised his glass and said, "This is more than just an elective. This is a family." At first, everyone was quiet, turning to look at each other. A myriad of expressions could be seen from certain individuals' faces. They wanted to rebuke, but they dared not to. With Elijah's current influence, his words were law. Refusing him was like signing a death warrant. Clap. Breaking the awkward and tense silence was the sound of a clap. Clap, clap, clap. Soon someone else started clapping, and like a chain reaction, everyone followed along and started clapping. "I understand. I will follow the president's order." "We love you, President." "I love you, President." Cheers resounded across the hall as both the male and female students cheered for Elijah. Smiling, Elijah took a big gulp of the wine, and once again lifted the cup in the air. "It is with great honor and pride that I welcome you to our elective, Food Exploration." "Thank you. Food Exploration. Best elective." Though everyone cheered, two individuals didn't. One retained an indifferent face throughout the whole ordeal, while the other cringed repeatedly. Of course, this didn't escape Elijah's eyes, as his eyes narrowed for a split second before returning back to normal as if nothing happened. Unbothered by the fact that Elijah probably noticed my behavior, I nonchalantly sat on a sofa and enjoyed my wine. The fact that he managed to say those words without cringing was worthy of my admiration. For all I knew, Elijah cared nothing for the conflicts within the academy. In fact, he was probably rejoicing at the fact that there were conflicts within the academy, most notably at the fact that some of the attention was diverted away from him, allowing him to act as he pleased. Looking at the glass of wine in my hand, I frowned. Though I usually disliked alcohol, due to previous trauma, it wasn't a problem anymore. Excluding the fact that the wine wasn't that strong, with my new physique only alcohol higher than 70% could affect me. Anything lower than that didn't bother me. Sort of ruined the pleasure of alcohol, but oh well. It's not like I needed alcohol in my life again. After nearly finishing half of the wine that I had brought with me, which I so conveniently hid inside of my bracelet, I felt my bladder bloating. Walking up to a waiter, I asked, "Excuse me, where is the bathroom?" Pointing towards the entrance of the room, the waiter said, "Turn right over there, and after you walk a couple of meters you should see a bathroom sign." "Thank you." Thanking the waiter and following his instruction, I headed to the bathroom. A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. Sitting on the sofa, Amanda was lost in her own thoughts. Occasionally she would glance to her right, where a male student sat. He looked completely out of place with his clothes that did not suit the atmosphere. He had short black hair and blue ocean-like eyes. His features that were devoid of any pimples or freckles looked clean and pleasant. Though he could have been considered handsome, he was only average if compared to the likes of Jin and Kevin. Looking at him, Amanda couldn't help but look at him in confusion. He was currently sitting on a sofa sipping on some wine, looking extremely bored. No one approached him, nor did he approach anyone, and he seemed to enjoy the solitude as he would occasionally mumble to himself. Was what he said true? The reason why Amanda was paying so much attention to him was because that very same student had approached her earlier. It was when she was on the balcony looking at the moon, lost in her own thoughts. It was odd. She had a vague recollection of him, as he was one of the more famous students in her class. Not in a good way though. The weirdo was what they called him. She wasn't sure about the details, but he was regarded by most of the students as a weirdo that they should avoid at all costs. Thinking about her interactions with him, Amanda couldn't agree more. He was a weirdo. Usually, the male students would come towards her and try all ways to get her attention. Yet, he only told her 2 things before leaving. What was even more confusing were the things that he said to her. You should be careful tonight. And something might happen tonight, and you might be the target. No, you're most likely the target. If this was a new trick to try to get her attention, he had succeeded. She didn't really put his warning to heart, but she definitely started paying more attention to her surroundings. Having been in these sorts of situations since young, her temperament became cautious. If anything remotely suspicious happened, she would immediately raise her guard to the maximum. Scanning the hall, everything seemed normal, and apart from a few people already getting drunk, there was nothing odd about the drunk. Weren't wines the only thing that were served here? How could people get drunk off of wine? Instantly, Amanda knew that something was wrong. Hiding her hand behind her back, she prepared to summon her bow in case something dangerous happened. Thud, thud, thud. One after another, students started falling on the ground. Amanda instinctively tried to summon her bow, but a wave of vertigo caused her to lose her bearing. Stumbling around, she tried her best to support herself against a pillar. Looking around, every student fell on the ground unconscious. Damn it. Gnashing her teeth, Amanda tried her best to combat the drug effects. Although the drug was strong, she still did not lose consciousness. It partly had to do with the fact that she was one of the strongest people in the room, and her strong mentality. But she didn't know how long she could remain conscious for. Time was ticking, and she could only try her best to not fall for whatever plot someone was brewing. Looking around, she tried to look for the boy that had warned her beforehand, but it was to no avail, as he was missing. Is he the mastermind behind this? Thought Amanda as she looked for any traces of him. It wasn't wrong of her to suspect him, as he just suddenly disappeared as soon as everyone started falling on the ground. To call this not suspicious would be a lie. Maybe he was the type of person that loved to tease his prey, but she quickly denied the possibility. Although he was weird, she could tell he wasn't the culprit. Although Amanda didn't like to talk much and always seemed to be absorbed in her books, she was always observing. It was something she developed over the years to get a better read on who had malicious intentions against her. Their posture, their expressions, their temperament, she could pretty much determine if someone had any ill will, or was wearing a mask to hide their true selves by observing those things. Although he was weird, she could tell at first glance he meant no harm. Cough, cough, Amanda. Coughing and stumbling on the ground, Elijah walked towards Amanda. Looking at Elijah, who seemed to be in distress, Amanda took a few steps back. Huff, huff, huff. Dropping on one knee, Elijah panted heavily. What's happening? Amanda, who although was also suffering, tried her best to restrain herself from helping Elijah. Her instincts told her not to, yet she couldn't help but take a step towards his direction. He was the only key she had to find her mother, and she needed closure. Although she was struggling, Amanda was slowly getting used to the effects of the drug. Soon her mind regained some clarity. Arriving a few meters before Elijah, Amanda extended her hand in his direction. Thank you. Reaching with his right hand, Elijah tried to grab Amanda's hand, but before he could fully touch her, she smacked his hand away. Smack. You. Shocked, Elijah looked at Amanda, who was glaring at him. What are you talking about? You think you can fool me when the entire time you had a smirk on your face? Taken aback, Elijah touched his face. Coo. Trembling, Elijah's smile deepened as he started laughing. How careless of me, I just couldn't contain my excitement. Standing up, Elijah exaggeratively facepalmed. Oh, I'm sorry, I just couldn't hold myself after imagining myself sharing some alone time with you, one of the 3 great beauties of the first years. Boom. Summoning her bow, Amanda instantly drew it. Oh my, aren't we a little too hasty? Raising his hands in surrender, Elijah smirked as he walked in Amanda's direction. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as Elijah took a step in her direction, without batting an eye, Amanda released 3 arrows in successions. Suddenly, 3 white streaks of light appeared before Elijah as the arrows whistled through the air. Thump, thump, thump. Oh wow, that's some great archery. Looking behind him, Elijah whistled in admiration as he looked at the 3 arrows that pierced the wall deeply. Too bad you missed. Looking at Amanda, who was on the floor panting heavily, Elijah had a delighted smile on his face. A couple of minutes wasn't enough to combat the drug that he had carefully prepared beforehand. Walking slowly, Elijah savored Amanda's struggling expression. Yes, this is what I wanted. Finally, the oh-so-indifferent Amanda has finally shown me a different expression. What have you done to me? Gritting her teeth, Amanda glared at Elijah, who was only a few steps away from her. Oh dear, don't show me such a face. Kneeling on one leg and holding Amanda by her chin, Elijah's expression twisted savagely. Now, we wouldn't want our dear Amanda showing such a face now, would we? Grabbing onto her face, Elijah looked at her features in admiration. If not for the strict orders I received from Mother Matriarch, I would have already devoured you. Mother Matriarch? Oops, it seems like I spoke too much. Lightly knocking on his head, Elijah had a silly expression on his face. Let's just say that you're going to be thanking me soon. Pu. Spitting on Elijah's face, Amanda defiantly looked at him. Fuck off. You. Trembling, Elijah touched his cheek where Amanda spat. Looking at his finger which was covered in saliva, Elijah's face twisted menacingly as his hand grabbed her neck. How dare you spit on my face? His strong voice reverberated across the hall as he tightened the grip around Amanda's neck. Unlike you, I wasn't born as beautiful as the rest. I was insulted, jeered at, and bullied for my appearance. This world's hierarchy is dictated by two things, beauty and talent. Unlike you who had both, I had none. I was bullied and harassed throughout my whole childhood. Even my parents forsook me for my younger siblings who had better appearances than me. Gripping on Amanda's neck tighter, Elijah pulled her face closer to his. Just when I was about to end my life, Mother Matriarch came and saved me. She gave me talent, power, and my current appearance. Glaring with all his might, Elijah's voice kept rising. If not for her I would be nothing. KHH. Lessening the grip on Amanda's neck, Elijah looked at her and said, "Thus, no matter how much you struggle, I will stop at nothing to complete her task." Sigh. Startling both Amanda and Elijah, a loud sigh resounded across the hall. Soon, a pale youth with deep blue eyes walked into the hall. His eyes slightly paused on Elijah before looking at Amanda, who was struggling with all her might. With an annoyed look, he scratched his head and said, "I warned you, didn't I?" Chapter 47. I warned you, didn't I? Honestly, though I expected something to happen, I didn't expect it to happen right after I returned from my toilet trip. It felt as if I missed out on all of the fun. "It's you." Releasing Amanda, Elijah stood up and looked at me, who had just come back from the bathroom. "Coo, huff, huff." Looking at Amanda, who was gripping her neck and heavily gulping for air, I pretty much got the gist of what was happening. The event had already started. Rank 1750, Ren Dover. Yes. Turning my attention back to Elijah, who had just called me, I instantly noticed his relaxed attitude. The way he was looking at me irked me, but I didn't say anything. Judging from the pressure he was releasing, he was at least D- rank, if not D rank. But fortunately for me, thanks to all the training I did, the pressure wasn't weighing down on me much. The fact that he was primarily focused on Amanda also helped me. Judging from how relaxed he seemed, it looked like he didn't see me as a threat. Perfect. Smirking to myself, I started to devise a plan. Well, since he was looking down on me, I may as well capitalize on his carelessness. You see, one of the greatest things about keeping a low profile was that no one knew what you were truly capable of. This especially worked in my favor, as the Keiki style was primarily a one-hit one-kill sword art. All I needed was one clean hit, and he was done for. The fact that I kept a low profile and chose not to expose my strength helped me buy an opening. In fact, even though I said all of this, I wasn't really confident, even if I caught him by surprise. Although there was a chance I could kill him if I was really lucky, those chances were slim. It just wasn't easy to bridge the gap between F and D ranks. Though I practiced a peerless 5-star manual technique, I would at most be able to graze him if I confronted him directly. He was just that much better than me. Each rank was fundamentally different from the other. Each rank increase was like an increase in strength by a factor greater than 2. Bridging one rank was already hard for me too, almost impossible. If not for his arrogance, those chances would have never been higher than 0. Knowing this, I had prepared beforehand. Having learned my lesson since the dungeon incident, I devised a little safe plan for me in case the situation turned serious. Before coming to the party, I messaged Thomas and asked him for a favor. Since I more or less knew something was going to happen at the party, I predicted that Elijah was going to install some sort of dimensional space, which prevented any outside interference. A dimensional space was a pocket dimension separate from the outside world. Everything that happened inside of the dimension was separate from the real world, preventing anyone from noticing that something was wrong. It created an illusion to people, making it seem that everything was normal, when in fact something else was going on inside. No sound or transmissions could be leaked, preventing people from calling for backup. It was the perfect device to hide a crime. Knowing this, when I messaged Thomas, I specifically told him that if by chance in the next 4 hours my phone suddenly lost signal, he was to send an encrypted message to Alexander Stern, Amanda's father, as well as the authorities. In the message, I directly wrote that a villain was attacking this specific location, and many students were in danger. I also emphasized that Amanda was one of the said students. Though the plan was not foolproof, because I had asked Thomas, who was a high-ranking member of the black market, to send the message, chances were that Alexander Stern and the authorities would receive it. Now all I had to do was stall for time. Looking around and seeing that everyone was on the floor passed out, I knew that I didn't have much time. Though this may have been a sleeping drug, it could have also been an extremely strong poison. Though I didn't know what was in their system, I knew it wasn't good for them. Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, I knew I had to do something. Looking at my skill bar, I instantly used my new and only skill, Monarch's Indifference. Soon, everything around me started to change. The hall, the people, the furniture, everything in my eyes slowly changed. Everything no longer looked like what it was before. Slowly, everything around me started resembling chess pieces. The hall turned into a 3-dimensional space with pawns all over the floor. My heartbeat, which was beating unevenly, calmed down. Following my heartbeat, my breathing became even, and I felt all my emotions leaving my body. I no longer cared for Amanda. I no longer cared for everyone in the hall. I no longer cared about Elijah. I only had one goal: move the chess pieces accordingly. What's happening? Wobbling around the hall, Ren's legs staggered. Leaning against the wall, Ren heavily panted for air. Here I was wondering why you weren't affected by the drug. Smirking, Elijah amusingly looked at Ren, who was staggering all over the place like a drunk person. It seems like you're somewhat immune to the drug. Pity that in the end, because you are so weak the drug still affected you. Looking at Elijah with wide eyes, Ren dumbly said, D-drug? Sorry, but I don't have much time to talk with someone as insignificant as you. Walking towards Ren's direction, Elijah's eyes were full of malice. You see, I have a bone to pick with you. Grabbing Ren by the hair, Elijah coldly looked at him. Multiple times in my class you repeatedly yawned and acted bored. Was it fun? Slap. Slapping Ren in the face until a red mark appeared, Elijah raised his hand again. Slap. Someone who is ranked 1750 should sit quietly and listen to the lecture obediently. Slap. Yet you actually dared to provoke me. Slap. Even now, just as I was about to have my fun with Amanda, you came in and ruined the mood. Slap. Blame your lack of tact for the fact that you will die after being tortured. Slapping Ren's face continuously, his pale face slowly turned purple as his lips started to become swollen. Staring at the scene in the distance, Amanda barely managed to sit up straight. Was he all talk? Though she knew he was ranked 1750, ever since he had warned her, Amanda thought that maybe he was hiding his strength. Moreover, the way he showed up looking all fine told her that he was hiding his strength. But it seems like it was all her misconception. Just as she was about to gather all her remaining energy to shoot Elijah, she felt two cold, emotionless eyes staring at her. Looking up, she could see Ren's eyes emotionlessly looking at her. Though he was being slapped continuously by Elijah, his eyes never wavered. They were the eyes of a predator that was looking for the right time to strike. Stopping whatever she was doing, Amanda looked back at him. How could he still be so calm? Though he was being tortured by Elijah, and his expression twisted in pain, his eyes which were devoid of any emotion were staring at her, almost as if telling her not yet. Staring into his eyes, Amanda clenched her teeth and quietly gathered all the mana in the surroundings. Though she didn't know what he was planning, she had this inexplicable feeling that only if she listened to him would she be able to get out of this predicament. Seeing that Amanda was slowly accumulating the mana into her bow, Ren smirked at Elijah, who was smacking him. Oh, you're being slapped senseless and yet you still have the guts to smile. Slap. As soon as the slap landed on Ren's face, his head twisted to the side due to the enormous force of the slap. Slap. Slapping the other side, Ren's face twisted to the other side, doing a complete 180. Since you asked for it, I will gladly pick up the pace. Slap. 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 For the next 5 minutes, the loud sounds of slaps reverberated across the hall. Soon, Elijah stopped as he looked down. Beneath him, Ren's battered face could be seen bleeding all over the floor. His face was so swollen that his eyes were barely visible. Let's end this. Seeing that Ren was no longer responsive, Elijah prepared to go for the kill. Though he was sure that no one was going to interfere for the next 2 hours, he still needed to finish the mission. Toying with the prey should come later. Raising his hand, his nails increased in length, becoming extremely sharp at the tips. Goodbye. Whoosh. Just as he was about to pierce Ren in the neck, he heard a whistling sound coming from behind him. Turning his head abruptly, he saw a large silver light quickly heading in his direction. It was so fast that the air around it split apart. Staring at the incoming arrow, Elijah's pupils dilated, and he gathered all of the mana he had and formed a translucent shield before him. This all happened in a matter of seconds. Boom! A large explosion reverberated across the hall as dust and debris swept the place. The windows around the hall completely shattered and cracks could vividly be seen around the walls of the hall. As soon as the dust cleared, the tattered figure of Elijah could be seen. His elegant figure from before was no longer seen, as his hair and clothes were a mess. Black veins slowly started appearing on his face, as they wiggled constantly. His muscles spasmed continuously and his body enlarged into a hideous-looking creature. Quaye! Hastily touching his face, Elijah screamed. His eyes, which were now a deep shade of red, stared at Amanda, who was helplessly lying down on the floor. How dare you! Screaming at the top of his lungs, Elijah moved towards Amanda. He was in a state of pure rage. Completely forgetting about his mission, he headed towards Amanda, preparing to kill her. However, before he could do that, his body stopped moving. No, it refused to move. Shuway. Spurt. Spitting a large amount of blood, Elijah looked below him where a black sword pierced his heart. It all happened so fast that he had no time to react. Turning around, he could see 2 emotionless eyes staring at him. He who should have been battered to the point of being unable to move was looking at him with eyes that seemed to look straight into his soul. YKHOU? Chow. Checkmate. Thud. Those were the last words Elijah heard before his body slumped on the ground lifeless. Gulp. Taking out a potion, Ren instantly drank it. Soon, at a speed visible to the naked eye, all the bruises on his face disappeared. Stabbing Elijah's corpse a couple of times, Ren slowly walked in Amanda's direction. Right now she was looking at Ren in shock. Though she didn't see clearly, she managed to see the moment when he pierced Elijah in the heart. Fast, too fast. All she saw was Elijah's eyes staring at the sword stabbed in his body in disbelief. Looking at Ren who was walking in her direction, Amanda instinctively moved back, but as soon as she tried to lift her body she fell to the ground. She had no more energy left. Soon, he was in front of her. His emotionless eyes looked down on her. She looked back, and the hall was soon enveloped in silence. Forget what you saw. Those were the last words she heard before she felt a tap on the back of her neck. Soon, darkness enveloped her mind as she passed out on the ground. After making sure Amanda was knocked unconscious, Ren took 4 arrows from her quiver and walked back to where Elijah's corpse was. Spurt, 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 spurt. Stabbing each arrow in his body, Ren made sure they each stabbed exactly where his sword had stabbed Elijah. After making sure there were no traces of what he had done left, Ren walked a bit further away from where Elijah's corpse was, fixed his clothes and hair, and forcefully knocked himself unconscious. Thud. As his eyes slowly lost consciousness and the effects of Monarch's indifference wore off, a small smile appeared on his face. Not bad. Chapter 48. Spurt. Matriarch. Splurting black blood on the ground inside a dim room, an enchanting figure clenched her heart. A black silhouette appeared next to the matriarch, who had just splurted black blood on the ground, and hastily helped her sit on her throne. Though her breath was weak, her presence remained majestic as the servant did not dare utter a single word. Gripping the armrest of her throne, the matriarch, whose figure was now incomparably pale, said he failed. Crack, crack. Tightening her grip on the armrest, cracks started appearing on the throne as a red glow started emanating from the matriarch's figure. Fortunately, because he was much weaker than me, his death has only cost me a small internal injury. Hearing what the matriarch had said, the servant worriedly asked, "How long do you need to recuperate?" "I should be healed in about a year's time." Turning her head to the servant that was next to her, she coldly ordered, "Get someone to send me all of the information regarding the incident that Elijah was responsible for." "Yes, Mother Matriarch." Nodding his head, the servant disappeared into the darkness. As soon as he disappeared, the red hue around the matriarch increased many folds, enveloping the whole room. "Once I find out who was responsible for killing my pawn." Boom. The throne behind the matriarch suddenly pulverized as she stood up. With a distorted face and eyes that were dyed red in rage, she slowly spat. "I will personally make sure they suffer a pain worse than death." Amanda's consciousness was awakened by a dazzling light coming through her eyelids, stimulating her pupils. Waking up in a large, spacious room, Amanda blankly stared at the familiar ceiling she had been seeing for the past month. Lightly lifting her head, Amanda stared at her room. The room was large, and besides her, there was a massive bookshelf filled to the brim with books. A large desk stood in the right corner of the room. On it, a white desk lamp sat on the right corner of the desk with books neatly piled around it. The room had a nice woody, tranquil feeling around it that could calm anyone who was in it. The sunlight directly entered the room from the large windows around the room, brightening the surroundings. Before entering the academy, because of her outstanding results, she was asked by the academy how she wanted to design the room, and this was the outcome. The tranquility and silence in the room calmed her mind. Ugh. Touching her head, she felt a strong headache whenever she tried remembering what had happened the night prior. It felt as if her head was being split into two. The last thing she remembered was seeing two emotionless eyes staring at her. Recalling the young man that was responsible for killing Elijah, Amanda's head was filled with questions. Although she had never paid much attention to him, she still did observe him from time to time like all of her classmates. In fact, because he tended to do weird things, she more or less had an impression of him. In both elective and class, he looked like someone who was sloppy. He cared for no one around him, and always seemed to be bored in class. Especially in the elective where he would forcefully try to pay attention to the lecture, though it always ended with him making strange faces. However, after the happenings of the party, her previous impression of him had completely shattered. Recalling his two eyes devoid of emotions that perfectly calculated the exact time to strike, Amanda felt a cold chill run down her spine. Even though she was indifferent to most things, she couldn't help but want to find out more about him. In one moment he was a sloppy, good-for-nothing weirdo, and in another, a calculating, cold-blooded killer. What was his true personality? Bam! Snapping Amanda out of her thoughts was the sound of the door opening as two stunning girls accompanied by two extremely handsome boys entered the room. Rushing next to Amanda, Emma worriedly looked at her as she patted her body all over to make sure she was okay. "Amanda, I saw on the news about what had happened. Are you okay?" Nodding her head slightly, she looked at the four individuals that had entered her room: Jin, Kevin, Melissa, and Emma. Though she didn't show it on her face, seeing that they had come to visit her, Amanda felt a little warmth in her heart. Interrupting Emma, who was all over Amanda, Kevin spoke. "I was extremely surprised when I received the news of what had happened. How did you manage to defeat a D-rank villain?" Don't tell me you forgot. Here, take a look." Seeing the confused look on Amanda's face, Emma took her phone out from her pocket. She then proceeded to turn on the holographic function and swiped towards Amanda. Soon a virtual newspaper article appeared before her. At 10:22 p.m. in Ashton City, a D-rank villain who had infiltrated Top Human Academy Lock attempted to kill more than 50 students. An anonymous tip had alerted the authorities beforehand about the sudden attack, and upon arrival, the corpse of the D-rank villain was found. The corpse of the villain had multiple arrow wounds all over its body. Upon investigation, all drinks and foods present in the venue had been drugged beforehand by a potent drug containing a strong sleeping agent. Currently, the venue owners of Ellie Ferret are under arrest on the suspicion of collusion with villains. Fortunately, thanks to the courageous efforts of one individual, this disaster was prevented. If not for the heroic feats of top student Amanda Stern, this day would have turned into a tragic massacre. The motive behind the attack is still unknown. Looking through the article, Amanda slowly and carefully read the article from top to bottom, not skipping a single detail. Was it his doing? She knew for a fact that she wasn't the person responsible for Elijah's death. Yet from what she was reading in the article, it seemed like she was the one who had killed him. The fact that she was passed out with her bow in her hand, coupled with the multiple arrows that belonged to her which were found on Elijah's body, made everyone assume that she was the one responsible for killing him. Only she knew the truth. She had only shot one arrow that night, and all it did was leave superficial wounds. It didn't injure him at all. The real killer was not her, it was him. Though at that moment her head was dizzy, she remembered the moment when Elijah was killed. It was one swift sword movement so fast that Elijah, a D-rank villain, had no time to react. What was even more impressive was the fact that he had done this, exactly when Elijah's guard was at its lowest. Almost as if he knew this was going to happen. Had he failed, only death would have been his outcome. Cold, precise, cunning. Many words came into her mind as she tried to describe him the best way she could. Hey, Amanda. Snapping Amanda out of her thoughts was Emma's concerned voice. Sorry. Lowering her head, Amanda apologized. She was so lost in her own thoughts that she had ignored everyone that had come into the room. It's fine, you must still be in shock. Shaking her head, Emma patted Amanda on her shoulder as she gestured for the other guys in the room to leave. We'll let you have some rest. Call us if you need anything. Winking at Amanda, Emma quickly brought everyone out of the room. Clank. Closing the room's door, silence permeated the room once again, leaving a stunning young girl alone in her thoughts. You think she's okay? Standing outside Amanda's room, Emma looked at the 4 people beside her. Thinking for a bit, Kevin said, honestly I can't tell. Her face is always indifferent so I'm not too sure. True. Nodding her head, Emma couldn't help but agree with Kevin's evaluation. Despite the fact that Amanda had just gone through a traumatic experience, her expression never changed. She remained indifferent. Even for her, who was extremely outgoing, talking to Amanda was difficult. She never knew what she was thinking. Did she even think of them as friends? Seeing everyone's somber expression, Kevin tried lightening up the mood by changing the topic. But hey, I didn't expect her to be strong enough to defeat a D-rank villain by herself. Yeah, you're right. Who would have thought she was that strong? What do you think, Melissa? Realizing what Kevin was trying to do, Emma redirected the conversation to Melissa. Melissa, who was unamusingly scrolling through some research papers, noticed that Emma was talking to her and unenthusiastically said, I guess it's pretty impressive. Noticing how uninterested Melissa was, Emma pouted and said, geez, can you at least look a little bit more interested? No chance. Despite having known Amanda, and the rest for a month and a half, to call them close would be a lie. Because she spent most of her time in the lab doing research, she barely had enough time to get to know them better. Not that she was interested in knowing them. To Melissa, anything that wasn't related to her research didn't really mean anything to her. Though to outsiders, it looked like they all got along well with each other. The only reason why they talked to each other in the first place was because they were living under the same roof and would make good connections for the future. Since they were all going to be future pillars of humanity, it wasn't a bad idea to make a connection with them. Moreover, for some reason, people always tended to avoid them. Jealousy, fear, worship. No one knew why they avoided them, but that only made their social circle smaller. Seeing how uninterested Melissa was, Emma sighed and looked at Jin. Behind Melissa, Jin stood there dumbly. His expression was that of pure indifference. He looked to be deep into his own world, ignoring everyone around him. Well, I'm gonna head back now. Seeing that this conversation was going nowhere, Emma gave up and decided to leave. Following her, Kevin and Melissa left, leaving Jin standing there by himself. A couple of minutes after everyone left, clenching his fist extremely hard, veins appeared on Jin's forehead. Though he tried extremely hard to suppress his rage, Jin's face became incomparably dark. Right now his mind was torn. Not only Kevin was stronger than him, but Amanda too? No matter how many times he tried to visualize it in his mind, killing a D-ranked villain was impossible for the current him. Though people assumed that he was ranked 3rd because of his status and talent, no one knew how much he worked for his rank. He had come to the lock thinking that he was going to be the highest ranking first year, yet when the results came out he was ranked 3rd. Moreover, the gap between him and the first place, Kevin, was absurdly high. His failure to come first was also emphasized by his family, who had high hopes for him. He was in total shock. He understood Melissa. Her academic achievement was so absurdly high that it managed to propel her to 2nd place. He was fine with that, but Kevin? Someone that no one knew about prior to entering the lock. It was a heavy blow to his immense pride. The pride of having grown up thinking that he was the best among the younger generation. Despite his failure, Jin did not let rage cloud his mind. Though he disliked Kevin, he looked at him more like an obstacle to surpass rather than an enemy. To try and bridge the gap between himself and Kevin, Jin trained 3 times harder than he had done previously, and just when he had thought he managed to bridge the gap between them, Amanda killed a D-ranked villain. This news came as a shock for him, and even now that a day had passed, he still couldn't stop thinking about it. Because Amanda's father was the guild master of the 1st-ranking guild in the world, Demon Hunter, and his father was the greatest shareholder of the 2nd-ranked guild, Starlight Guild, he had known Amanda since young. Since birth, because of the rivalry between the two guilds, he had been continuously compared to her. He took great pride in the fact that he had gotten a higher rank than her when he enrolled in the lock. His father also took great pride in that as he praised him endlessly, further feeding his ego. He had managed to suppress the Demon Hunter Guild rising momentum. Yet this sense of accomplishment all seemed to be a lie. The more he stayed here, the more he realized how normal he was. He had been showered with praises since young. He became arrogant, but he managed to back his arrogance. He was the best. Was he? What am I? Staring at the long dark corridor, Jin was lost in his own thoughts. A seed of inferiority slowly started implanting itself inside of his mind. Chapter 49. A couple of days had passed since the party, but news of what had transpired during the party spread throughout the whole academy like wildfire. It was to the point that pretty much everyone knew what had happened. Currently, I was laying on my bed, staring at the white ceiling of my room, lost in my own thoughts. I thought that since I did not directly participate in the main plot line of the story, that the future would not change. I thought I had full control of my memories, so I decided to take advantage of them and help myself to some of the benefits whilst also trying to not affect the plot line. But I was wrong. No matter how small the change was, once it began, there was no stopping it. It suddenly hit me. One little change could cause massive changes to the whole story. It was like a domino chain. Regardless of how small the force was, once the first domino fell, like a chain reaction, all the dominoes fell apart. I was naive. No, I was arrogant. Because of my arrogance, the plotline started changing in a way that I was losing control of the advantage that I had as the author. The event between Elijah and Amanda should have never happened this early in the novel. Somehow my actions had affected the novel. Despite me repeating to myself that everything was going to be fine, I was simply lying to myself. I could not deny something that happened right before my eyes. I could not deny that my existence itself had changed the plotline. I fundamentally needed to change the way I was thinking. But how? Do I actively interact with the protagonists, or keep myself in the shadows as I did before? I was lost. Ring. Snapping me from my thoughts was the sound of my cell phone ringing. Turning it on, I looked at the notification that showed up. Amanda Stern single-handedly defeats D-rank villain that had infiltrated the academy and posed as Elijah Turner. It seems like the news was already starting to spread outside of the academy. During these past few days, Amanda managed to cement herself as one of the foremost geniuses in our generation. Ice Queen, Bow Goddess, Villain Killer, all sorts of nicknames started circulating around the academy as everyone started paying attention to her. The reason for such attention was because she single-handedly defeated a D-rank villain, despite only being in the early stages of E rank. A genius amongst geniuses. After the incident, she was now being compared to the likes of Kevin in terms of raw talent. Turning off my phone, I gave myself a pat on the back. It seems like I managed to cover my traces quite well as nothing was mentioned regarding me. It also seems that Thomas covered for me, preventing anyone from finding out that I was responsible for tipping them about the incident. Looks like I owe him one. Fortunately, apart from the small loophole, with the facts pointing towards Amanda, my daily life returned to what it was before. Well, that was how it was supposed to be like, but after changing and heading to my classroom, I noticed two eyes deeply staring at me from the left side of the classroom. Awkwardly smiling, I lightly waved in Amanda's direction. I was hoping she would take the hint and leave me alone, but it seemed that my action only further increased the intensity of her stare. Does she perhaps have a grudge against me for putting her in the spotlight? I thought as I tried my best to look at the front, ignoring her piercing stare. It was plausible. Because of my action, the whole world was now paying attention to her. If something like this happened to me, I too would have held a grudge against myself. Sometimes fame was more of a curse than a blessing. Or did she perhaps misunderstand something regarding my strength? Now that I thought about it, she probably thought that I was someone who was hiding his strength. She was not wrong about that, but looking back at the event, she probably has a misconception about the true extent of my abilities. Though I did in fact kill a D-rank villain, many factors had come to play in me defeating him. If she had not distracted him with her last-ditch attack, and if Elijah did not underestimate me, added with me having Monarch's indifference, I would have never been able to kill Elijah. Me killing Elijah was something that many factors combined together helped me achieve. It was not something I could ever hope to achieve again. But there were no what-ifs in this world, and thus I was now stuck with Amanda thinking I was some sort of genius that was comparable to the likes of Kevin. This was honestly problematic. As I was lamenting at how Amanda probably misunderstood me, Melissa, who was sitting 3 rows behind Amanda, noticed her weird behavior, and looked in the direction she was looking at. Soon her eyes paused on me. Raising her brow, Melissa rubbed her eyes a couple of times before making sure that Amanda was indeed looking at me. At first, she clicked her tongue, then suddenly a smirk appeared on her face. I instantly felt an ominous premonition. Just now, she did her signature smile. The smile signaled that she was onto something. Can I start crying already? This was why I did not want to interact with her. Not only was she a sadistic girl who took pleasure in others' suffering, but she was the type to repay grudges many times fold. On the bright side, no one noticed the interaction that had just occurred. Emma and Kevin were currently busy talking with Miss Donna, and Jin was at the front of the classroom, unusually quiet. If the fact that the class loner suddenly interacted with the 2 most beautiful girls in the academy was to spread, I could already start planning my funeral. The sheer amount of admirers those 2 have could probably fill 25 football fields. It was that ridiculous. Okay, class is starting. Please be seated, everyone. Looking at the clock and seeing that it was time for class to start, Donna dismissed everyone that was in the front of the class and headed for the podium. Quiet, please. Gesturing for the class to quiet down, Donna lightly raised her palm. Soon everyone stopped talking. Seeing how everyone shut up as soon as Donna spoke, I could not help but admire her even more. The degree of control she had over the class was quite impressive. With just a few words and gestures, she managed to shut the whole class up. It may have something to do with the art she practices, but her natural charisma was not to be dismissed either. She just had this charm around her that made any man or woman follow whatever she said. Today we will select the groups you will be split into during our trip to Hallberg. Oh crap, I forgot this was happening. I was too caught up with the Amanda thing that I had completely forgotten we had a class trip in about a week's time. I honestly did not want to go. Please come to the front of the class and collect your ticket. Not caring about my predicament, Donna took a large box and put it in front of the podium. I will call your name one by one in ascending order. Taking out her register, Donna continued. You are to take one ticket, and that will be your group for the week that you will be in Hallberg. Now let us start. Rank 1, Kevin Voss. Hearing his name being called, Kevin stood up and headed to where Donna was. Here? Yes, take a ticket and go back to your seat. Listening to Donna, Kevin reached his hand into the box and took a ticket. Instantly everyone's attention was drawn towards him. They were all curious about his group number. Being the number 1 ranked in the whole year, if anyone was paired up with him they were guaranteed results. This was shown multiple times in things such as in the virtual class and other group activities, as he got the first rank in every one of those activities. Seeing everyone's reaction, I scoffed at them. Do you think that by freeloading on Kevin you will get a good grade? I hate to break it to you, but this time you will come back disappointed, as an incident will prevent him from completing whatever he was supposed to do in Hallberg. Looking at his number, Kevin remained silent for a second before going back to his seat. To everyone's disappointment, he did not show what group number he got. Well, that rule did not apply to me, who knew exactly what he got. His group was group 7, and if I am not wrong, Melissa would end up being in the same group as him. Next, Melissa Hall. Standing up, Melissa walked to the podium and took a ticket. Briefly glancing at the ticket, Melissa walked back to her seat. The stares were just as intense as when Kevin had come up. This time it was not because of her ability, but more because of how beautiful she was. Next, Jen Horton. Next, Ren Dover. Finally, after who knows how long, my turn had finally come. Since everyone had gotten their ticket, most people ignored me. No one really cared about me, so I did not feel any eyes on me. This is what I wanted to say, but I found 2 sets of eyes focusing on me. Trying my best to ignore them, my mouth and brows twitched a couple of times. Without even glancing at me, Donna coldly said to take my ticket and leave. Trying to hide my bitterness at Donna's overly harsh tone, I reached out into the box and took a ticket. As soon as my hand was inside of the box, I secretly channeled some of my mana into it. Though Melissa tried to hide it well, the small spell she cast inside of the box did not escape my eyes. Taking out a ticket, I headed back to my seat. As I was walking up, I noticed Melissa's face crumbling. It looked as if she had eaten crap. It felt great. Secretly winking at her, I sat back in my seat and proceeded to ignore her. He, you think I would not know what you were up to? Please, I am your creator. Do you think I would not know about your petty tricks? As soon as I saw her smirk, I knew she was up to something. Thinking back to my novel, I pretty much deduced what she was trying to do and broke the spell she placed inside of the box. She was probably trying to manipulate the tickets so that I would end up in a crappy group. Most probably, she was trying to group me with Amanda. Since she noticed how Amanda was behaving, she must have thought she had a grudge against me or something, which was not wrong. Too bad for her. I already knew what she was trying to do and stopped whatever spell she placed inside of the box. Clap. Clapping once to gather everyone's attention, Donna said to leave the class. Just as everyone was about to stand up to leave the class, Donna smacked her palm with her fist. One more thing. Taking a ticket out of the box, she flipped the ticket backward and said that behind the ticket, there is a room number and a list of things to bring and do during the trip. Please go to the room after you leave the class and discuss with your groups which task you will do. Listening to her and flipping over my ticket, I looked through the contents. Group 9, Group Room A, B, 15. The assigned tasks included an in-depth report on how monster parts are processed in a factory, specifically detailing how monsters are skinned, processed, and turned into raw materials for artifact creation. We also needed an in-depth report on the different properties of monster parts, from density to breaking point and elasticity. Finally, there was an interview with the vice director of the factory to report on their economic strategy and what sets them apart from other monster processing plants. This was part of the reason why I did not want to go. The sheer amount of boring tasks we needed to do made me depressed. It just wasn't something I was looking forward to. All right, class dismissed. Finished with what she wanted to say, Donna packed her stuff and left the classroom. Sighing, I stood up and went to the room I was supposed to go to meet my group. I hope I get a decent group. Though it was only a pipe dream, a man could still hope, right? Chapter 50. Inside a small classroom that was about the size of a bedroom, 2 individuals sat facing each other. Of the 2 individuals, one was a female, while the other was a male. The male had his head held down and was fearfully looking at the female, who was looking at him with her legs and arms crossed. Her face was incomparably dark. It looked as if they were in a murder trial, with the male student being the one under trial. Breaking the silence was the female, whose voice sounded extremely dark. Ren Dover. It has been a while, Melissa. Yes, the boy who was currently being persecuted was in fact me. Sitting down in front of Melissa, I tried my best to avoid her eyes. Right now her face was smiling but her eyes were not. I had a feeling that she wanted nothing more but to eat me alive. Why was she in a bad mood? Looking at my number and Melissa's number, a few tears streamed down my cheeks. Group 9. My plan backfired badly. Would you believe me if I told you it was an accident? Accident? Pray do tell me what might you be referring to. I do recall seeing an insect winking at me during our class, or did I see wrong? Please someone save me. Nervously looking around the room, my eyes paused on a black concoction in the middle of the table. Out of desperation, I tried to change the topic. This is. Expecting my question, Melissa dazzlingly smiled and said, new potion I have been experimenting with. Just for you, free of charge. Squinting my eyes, I moved my chair back and warily asked, what does it do? Covering her mouth with her hand, Melissa lightly laughed and said, nothing much apart from making you throw up dozens of times over, and making you feel like you had just been through hell. What makes this potion even more special is that if you are lucky enough there is a chance you can throw up your own intestine, killing you instantly. Can I pass? It honestly scared me how she managed to say all of this with a straight face. Bam! Just as I was despairing at my situation, opening the door, 3 young prideful individuals entered the room. Looking around the room, they soon noticed Melissa, who was sitting in front of me. Instantly their arrogance deflated a notch. Hello there, Melissa Hall. Walking in front of Melissa, what seemed to be the leader of the trio elegantly bowed in front of her. His facial features, which were devoid of any imperfections accompanied by his sharp eyes and brows, made him look suave and elegant. He had short black hair and green eyes that resembled finely polished jades. Though he was not extremely handsome, his looks were enough to make any girl swoon. It is an honor to meet Melissa Hall, one of the most beautiful women in our academy, and pioneer in the scientific field. Pausing and fixing his uniform he said, my name is Donald Burson. Who? Another extra who thought they were the shit. Honestly, if the guy could read Melissa's mind at the moment he would have probably made a run for it. Smiling, Melissa glanced at the young individual before her and said, you must be rank 167 Donald Burson, whose father is a rank hero of the Starlight Guild. As soon as Melissa finished speaking, Donald straightened his back with pride. Looking at me he smirked. What did I do? Do I even know you? Is he that proud that Melissa knew who he was? Ignoring Donald's subtle action against me, Melissa smiled and politely said, how can I help you? To me it just looked like she was saying, be quick and fuck off. I do not have time to deal with you scrubs, but maybe I was just too biased. Let me introduce the rest of the people before I continue. Stepping to the side, Donald presented one of the other group members. This is rank 298, Evan Smoke. Standing behind Donald, a rather chubby individual with ginger hair and freckles all over his face appeared. With his hands behind his back, Evan haughtily looked around the room. His demeanor reminded me of one of those villainous nobles you would find in novels. Smiling amiably, Evan lightly bowed in front of Melissa. Nice to meet you, Melissa Hall. I have heard of your outstanding achievements since I was very young. I had been eagerly awaiting the day where we would meet, and upon seeing you I can say with confidence that there is no other woman out there that can confidently claim to be more beautiful than you. Talk about excessive flattery. Unlike Donald, I actually knew who he was. He was no one important per se, he was another extra. But this time, I actually knew him because I actually remembered writing about him. He appeared on the trip and arrogantly confronted Kevin only to be instantly shut down. True extra. After Evan finished his introductions, Donald turned to the remaining student. And this is rank 475, Cassandra Lee. Standing next to Evan, a rather skinny young female, with a buzz cut presented herself. With her hands in her blazer pockets, and whilst chewing gum she looked at Melissa with interest. She had 2 piercings on her right lip and nose, and her lips which were black, accompanied by her eyes which were filled with eyeshadow reminded me of someone who was in their emo phase. She had black metal bracelets on her arm and her uniform was unkempt. Smiling lightly she looked at Melissa and said, pleasure to meet you. Greeting everyone, Melissa turned her attention back to Donald. Nice to meet you, so what do you want? Nothing much, we are in the same group so I wanted to introduce myself and my companions to you who is going to be part of our team. Since we still have about a week before going on the trip I thought it would be a great idea to form a good bond while we are at it, ha ha ha. Laughing lightly, Donald, Evan, and Cassandra eagerly looked at Melissa. Sigh. How more obvious can you be? If you wanted to hang out with Melissa you could have just said so from the beginning. Why go through all of this nonsense? Noticing my reaction, Donald stopped laughing and gloomily said, what is so funny? Rolling my eyes at his immature display I said, there is a week left before the trip, and you are planning on making friends, rather than just allocating our tasks. Annoyed by my rebuttal, Donald finally acknowledged my presence as he asked, who are you? Rank 1750 Ren Dover. Instantly the whole room was filled with laughter and ridicule. Ha ha ha. Rank 1750, and you dare talk to me like that. Ho ho ho, to think that someone who is ranked so low exists. I bet in terms of spouting crap his rank is around the top 3 in the whole year, no the academy. Rolling my eyes at them I said, to think there was not only one delusional person here, but 3. How disappointing. Donald and the other two's faces instantly crumbled. After a brief pause and processing what I had just said, Donald shouted, what? Summoning his spear from his dimensional space, Donald grabbed it and pointed its sharp tip at me. A blue glow appeared around his body. Shut that flimsy mouth of yours before I cut your tongue off with my superior skills and talent that a nobody like you can ever hope to have. Seeing him taking out his spear, summoning my sword from my bracelet, I grabbed it and a white glow started appearing around my body as I spat back, no, you shut your mouth. How more obvious can you be that you are a third-rate villain with your third-rate quotes? Hatefully glaring at me and gritting his teeth, Donald pretended to hit me with his spear, but I did not even flinch. Grr. Seeing that his feint was seen through, Donald clenched his teeth even harder. Seeing his reaction, I triumphantly smirked at him and raised my middle finger. Wanna bet that I do not even need to lift my finger before I can decapitate that useless head of yours. You bastard. Finally snapping after hearing my comment, Donald prepared to stab me for real. But before he could do that, he heard an annoyed sigh coming from behind him. Sigh. Is it fun to waste time like this? Sitting on the table, Melissa covered her face with her hands. Melissa? Stopping, Donald and the rest looked at Melissa, who seemed to be in an extremely bad mood. Why are you all acting like children? But he started it? Snapping at him, Melissa looked at Donald in utter disgust. What? Are you some kind of child? He started this, he started that? Do you know how many fucks I give about that? Raising her hand, she did an O sign with her fingers and said, absolutely zero. Being berated by Melissa, the rest lowered their heads in shame. If it was anyone else they would have probably have fought back, but since it was Melissa they could only suck it up. Every time someone tried to talk they would immediately be glared at by Melissa, shutting them up instantly. Clicking her tongue, Melissa continued, stop flapping those useless mouths of yours and do the work. We were asked to talk about our work. I had come with the expectations that the people in my group would be regular humans, but it seems like I was paired up with a bunch of useless chickens and buffoons that can only dance around wildly yapping their mouths nonstop. Frankly, shut up. Your mere existence is annoying me. Raising her hand to stop them from talking, Melissa glared at them and said, do not want to hear it. If you want to do me a favor, just stop breathing. You will be plenty useful then. Hee hee. Seeing the trio's deflated looks I could not help but laugh lightly. Karma got them good. And you, why are you smiling? Yes, you are the most useless of the lot, and yet you dare enjoy this like it is some sort of show? But, shut up and follow their example and stop breathing. Shutting up, I dared not to utter a single word. I was pretty sure she realized I was making fun of them from the beginning, and thus why she was glaring at me the hardest. Turning my head right, the first thing that caught my sight was the trio smirking in my direction, seemingly enjoying my predicament. Squinting my eyes at them, I made a mental note to myself. It seems like 3 more names will be added to my long list of people who I should beat up. Just you wait. I will definitely turn those smiles upside down. Sigh, alright, let us get this over with. Seeing that everyone had started to become more obedient, Melissa sat back on her seat, crossed her legs, and looked through the tasks which we were supposed to do. It had to be noted that she was the only one sitting, as the rest of us were still standing with our back straight, not daring to utter a single word. You will be responsible for the first task. Pointing at Cassandra and Evan, Melissa apathetically spoke as she allocated their task, not caring for their opinion. You will be responsible for the second task, whilst I will do the third task alone. Looking to my left, my eyes met Donald's. Our eyes both screamed hell no, but we just pretended to smile at each other in a friendly manner. The groups were Cassandra and Evan for task 1, me and Donald for task 2, and Melissa for task 3. I wanted to rebuke so badly, but I did not dare to. I am sure Donald shared the same sentiment as me, but we were both too scared of Melissa to dare speak out our thoughts. Alright, I have wasted enough time babysitting the lot of you. I am heading back now, I have better things to do. Throwing the group ticket away, Melissa stood up and left the room. Right after her, everyone else left the room, me included. Staring at the now darkening sky, I let out an exhausted sigh. This was going to be a long trip. To be continued. Hope you liked today's video. Join the community by subscribing and dropping a like. I'll be back with another update as soon as possible. See you then.